see the results of his trust. His team rose to the challenge. They worked together, thinking through the problem from every angle, and in time, they found the solution. It wasn't quick, and it wasn't easy, but they did it. The relief was palpable when the issue was finally resolved. The project would not be delayed, and the Falcon Heavy mission could proceed as planned. But for Elon, the real breakthrough wasn't the technical solution. It was the internal shift that had taken place. He had surrendered. He had trusted, not just in his team, but in something greater than himself. As the project continued to move forward, Elon found himself reflecting on the lessons of the past few weeks. The feeling of powerlessness had been terrifying, but it had also been transformative. It had forced him to confront the limits of his own strength and control, and it had opened him up to the possibility of faith. He wasn't sure if he was ready to fully embrace everything that faith had to offer. He wasn't sure if he believed in everything that Pastor Mike had spoken about. But what he did know was this: surrendering control, trusting, and letting go of the need to always be in charge had brought him a peace he hadn't known before. It was a small step, but it was a step towards something bigger. It was a step toward a deeper understanding of himself, of the world around him, and maybe, just maybe, of a God he had never fully understood. And that, in itself, felt like a miracle. Elon sat in his office that evening, watching the sunset over the SpaceX launch site. The world still felt as unpredictable as ever, and he knew there were more challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to face them. Not with the certainty of a man who had all the answers, but with the quiet strength of a man who had learned to trust. Trust in his team, trust in the process, and most of all, trust in something greater than himself. Elon's life continued its precarious balance between the worlds of cutting-edge technology and the mysterious realms of faith. Since his breakthrough moment of surrender, he had slowly come to understand that the weight of control he had carried for years was not a burden he needed to bear alone. It had been an uncomfortable and humbling realization, but it had also been liberating. As the weeks went by, his work at SpaceX and Tesla seemed to be on an even keel again. The Falcon Heavy project had resumed its trajectory toward success, with the delays now a distant memory. Elon's team had solved the issue through a combination of their own ingenuity and, in part, his newfound approach of letting go and trusting in them. His confidence had returned, but it wasn't the same arrogance that had once driven him to micromanage every detail. This time, it was a more tempered, grounded confidence, born from the knowledge that he was not the only one responsible for success. Yet, even with his projects on track, Elon found himself increasingly drawn to something intangible. The pull of faith was growing stronger. His weekly visits to Grace Church had become more than a curiosity. They had become a necessity. The sermons, the quiet moments of reflection, the sense of community. Each week, it all seemed to resonate a little more. One Sunday morning, as Elon sat quietly in the back of the church, listening to Pastor Mike speak about the power of forgiveness, something shifted within him. Pastor Mike's words felt like they were speaking directly to him. He had heard them many times before, but today they hit harder than ever. Forgiveness, Pastor Mike was saying, isn't just for those who hurt us. It's also for ourselves. We need to forgive ourselves for the things we hold on to, the mistakes we regret, the guilt we carry. Only then can we truly experience peace. Elon's thoughts wandered as he reflected on his past, his childhood, his early days in Silicon Valley, the countless people he had worked with and sometimes alienated, the mistakes he had made. He had always been hard on himself. The relentless pursuit of perfection in his work had often meant he sacrificed relationships, personal happiness, and even his own well-being. Was there something he needed to forgive himself for? Was he holding on to guilt or resentment that was keeping him from moving forward? He didn't have the answers, but the question lingered in his mind. After the service, Elon decided to speak with Pastor Mike again. It had become a habit now. Those quiet moments after the sermon where he could talk about his doubts, his struggles, and his growing understanding of faith. Pastor Mike, Elon began. I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness. You spoke today about forgiving ourselves. I'm not sure I understand what that means. I've always pushed myself to be better, to do more. But sometimes I wonder if I'm just running from things I can't fix. It felt like the whole room Pastor Mike looked at him thoughtfully. Was this real? Elon, was this a dream? Sometimes we are our own harshest critics. Elon, we think that by never allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, by never forgiving ourselves for our mistakes, we can somehow avoid making them again. But in reality, it's the opposite. When we can forgive ourselves, we free ourselves from the burden of perfection. We allow ourselves to be human. Elon sat back, considering the words. The idea of forgiveness had always seemed simple to him, even when something that applied to others. But forgiving himself, that was a different story. But he had always expected more of himself. His mind was elsewhere, always pushing for greater achievements. And yet, when he looked at his past, he saw moments of failure, mistakes that haunted him, relationships that had fallen apart. I don't know if I can forgive myself for all the times I failed, Elon said, his voice tinged with frustration. It feels like I've let people down. My family, my friends, my team. How can I forgive myself when I've made so many mistakes? Pastor Mike leaned forward, his voice soft. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending the mistakes didn't exist. It's about acknowledging them, learning from them, and letting go of the guilt that holds you back. You're not perfect, Elon. None of us are, but that's okay. The key is to recognize that even in your imperfection, God still loves you, and that love is enough to heal even the deepest wounds. By the time he graduated high school, Elon's mind was racing. Love. It was a word he had heard many times before, but for some reason, hearing it now felt different. It wasn't the love he had pursued in his relationships or the love he had for his work. It was a love that transcended all of that. A love that was unconditional. A love that didn't depend on his achievements or his success. Do you think I can actually let go of all this? Elon asked quietly. All the guilt, all the pressure I put on myself. Pastor Mike smiled gently. I think that's exactly what you need to do. Not just for the people you've hurt, but for yourself. When you forgive yourself, you give yourself permission to live in peace, to move forward without the weight of the past holding you back. It wasn't the grades that afternoon, as Elon walked out of the church, he felt a strange sense of lightness. The conversation with Pastor Mike had opened a door he hadn't known was there. For years, he had carried his past failures like a heavy backpack, believing that if he just kept pushing forward, he could outrun them. But now, there was a possibility of letting go, of freeing himself from the burden of guilt and regret. Over the next few days, he found himself reflecting more and more on the idea of forgiveness. It wasn't an easy process. There were times when his mind would return to the mistakes he had made, the people he had hurt, and the ways in which he had let his ambition overshadow other aspects of his life. But each time, he reminded himself of what he had learned. Forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past. It was about giving himself the grace to move forward. One evening, after a long day at Tesla, Elon found himself in his office, staring out the window at the city below. The world he had built, his companies, his innovations, his legacy, seemed so distant now. He had always measured his success by the tangible outcomes of his work, but now, for the first time, he began to measure it differently. Success wasn't just about launching rockets or creating electric cars. It was about finding peace within himself, letting go of the mistakes that had haunted him for so long, and allowing himself to be human. As he sat there, the thought came to him, what if the greatest breakthrough of all wasn't something he could build in a lab or design in a conference room? What if the greatest breakthrough was finding peace in his own heart? That night, as Elon lay in bed, he prayed for the first time in years. He didn't know exactly what to say or how to form the words, but he knew that he needed to ask for forgiveness, not just from others, but from himself. And in that moment, he felt a weight lift, a small but significant shift within him. For the first time in a long time, Elon Musk felt a deep sense of peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from accomplishing a goal or winning a victory. It was a peace that came from surrender, a peace that came from accepting his imperfections and trusting that, despite everything, he was still worthy of love and grace. And that, he realized, was the greatest miracle of all. Elon had always been a man of action, someone who thrived on moving quickly, making decisions, and pushing boundaries. In front of Elon Musk, he wasn't used to sitting still, letting things unfold in their own time. Yet,
one moment,
in the weeks
he was
following
lost
his
in his
decision
misery.
to forgive
A
himself,
nobody in the
something
middle
had
of a
changed.
crowd of powerful
He felt a
people.
sense of clarity,
The next,
but it
he was
wasn't the
being
kind of
helped to his
clarity
feet
that came
by
from
none
solving
other than the
problems
man who had
or
changed
achieving
the
new
world.
feats.
Elon
It was a
Musk.
deeper,
It was
more
the kind of
reflective
moment
understanding
people
of
dream
his
about,
own life.
or rather,
At work,
the kind of
things
moment
were
you
going
hear about in
smoothly.
motivational
Tesla had
speeches
made
and read
significant
about in
strides
books.
with the
But
rollout
Jake
of their
didn't
new
feel
electric vehicle
inspired.
model,
He
and
didn't feel like he
SpaceX
was
was
about to get
preparing
a
for a
second chance
groundbreaking launch.
or a redemption
The
arc.
companies were
What he
growing,
felt was
the
something
technology
more
was
subtle,
evolving,
a sense
and
of
Elon was
disbelief
still at the
that
helm,
hovered like a
guiding it
cloud
all.
over his
But
mind.
as the days
It was
passed,
like he was
there was
still
something else
outside
he couldn't
himself,
ignore.
watching the
A
scene
pull
unfold
towards
as if
something
it was
he
happening
hadn't
to
fully
someone else.
embraced before.
Why me?
Faith.
Jake
The
asked
decision to
himself,
explore
almost
faith
in a
had
whisper,
started as a
as
curiosity,
Elon helped him
a
to the
simple
side,
desire to
away from the
understand a
cameras.
deeper meaning to his
The
life.
answer didn't come
But
to him
now,
right away.
it had become
In
more
fact,
than that.
it was only
It was
after the
beginning to
event
feel like a
ended,
calling,
and Jake was
one
left
that he
alone
couldn't
in the quiet
ignore.
corner of the
He had
room,
begun reading
nursing
more
a bottle of
spiritual
water
books,
that Elon
attending
had
church
brought
with
him.
a sense of
But the weight of the
anticipation,
moment began
and
to sink
engaging in deeper
This wasn't some
conversations
random
with Pastor
occurrence.
Mike.
This
But
wasn't
there was
just some
still so
fluke.
much he didn't
Jake
understand,
knew that something had shifted,
and that, in
something
itself,
huge.
was both
But what was
frustrating
it?
and
What was
exhilarating.
Elon Musk
One
seeing
evening,
in him that
Elon
made him
sat in
decide
his
to
living
offer a
room.
hand when
The
no one
soft
else
hum of
had?
the city
Jake had
outside
no
his window
answers,
barely
just
audible.
a gnawing
He
feeling
had just
deep in
finished
his
another
gut that this
chapter in
could
the
be
book
his
The Case
chance
for
to turn
Christ,
things around.
but his mind was
Maybe it
buzzing
wasn't
with
too late.
questions.
Maybe
The book
he
had
didn't
helped
have
him
to be a
understand the
failure
historical
forever. As
context
he
of
looked
Jesus,
at Elon,
the evidence
sitting
for his
across from
existence,
him,
and the
Jake
many
felt something
arguments
stir
for
within
and
him,
against
a
Christianity.
spark of
But
hope,
what about the
a
most
hope he
important
hadn't felt in
question?
years.
What did all
He
this
didn't know
mean
what
for
would
him?
come next.
His thoughts
But for
were
the first
interrupted
time
by
in
a
a long
knock at the
time,
door.
he was
It was
willing to
Kimball,
find out.
his brother,
And that's
who
when
had become
Elon
a
spoke
quiet
again,
but constant
breaking the
presence in his
silence
journey
that had
toward
settled
faith.
between them.
Kimball had been the
"I've
one
been
to
where you
encourage
are,
him to
Jake,"
visit the church in
Elon
Las
said
Vegas in the
quietly,
first
his
place.
eyes locking
And
with
since
Jake's.
then, he had
"Not
often reached
exactly,
out to discuss
but I
Elon's
understand what it's
progress,
like to be
or
on the
lack
edge,
thereof.
to feel
He
like
was,
you've
in
lost
many
everything."
ways, a
Jake
bridge
didn't know how to
between
respond.
Elon's life of
There was
science
so
and
much he wanted to
technology
say,
and the faith
but
that was
the words
beginning to
wouldn't
capture
come.
Elon's
"I don't know what
attention.
you've been through,"
"Hey,
Elon
big brother,"
continued,
Kimball
his
greeted
voice
with a
calm
grin,
but intense.
stepping inside.
"But I'm willing to help
"How's
you.
it going?
I think you have
Still
something
reading
in
that
you.
book?"
A spark.
Elon smiled,
Maybe you just
setting
need
the
someone
book
to
down.
believe in you."
"Yeah,
Jake's
still
heart
trying to
raced.
wrap my head
This
around
couldn't
it.
be real.
There's so much
Could it?
here.
Elon
But
Musk was
I don't
offering
know.
him a chance.
It's hard to make
a
sense
chance
of
to
all of
start
it."
over.
Kimball
A
sat
chance
down
to
across
prove
from
that he
him.
still
"I
had
get
what
it.
it took to succeed.
It's not an easy
But
thing to
how could
understand.
he ever be
But
worthy
that's
of such
okay.
an offer?
You don't need
Hit
all the
subscribe
answers
and
right
leave
now.
a comment with where
Faith
you're
isn't
watching
something that
from.
can be
The
fully
voiceover
explained.
interrupted.
It's
But
something
Jake
you
wasn't
live,
paying attention.
something you
All he could
experience.
hear was the pulse
Elon
of his
looked at
own
his brother,
thoughts,
unsure
racing
of
ahead,
how to respond.
wondering if this
"I'm
was
not sure
really
I
happening.
understand what you mean.
Don't overthink it.
I've always
Elon
believed in
said,
progress,
sensing
in
Jake's
facts
hesitation.
and evidence.
Let's start with
But
something
faith,
small.
it's different.
Work with me for
It's
a while.
hard to grasp
We'll
something
see where
I
it
can't
goes."
see or measure.
Jake took a deep
Kimball
breath.
nodded thoughtfully.
His whole life
"Yeah,
had led him
I
to
know.
this moment.
It's tough,
Maybe this was his
especially for
chance to
someone
start
like you,
over.
who's
Maybe it was
always
time to
relied on
finally
logic
stop
and
running.
reason.
Jake
But faith
Bennett had
isn't
always
about
thought
seeing
that life
everything
would give him a
clearly.
chance to
It's
bounce
about
back.
trusting,
It's what
even when you
everyone
don't
told
have
him.
all the answers.
After all,
It's
the
about
hard work,
believing in
the
something beyond
persistence,
what you can
the fighting
prove.
spirit.
Elon
But
felt
after
a
years of
stirring in his
setbacks,
chest,
it had
a
become
mixture
hard to
of
believe in
excitement
anything
and
anymore.
apprehension.
And
This
yet,
was a conversation
he
he had been
sitting in a
avoiding
quiet,
when he wasn't
private
sure
meeting
he was
room
ready
at
to
Tesla's
have.
headquarters
But
with
deep
Elon
down,
Musk himself.
he knew it was the
Everything
next
felt
step in his
surreal.
journey.
The world
"I'm not sure
outside
if
the
I can
room was
just
a
believe
blur,
in something
a
because it
cacophony
feels
of
right,"
voices and
Elon
flashing
admitted,
cameras.
his voice
But in
quiet.
here,
"I've spent
time
my
seemed
whole
to
life
slow
building
down.
things that are
Elon
based
sat
on
across from
science
him,
and logic.
his hands
How do I
steepled
reconcile
thoughtfully
that
in
with
front of
faith?"
him, as if
Kimball leaned
contemplating a
forward,
major
his
decision.
eyes focused.
"I'm not saying
"It's
going
not
to be
about ignoring
easy,"
science
Elon
or
finally
logic.
said,
It's about
breaking the
understanding
silence.
that there's
"But
more
I
to
think you
life
have the
than what we
potential.
can measure.
There's
The
something
best
about
engineers
you,
and
about the way
scientists
you
I know
think,
also
the way
have
you
faith, Elon. They don't see it as a contradiction. They see it as a way to understand the world more fully.
For the first time
Sometimes,
in a long while,
science and faith complement
not
each
as a
other.
homeless man,
They both point
not
to
as a
something
failure,
bigger than ourselves.
but as someone with potential.
Elon was silent
Yet,
for a moment,
there was still a
processing
part of him
the
that
words.
couldn't shake the
But what if
nagging
I'm just
feeling
not
that
cut
this
out
might
for
just
this?
be some elaborate
What if I'm
joke
not meant
or
to
a
believe in
publicity
God
stunt?
the way others do?
After all, why would
Kimball
someone
smiled
like Elon
gently.
Musk,
It's
the
not about
billionaire
being
innovator
cut
who
out
had
for
the
it.
world at his
It's about
feet,
being open.
waste time on
The
someone
journey
like
of
him?
faith
I'm
isn't about
serious,
reaching a
Jake.
destination.
Elon continued,
It's about taking
his
that
voice
first step,
unwavering.
then another,
I see a
and
lot of
another.
myself in
You don't have to
I
have
wasn't
everything
always
figured
this.
out.
He
You just have
paused
to be
and
willing
waved
to
his
try.
hand in the air,
Elon sat
gesturing
back,
toward
his
his
mind
wealth and
swirling.
fame.
The idea of
Elon
faith as a
Musk,
journey,
I've
not
had
a
my fair share
destination,
of failures.
was a concept
I
he had
started with
never
nothing,
considered before.
just like you.
In his world
Jake
of rockets
nodded,
and electric
his heart
cars,
pounding.
everything had
The weight
always
of
been about
Elon's
the end
words
goal,
pressed
the
down on him
launch,
like a
the
blanket of
breakthrough, the
uncertainty
success.
and hope all
But
at
what if
once.
faith wasn't about
Okay,
arriving at a
Jake
definitive
said,
answer?
his voice barely
What if it was
audible,
more like
but
the
determined.
process of innovation
I'll try.
itself,
Elon
filled with
smiled
uncertainty,
slightly.
testing,
but we'll
and
need to put
discovery.
you through some
I've been so
tests
focused on the
first."
destination,
Jake's eyes
Elon
narrowed.
said softly.
"Tests?"
On achieving
"Yeah,
things,
tests,"
on building
Elon
things.
replied. His
But what
tone
if,
light but
what if
firm.
the real
"You've been
journey
through
is
a
in the
lot,
process itself?
but I need to know what you're made
Kimball
of."
grinned.
"I'm not here
Exactly.
to coddle you.
Faith
I
is
need
about
to
the
see
process.
if you've got the drive.
It's about
the
allowing
grit.
yourself to
If
be
you do,
open to the
we'll
unknown.
move forward.
To trust
If
that
not,
even when you
we'll
don't
part
have all
ways.
the answers,
No harm done."
there's a bigger
Jake
picture.
felt his
And
stomach
sometimes
This
it's in
wasn't
that
just an
uncertainty
offer.
where you
It was a
find the
challenge,
greatest truths.
one that could either
For the
propel
first
him
time in
back
a
into
while,
the world he
Elon
left
felt a
behind,
sense of
or
calm
crush
wash
him
over him.
completely.
His path
"Sounds
was still
fair,"
unclear,
Jake muttered,
but the idea
trying
that
to
faith
mask
could
the
be a
tension
journey,
rising in his
one
chest.
filled with questions
Deep
and
down,
discovery,
though,
resonated
he couldn't
deeply
help
with
but
him.
feel a spark
It wasn't
of
about
excitement.
having all the
For the
answers
first
or
time
being
in a long
perfect.
time,
It was
he
about
wasn't just
allowing
a victim
himself
of
to
his
step into the
circumstances.
unknown,
He
to
had a
trust in
chance.
something
As the
greater than
meeting
himself.
came to a close,
As Kimball stood
Elon
to
shook
leave,
his hand
he placed a
firmly.
hand on
"We'll start
Elon's
tomorrow.
shoulder.
I'll have
Take your
someone
time
reach
with
out
this,
to you with
brother.
the details.
Don't rush it.
I want to see if
You're
you
on
can
the right
handle the
path."
pressure." "You
Elon
ready for
nodded,
that?"
watching
Jake
as his brother
hesitated,
left the room.
then nodded.
There was still
"Yeah,
so much
I'm ready."
uncertainty ahead.
Jake's
So
first
many
task was
questions yet to
simple,
be answered.
or so it
But
seemed
for
at
the first time in a long
Elon
time,
had asked him to
he
spend
felt
the
at
day
peace with
shadowing
not
one of
having all
Tesla's
the
senior
answers.
engineers.
The next
A
day,
no-nonsense
Elon
woman
sat
named
down
Amelia.
at his desk
She
and
was
opened
sharp,
his Bible
efficient,
again,
and
this
didn't have
time with a
time
new
for
sense
anyone
of
who wasn't
curiosity.
willing to work
He
hard.
didn't know where this
Amelia
journey
didn't
would
waste
lead,
any time,
or what he would
the moment
find
Jake
along the
stepped
way.
into the
But he
workshop,
was no
she
longer
handed him
afraid
a
of the
wrench
unknown.
and pointed to
And
an
for the
electric
first
vehicle
time,
engine.
he felt a
Its parts
flicker of
scattered
excitement
around
for the
like a
path
jigsaw
ahead.
puzzle.
A path
"Put it
that,
together,"
like all
she
great
said,
endeavors,
without looking up.
was filled with
Jake's
both
mind raced.
uncertainty and
He knew
possibility.
cars.
The
He had
following
tinkered with
Sunday,
electronics
as he
back
sat in
college,
church,
but
Elon
this
felt different.
This was a whole
The
different
words
beast.
Pastor Mike
A
spoke
million
felt more
thoughts
personal,
collided in his
as
head.
if they were meant
Could
for
he
him.
do this?
And when the
Could he
congregation
really be
stood
the
for the
person
final
Elon
hymn,
thought he was?
Elon joined them.
The clock
He
ticked
didn't
on.
know if he
As
truly
Jake
believed in
fumbled with the
everything
parts,
yet,
trying
but
to
he knew
follow
that
the
for the first
instructions
time,
Amelia had
he was
given
willing
him.
to take the
He
next
felt the
step,
pressure building
whatever it might
inside
be.
him.
In
He
that
couldn't
moment,
afford to mess up.
surrounded by the
He needed
voices of the
this.
church,
He needed to
Elon
prove to
felt a
Elon,
quiet sense
no,
of peace.
to himself,
The road ahead
that he
was
still
still
had what it
unclear,
took.
but he was
But with
no longer
every turn
walking
of
it
the
alone.
wrench,
And
with
that, for
every
now,
mistake he
was
made,
enough.
the
It had
doubts
been
began
months
to
since
creep in.
Elon's moment
Amelia
of surrender,
didn't offer
and while
any
his life
encouragement.
continued to
She
move
didn't
forward
offer
with the
anything
same
at
rapid
all,
pace,
except a
there
look
was
of
an
impatience
undeniable
every
shift
time he
inside him.
fumbled with a
His
piece.
interest in
Jake's
faith,
hands shook.
which had started
He
out
had
of
to focus,
curiosity
but
and a
all he could
desire
think
for
about was his
answers,
past
had
failures.
evolved into something
The time when he
far
was
more
too slow
profound.
to finish a
Every
project,
week, his
too
visits to
careless
Grace
to save
Church
his
became
startup,
more
too
meaningful,
weak to keep
and the
his
more
life on
time
track.
he spent reflecting
Every
on
mistake
faith and
felt like a slap to
spirituality,
the face.
the more he found
Are you
himself
going to get this
integrating
done?
them into his
Or
daily
what?
life. His
Amelia's
brother
voice
Kimball had
broke
been
through
right.
his thoughts.
Faith wasn't
Sharp
about
and
having all
cold.
the answers.
Jake wiped
It was
sweat
about
from his
trusting in the
brow.
process,
I'm trying.
taking one step
Trying
at a
isn't
time.
good enough.
And though Elon
Trying
still
is
had
what losers
questions,
do.
doubts,
Her
and
words
moments of
stung,
confusion,
but they also
there
lit
was
a
something
fire within him.
undeniably
He
comforting
couldn't
about
back
simply
down.
trusting.
He wouldn't back
Trusting
down.
in the journey,
But as the hours
trusting
passed,
in the people
his
around
progress
him,
was minimal.
and most
The parts
importantly,
just wouldn't fit
trusting in
together the way
God.
they should.
His relationship with his team at SpaceX had also
and the
shifted.
rising frustration
He was no
like
longer
a
the
weight
tyrant,
pressing down
the
on him.
relentless
Was he
perfectionist
really cut
who
out for
demanded
this?
everything
Was
of
this even
himself
possible?
and others.
Finally,
Instead,
as the sun
Elon
began
was
to
learning
set,
to delegate
Elon
with more
walked into the
confidence,
room.
to trust in the
stood at the door,
capabilities of his
observing
engineers,
Jake's
and to
progress.
communicate with
His
them in
face
ways
was
that
unreadable,
fostered
but
collaboration
Jake
rather
could
than
feel the
control.
weight of his gaze,
There was still the
judging,
same intensity in his
measuring.
work,
How's
but
it
now
going?
it was tempered by
Elon
a quiet
asked,
confidence,
his tone
a
casual
trust in
but
the
laced with
process,
expectation.
and in the people
Jake
working
wiped his
beside
hands
him.
on his pants.
Elon had
feeling
always
both
been the kind of
defeated and
person who
desperate.
sought to make the
I'm
impossible
possible.
struggling. From the beginning
Elon
of his
walked over,
career,
taking
he had
a
been
closer
driven
look
by
at
the
the
idea
engine.
of
He didn't
creating
speak at
revolutionary
first,
technologies
simply
that could
observing
change
Jake's
the world.
mistakes,
But
his
now,
failure to put
as
it
his
all
journey
together.
of faith
You're
deepened,
overthinking
he
it,
began to see
Elon
things
finally
differently.
said,
Perhaps
breaking
it wasn't
silence.
just about
You've
achieving
got
the
the knowledge,
impossible.
Jake.
It was
You
about
just need to
seeking
trust
meaning
yourself.
in everything he
The
did,
trick isn't to
about
follow the
using his
plan
influence
blindly.
to build a
It's about
future not understanding of innovation, but of purpose, love, and hope. Jake looked up one Tuesday evening, after a long day at SpaceX. Elon found himself once again sitting in the quiet of his office. He had been thinking a lot about his journey lately, particularly about the people he had met along the way.
Others keep going.
He had always prided himself on his independence.
You've been through a
his
lot.
ability to think
This
for
is just
himself
the beginning.
and solve problems
With that,
alone.
Elon
But
turned
recently,
and left
he
the
had come
room,
to realize
leaving
just
Jake
how
to
much he had
ponder his
learned from
words.
others, especially from his brother, Kimball,
but
and
it was
Pastor
the
Mike.
answer he needed.
As he stared
As
out
the
the
night
window
wore
at the
on,
stars,
Jake
Elon's
continued to
thoughts
struggle
turned to the
with the
incredible
engine.
work
But now
SpaceX was
something
doing.
inside him was
The advances
shifting.
in space
He
travel,
wasn't just doing
the
this for
exploration
Elon.
of Mars,
He wasn't
the
doing
potential
this
for
for anyone
humanity's
but
future
himself.
among the stars.
If he wanted a
There was
second
still
chance,
so much to be
if he
done.
wanted to prove
But
that
now,
he could rise
for
above
the
his
first
past,
time in his life,
it had to start
Elon
here.
wondered
The
if there was
pressure was
something
on,
even
and the
greater than
stakes were higher
technology.
than ever.
What if his
Would
work
Jake
wasn't
be able
just
to
about
push through the
conquering
doubt
space?
and finish
What
what
if
he
it
had
was
started?
about helping
Or would this
humanity
be
find
another
a higher
chapter in his
purpose,
long
a
history
deeper
of
connection to
failures?
something greater
The next
than
few
themselves?
days would answer that
His
question.
phone buzzed on the
But for the
desk,
first time
snapping
in
him
years,
out of his
Jake
reverie.
was ready to
It
fight
was a
for his
message from
future.
Kimball.
He wasn't
Are
going
you
to
coming
let
to
this
church
slip
tomorrow?
through his fingers.
Pastor Mike
He
is
wasn't going
speaking
to
on
let
the
himself
power of
fail
service.
again.
I think
Jake
it's
woke up
something
the
you
next
might want to
morning
hear.
feeling a mix
Elon
of dread
smiled
and
at the message.
determination.
It
He
had
hadn't
become a
slept
bit of a
well.
tradition
His
between
mind
them,
kept replaying
Kimball
the
encouraging
events of
him to
yesterday.
attend,
The
and Elon going
frustration
to
in
listen,
Amelia's eyes,
even if he
the
wasn't
weight
always
of
sure what
Elon's
to
words,
expect.
and the
But
constant
lately,
battle
he had
inside
found
his
that
own head.
every sermon
Was he
seemed to
really
speak
cut out
directly
for
to
this?
him,
Was he
addressing
really
a
going
new
to
layer
fail,
of understanding,
just like he always
a
had?
new
But
aspect of
something
faith that he
inside him
hadn't
had shifted
considered
overnight.
before.
He
The
knew
next
that if he
morning,
wanted a second
Elon found
chance,
himself
if he
sitting in
wanted
his
to prove
usual
that he
spot
still
in the
had
back of
value,
the church.
he would
As
need to
Pastor
push
Mike
beyond
began
his
his
doubts,
sermon,
beyond his
Elon
past
felt an
failures.
unexpected
The
sense
road
of
ahead wouldn't be
anticipation.
easy.
The topic
In
was
fact,
about serving
it might
others,
be harder than
not just in
anything he had
grand,
ever faced.
visible ways,
But for the
but in
first
the
time
small,
in years,
everyday
Jake
acts
was
of
willing to
kindness
try.
that often
He
go
arrived
unnoticed.
early at the Tesla
It was a
workshop,
message that
the sun
resonated
barely
deeply
rising
with
over
him.
the horizon.
As someone who
As
had
he
built an
stepped into the
empire
building,
based on his
he
vision
saw
and
Amelia
ambition,
already
he had
hard at
always been
work.
focused on
Her
the big
focus
picture.
laser sharp
But
as she
Pastor Mike
examined
was
a
urging the
series of
congregation
schematics.
to look at the
She
small
didn't acknowledge
moments,
him at first,
the
but
conversations,
Jake wasn't
the
bothered.
quiet gestures,
He had a job to
the
do.
moments of service
All right,
that
let's
often
get
went
started,
unseen.
Jake said,
True
trying
greatness,
to mask the
Pastor Mike
uncertainty in
said,
his voice.
is not
He
measured
wasn't
by
sure
what
if
we
Amelia
build or
was even
create,
listening,
but by
but he
how we
didn't
serve
care.
others.
He had a
It's in the
task, and
humility
that was
to
enough
put
for
others
now.
before ourselves,
Amelia
to
glanced
act
up at him.
selflessly
"You
without
still here?"
expecting
she
anything
said,
in return.
her tone more neutral
Elon
than
shifted in
hostile.
his seat.
"I'm not
These were
backing
words
down,"
he had
Jake
never
replied,
truly considered
meeting her
before.
gaze.
For
There was
years,
a resolve in
his
his
focus
eyes
had
that
been on
hadn't been
building,
there the day
achieving,
before.
and pushing
"Let's
boundaries.
get this engine put
He had
together."
always seen himself
Amelia
as a
paused
pioneer,
for a moment,
someone who could shape
seemingly
the future.
considering his
But
words.
serving others?
Then she shrugged,
That was a concept
turning her
he hadn't
attention
fully
back to her work.
embraced.
"All
He had
right,
never thought
you
of
can try
himself
again,
as someone
but
who
you better
needed to
not
serve
waste my time."
only to lead.
Jake nodded,
But now,
his
as he
stomach a
listened to
bundle of
Pastor
nerves.
Mike's words,
This
he
was
felt
it.
a shift
He had
within
no
himself.
other choice but
Could
to
it
give
be
it
that the true
everything he
purpose of
had.
his life
For the
wasn't
next
just
few
to
hours,
create things,
Jake worked
but
in
to use
silence,
those creations
carefully
to serve
following
others?
Amelia's
What if the next phase
but
of his
also
journey
allowing
wasn't
himself
about
the
building
freedom to
more
think
rockets or
critically
electric
about the pieces
cars,
in front of
but
him?
about using
It
his
wasn't about
success
just
to make a
following
real
steps.
difference in the
It was
lives of
about
others?
understanding how
After
each
the
part fit
service,
together
Elon
and
approached
why.
Pastor Mike,
It was about
as he had
figuring out
so
the
many
why
times
behind
before.
the how.
But this
He
time,
stopped focusing
there was
on
something
how slow
different
he
in his
was,
eyes,
or how much he
a
lacked
quiet
experience.
urgency, a
Instead,
new
he
understanding.
tried to understand
Pastor
the
Mike,
system,
Elon
the
said,
logic behind
I've
the
been thinking a
machinery.
lot about what you
Slowly
said
but
today,
surely,
about
the engine
service.
began to come together.
I've spent my life
He
trying
tightened
to change the
screws,
world,
adjusted
to make it a
wiring,
better
and
place,
rechecked
but
his
I've
work,
never really
pushing through the
considered what it
doubts
means
that
to serve
threatened to
others in the
derail
way
him.
you described.
Amelia walked
Pastor
over
Mike smiled
and watched
warmly.
quietly for a
It's a
few
big
moments.
realization,
Jake could
isn't
feel
it?
her eyes on
It's
him,
easy to get
but he
caught
kept
up
his
in the
focus
pursuit
on
of
the task
success,
in front of him.
to think that
When he
changing the
finished,
world is
he
all
stepped
about
back and
achieving
wiped
great
his hands
things.
on his pants.
But true
The
service,
engine was
real
assembled.
greatness,
It wasn't
comes from
perfect,
how we treat
but it was
others,
whole.
how we
It was
use our
functional.
success to lift
Well,
them up.
it's not a
Elon
disaster,
nodded slowly,
Amelia said,
absorbing the
her
message.
voice flat.
For so
Not bad,
long,
but
his
we'll see if
ambition
it
had been
runs.
centered around his
Jake
own
wasn't
vision,
sure if that was a
his drive
compliment
to
or
innovate,
criticism,
to
but he
achieve,
didn't
to
care.
create a
He'd done
legacy.
it. He
But
had
now,
completed the
he
task,
realized
even if
there
it
was
had been
something
rough around
even
the
more
edges.
powerful.
He had done something
The
that felt
ability
like
to
a
use his
victory,
resources,
even if it was
his
small.
knowledge, his
Amelia
influence,
moved to start
to
the
help help others. He didn't need to be the one in the spotlight.
The machine
He could use his
life.
position to serve,
components
to elevate
working in
others in
harmony.
ways he had
Jake
never
let out a
considered.
breath he didn't
I think I've been
realize he was
focused on
holding.
the wrong
It
things,
ran.
Elon
All right,
admitted,
Amelia
his voice
said,
soft.
a small,
I've been obsessed with
approving
making
nod
the
finally
impossible
escaping
possible.
her lips.
But what if
You didn't screw
what
it
if the
up.
true goal
We'll
is
call
to
it
make the world
progress.
better for those
Jake's
who
heart
need it the
soared.
most?
It wasn't much,
Pastor Mike
but it
placed
was
a
a win,
hand on
and
Elon's
that was all
shoulder.
he needed.
That's the
A
heart of it,
single victory
Elon.
to prove
It's
that
not
he could
about
still
being
do
the
this.
smartest
But
or the most
success in the
successful.
workshop was
It's
only
about
the
using
beginning.
whatever gifts you
Elon's
have to
tests
make a
weren't
difference
over.
in the lives
If
of
anything,
others.
this
And you've been
success
given a
just
lot.
opened the door for
You have a
more
platform,
challenges.
resources,
The next task
and
was
influence.
Jake
But
had
it's
to
up to you how
demonstrate
you
his
use
ability
them.
to think
Elon
creatively
stood in
under
silence
pressure.
for a moment,
Elon called
feeling
him
the
into
weight
his
of
office
Pastor
late that
Mike's
afternoon,
words.
his
For the
expression
first time in his
unreadable as
life,
usual.
he saw his
Jake took a
success
seat
through a new
across from him,
lens. It wasn't just about what he could achieve. It was about what he could give. And with that realization came a deep sense of purpose, a feeling that the road ahead had a new direction.
What I want to know
As he left the church that day, Elon felt a newfound clarity. He didn't have to choose between his passion for innovation and his desire to serve. He could do both. It was possible to build the future while making it a better place for everyone, not just for those at the top. And as he walked to his car, a thought echoed in his mind. Perhaps this is the true miracle after all. The realization that the power to change the world doesn't just come from building great things. It comes from serving others with the gifts we've been given. The weeks following Pastor Mike's sermon were transformative for Elon. His internal journey of faith and self-reflection had reached a pivotal point, and the realization he had during that service about the power of service and using his success for the benefit of others began to shape his worldview in ways he hadn't anticipated. Elon had always been someone driven by the desire to solve problems and push the boundaries of what was possible. Whether it was creating electric cars to combat climate change or sending humans to Mars, he had sought to leave a lasting legacy. But now, with his growing understanding of service, he started questioning how his work could impact others beyond just innovation. What if his success could be used to create opportunities for people in need, to support communities that lack the resources to reach their full potential? The question lingered in his mind as he arrived at SpaceX headquarters one Tuesday afternoon. He had a team meeting scheduled, and the usual buzz of excitement filled the air as employees gathered in the large conference room. But today, Elon was more focused than usual, determined to begin charting a new path, not only for SpaceX, but for himself. As the team settled into their seats, Elon stood before them, ready to address his employees. He had led this company through multiple phases of success, but today, his words would be different. It wasn't about the next technological breakthrough or the next big product. It was about something deeper. Elon, you okay? Kimball whispered, standing beside him. Sensing the change in his demeanor, Kimball had been a constant support, and now more than ever, Elon appreciated his steady presence. I've been thinking a lot, Elon began, taking a deep breath. I've spent most of my career focused on reaching the stars, literally, with SpaceX, and trying to change the world with Tesla. But I think there's something I've been missing. We've been so focused on the grand vision. But what if we could make a real difference right here on Earth with what we've built? Kimball looked intrigued. You mean focusing more on community impact? Exactly, Elon said. It wasn't about building something. We've got the technology, we've got the resources, and we've got the power to make an impact on a scale that most people only dream of. But I've come to realize that the impact we create isn't just about building great products. It's about giving back to the world and serving those who need it the most. There was a quiet shift in the room as his words began to settle in. The team had always known Elon as the visionary, the risk taker, the one who pushed everyone to think bigger and act faster. But now, there was a new sense of purpose in his voice, one that wasn't driven by ego or competition, but by a genuine desire to make the world a better place. So, what are you thinking? One of the engineers asked, his curiosity piqued. I'm thinking it's time we use the resources we've built not just for profit, but for purpose, Elon said, pacing slowly across the room. What if we started focusing on how we can give back? Invest in education for underserved communities, help solve issues of hunger and poverty, and support healthcare initiatives around the world. We've built rockets that can take us to Mars. Now, it's time to focus on making life better for those right here on Earth. The room was silent for a moment as the team absorbed Elon's words. Then, slowly, one of the engineers spoke up. I think that's an incredible idea, Elon was sitting at his desk. We've always focused on the future, on what's possible in space. But what if we could make the future better for people right now? That's a vision worth pursuing, Elon said. Elon smiled. It wasn't a smile of triumph or pride, but one of quiet satisfaction. For the first time in a long while, he felt he was on the right path. There was no blueprint for this journey, no clear map of what it would look like, but it felt like the next logical step in his evolution, not just as a businessman or innovator, but as a person. We've
Jake
got the
began,
resources to
his
make
voice
real
steady,
change,
but not without
Elon
nerves.
continued.
I've been
And
thinking
now,
about how we
I want
can
us to start
improve
thinking
energy
about how we
efficiency
can
across
serve.
everyday
It won't be
technology.
easy,
A lot
and it
of
won't be
devices,
quick,
like home
but I want us to
appliances
start
and even
making a
some
tangible
vehicles,
impact.
are energy
We can
hungry,
still
but
reach
not
for the
very
stars,
intelligent when it
but
comes
let's
to
make
how they
sure we're
use that
lifting
energy.
people up on the
My
way.
idea is
There
to
was a
develop
ripple of
smart
approval
system
through
that
the
uses
room
AI
as the
to
team members
dynamically adjust
exchanged
energy
nods.
consumption based
Elon
on
had
real-time
always been a
needs.
force of
Elon
nature,
didn't
but
interrupt.
today,
He
his
just
words
sat
had
back,
inspired
eyes
something
focused
else,
intently on
an energy
Jake.
that wasn't
Jake
just
pressed
about
on,
reaching new heights,
knowing that
but
every
about
word
helping
mattered.
those who had
Let's
never
say you
had
have
the
a
chance to
fridge
rise
or
in
an
the
air
first place.
conditioner or even
After
a
the
washing
meeting,
machine.
Elon
Right
spent
now,
hours with
these
Kimball
things are
discussing
using
the practical
energy
aspects
regardless
of this
of whether
new
you're
mission.
using them or
How could
not.
SpaceX,
But with AI,
Tesla,
we could
and
monitor
even
the
his other
system's usage
ventures
and
make this
only
vision a
activate power
reality?
when it's actually
They talked
needed,
about potential
adjusting it
partnerships
based on
with
your habits,
nonprofit
your
organizations,
It's a
creating
smart
new
system
programs that
learns
supported
and adapts.
education, sustainable
Jake could feel his
agriculture,
pulse
and
quicken as he
healthcare
spoke.
innovation in the
The
world's
words
most
flowing more
impoverished
easily
regions.
now that he had
The
fully
possibilities were
committed to the
endless,
idea.
but it was
We could
clear
reduce
to Elon
energy
that
waste,
this was no
lower
longer just a
costs,
business
and make
move.
existing
It was a
technology
life
more
move.
sustainable
The next
without
Sunday,
having to
as
build
Elon
brand
walked
new
into the
devices
church
from
with
scratch.
Kimball, he
And
felt
the
a
best
new
part
sense
is that
of
it could
purpose in
scale,
his step.
adapting
He
to
had always
everything
been
from
passionate
individual
about changing
homes
the
to
world,
entire cities.
but now he
Elon
understood that
didn't
real
react
change didn't
immediately,
start with
which
just
sent a
grand
jolt of
ideas or
anxiety through
technological
Jake.
advancements.
He could feel the
It started
tension
with
building,
people,
the
real,
silence thick
human
between them.
connections.
Then,
And in that sense,
after what felt
faith
like
was
an
guiding him
eternity,
to a place where
Elon
his
spoke.
drive could be
"I'm
used for something
intrigued,"
far
he
more
said
meaningful
simply,
than just
his
building
tone
the future.
calm, but with a
Hit
glint of
subscribe
curiosity.
and leave a
But
comment
let's
with
dig
where you're
into
watching
this.
from.
What's your
This
approach
story
for
might just
scaling
spark
it?
a new beginning.
How would you integrate
What's one
this
thing
AI
that
system
always
into
pushes you
existing
forward,
infrastructure?
even when things get
Jake
tough?
exhaled slowly.
Pastor Mike's
This
sermon
wasn't
that day was
the
about the
questions had
concept of
begun.
stewardship,
Well,
about
the key
using the
is
gifts you've been
modularity,
given to serve
Jake
others.
replied.
We
The
are
system
stewards
can
of the
be built
world
in
God
stages,
created,
starting
Pastor
with
Mike
individual
said.
devices
It's
or
not about
systems.
owning everything
You
we
need to create
have,
partnerships
but about
with
using it
appliance
wisely,
manufacturers,
with
car
humility, and to
manufacturers,
bless
anyone
others.
who's in the business
Elon's
of
heart stirred.
energy-intensive products.
In that moment,
Once it's
everything
proven to
he had
work
been
on a
feeling
small
over the
scale,
past
it could
months
be
seemed to
expanded.
click.
Elon
The
raised
idea
an
of
eyebrow,
stewardship,
clearly
of using his
impressed with
gifts to
Jake's
serve
grasp
and
of the
uplift
practical
others,
challenges.
was the natural
And what about the
progression
data?
of his journey.
You'd need
His
vast
success
amounts of
had never
information
been
to
just
make
for
this
him.
work.
It had
How would you
always been
ensure
about
that
the
it's
potential to
accurate
make a
and secure?
difference.
Jake
But now,
nodded,
he was
already
ready to
having
shift
thought
his
through this
focus from
part.
personal
Yes,
achievement to
data
collective
is
good.
critical.
To serve,
It would need to be
not just
gathered
with
in
his
real
money or
time and
resources,
processed through a
but with
cloud
his
system.
time,
Security
energy,
would be a
and
priority.
influence.
Encrypted
As he
data
walked out of
transfer,
church that day,
secure cloud
he looked at
infrastructure,
Kimball and said,
transparent
"This is
privacy
just the
protocols
beginning.
would all
We
be
have a
built into the
responsibility,
system.
not
The
just
AI
as
would be
leaders in
optimized
business,
to learn
but as
without
people,
violating
to make
user
the world a
privacy."
better place."
Elon seemed
And that's what I
satisfied with the
intend to do.
response. Leaning
Kimball
forward
smiled.
now, his
The
gaze
proud
more
brother who had
intense.
stood by his
All right,
side through
so
it
what's
all.
the next step for
I'm
you?
with you, Elon.
What's your plan
Every
to bring
step
this
of the way.
idea to life?
And for the first
Jake's
time in
mind
a
raced.
long time,
He had
Elon
anticipated
felt
this
as though his
moment,
purpose was
but it
clear.
still felt
The path ahead
overwhelming.
was uncertain,
The path from
but it was
idea
no
to
longer
execution
just
was
about
so
success,
vast,
fame,
so
or
uncertain.
fortune.
But he
It
couldn't
was about
back down
something
now.
much bigger,
I'd start
something
by
that would
reaching out
change
to
not
potential
just the
partners,
world,
like
but the
appliance
people who
manufacturers,
inhabited it.
to see if
And
they'd
with
be
that
willing
clarity,
to pilot this
he was
system.
ready to move
I'd need a
forward.
small,
The idea
dedicated
had been
team to
planted.
develop the AI
Now,
algorithms
it was time to
and
start
set up the
cultivating
testing
it.
environment.
Elon knew that
Then,
changing the
we could
world
run the
wasn't an
system on a
overnight
limited
task,
scale to
but
prove
with the
its
vision
viability.
he now held,
Once we've got
a
a proof
vision
of
that
concept,
blended
the plan
technological
would be to
innovation
scale
with
up and
human-centered
eventually work
service.
toward
He
commercial
felt
production.
invigorated by the
Jake
challenge
stopped
ahead.
for a moment,
He spent the
collecting
next
his
few
thoughts.
weeks in a
Of
whirlwind
course,
of meetings.
there's the challenge of
First,
funding.
he called
To
a
develop
series
the
of
tech,
strategic
the
sessions with his
infrastructure,
leadership
and to get the
teams
ball
at both
rolling with
SpaceX and Tesla.
manufacturers.
It was clear that the work they were doing in
But with
space
Tesla's
and on
backing,
Earth had the
I think
potential
we
to
could
make
be
a
in a
lasting
strong position
impact.
to disrupt
But
this
Elon
space.
knew that they needed a shift
Elon
in
was
mindset.
silent for a moment.
It wasn't just
His
about
fingers
building the
steepled
next
in front
big
of him,
thing.
as though
It was about
considering
using their
Jake's words
resources to
carefully.
uplift uplift and
The room
empower.
was thick with
We've
the
built
weight of his
rockets to
thoughts.
explore space,
Jake had been through
and we've
plenty
built
of
electric
meetings in
vehicles
his
to
life,
protect the
but
planet.
this felt different.
Elon told his
It felt
leadership
like it was
teams
all
during
on
the
the
first
line.
of many brainstorming
Finally,
sessions.
Elon spoke
But I
again.
want to do more.
His voice
I
cool
want
and
us to focus
calculated.
on tangible
You've thought
efforts
this
that
through,
create
Jake.
real,
I'm
immediate
impressed.
change in
But
communities
the
around
real
the
question
world.
is,
We have
are
the
you ready
talent,
for the kind
the
of pressure this
technology,
will bring?
and the
Because
passion to
this
make it
isn't
happen.
just about a
One of his
project.
key lieutenants,
This is about
Gwynne
changing
Shotwell,
industries.
asked the tough
It's
question.
about leading a revolution.
What does that look like,
Jake
Elon?
swallowed
What are the
hard,
first steps?
his throat dry.
Elon
He had been
paused for a
thinking about
moment,
this moment
looking
for
around the
days.
room.
But now
He'd
that it
spent
was
so
here,
much time
it felt
thinking
like
about the big
everything was
picture that
riding
he
on his
hadn't
answer.
really broken
Could
it
he
down into
handle
the
it?
smaller,
Could he really
actionable
carry the
pieces.
weight of a challenge
But he
this
knew it
big?
was important to
Yes,
start somewhere,
Jake said firmly.
even if it was small.
I'm ready.
He turned to the
Elon's
whiteboard at
lips
the front of
curled
the
into a
room
small
and began
smile.
sketching out a few
Good.
ideas.
Because if you want
I
to
think
take
we
this to
start
the
with
next level,
education,
you're going to
Elon
need to
said,
prove you can
tapping the
handle
marker on the
everything
board.
that comes with
We
it.
know that the
The
future
pressure,
depends on
the
innovation and
failures,
science. science.
The long
But
nights
too
and
many kids in
setbacks.
underserved
If you're truly
communities
in this,
don't even
then we
have
can move
access to
forward.
quality
Jake
education in
nodded.
these fields.
I'm in.
I want to help bridge
Elon
that
stood
gap.
up and
We should
extended his
create
hand.
scholarship
All right,
programs for
Jake.
students in
Let's see what
underrepresented
you're made
areas.
of.
And maybe
Jake
even
reached
start
out,
building schools in
shaking
rural
Elon's
regions that
hand
need
with a
access
firm
to
grip,
better resources.
his heart pounding
Let's
in his
invest in
chest.
the future.
This was just the
Gwyn
beginning.
nodded.
As
So,
Jake left
we
Elon's
focus on
office,
making sure
his
the
mind
next
was
generation
buzzing
has
with
the tools
excitement
to
and
succeed.
anticipation.
Exactly,
He had made it past the
Elon
first
affirmed.
test.
We
But
can
the real
also
work had
expand on
only
the
just
work
begun.
Tesla has
The
done with
next few
renewable
days were a
energy
blur
by
of
focusing
meetings,
on sustainable
emails,
infrastructure
and
for
endless
underserved
research.
areas.
Jake's
Imagine
idea
a
had
rural
caught the
community
attention
with
of
access
Tesla's
to
senior
solar
leadership
energy,
team,
clean
and they
water,
wanted to
and
see more
efficient
details.
transportation.
They wanted
That
a
could
roadmap,
change
a
everything for
timeline,
them.
a clear
Another member
breakdown
of the team,
costs and
a lead
potential
engineer at
obstacles.
SpaceX,
The pressure
raised
was
her
mounting.
hand.
But
What
Jake
about
couldn't
healthcare?
afford to let it
I know
overwhelm
SpaceX
him.
focuses
But
on
the
space
hardest part
exploration,
came when he
but we
realized
have some of the
just how
most
many
advanced
people had
technologies
already
in the
been working
world.
on similar
Could we
projects.
use those to help
In the
improve
world of AI
healthcare in
and
remote
energy
places?
efficiency,
Elon's
innovation was
eyes lit up.
constantly evolving.
Absolutely.
Jake's idea,
We're doing some
though
incredible
unique,
work in terms
wasn't
of
entirely
robotics,
new.
artificial
There were other
intelligence,
companies and
and
teams out
even
there
medical
already
technology
developing
through our
similar
ventures with
technologies.
Neuralink.
What
We
would
could
make
start
his system
exploring
stand
ways
out?
to use those
Jake spent the
technologies in
next week
healthcare,
consumed with
particularly in
doubt. He had
places
put
where
everything
resources
into
are
this
limited.
idea.
The
But now
group
it
quickly
felt like
began
he
to
was
develop a
fighting an
vision
uphill
that
battle.
blended all
Could
these
he really
elements:
make this work?
education,
Or was he
healthcare,
destined to be just
sustainable
another failed
energy, and
inventor?
innovation
Another dreamer
into one
chasing an
cohesive
impossible
plan.
vision.
Elon
The
could
pressure
see it
was
all
getting
coming
to him,
together in a
and
way
for the
that felt
first
right,
time since
that
he'd
felt
met
in
Elon,
alignment with the
Jake
heart
wondered
of
if
what
he
he
had made
wanted
the
to
right
achieve.
choice.
But
Could
there
he
was
really
still much
handle
work
it
to
all?
do.
Could
And
he
this
lead
was
a
just the
revolution?
beginning.
Or was
He
he
also
simply
reached
out of
out
his
to other
depth?
thought leaders
But
in the
one thing
space
was
of social
certain.
impact.
He couldn't give
Over
up
the following
now.
months,
Not when he
Elon
was so
formed
close.
partnerships with
The weight
several
of the next few
nonprofit
weeks felt
organizations
heavier
focused
than
on global
anything
issues
Jake
like
had
hunger,
experienced in a
water
long time.
scarcity, and
Every
access
day,
to education.
It seemed like the
His
mountain
vision
in
for a
front of
better
him grew
future was
taller,
rapidly
and with
taking
each new
shape,
challenge,
but he knew
the
that
shadow of
execution
doubt
would be
grew
the real
longer.
challenge.
Tesla's
As
senior
Elon moved
leadership
forward,
team had
the
presented
first
him
official
with
step
more
in
than
his
a
new
dozen
direction was
questions,
the
some
announcement of the
practical,
Elon
some
Musk Foundation,
philosophical,
a
all pointing
philanthropic
out the
effort to
weaknesses
support
in
the
his
causes
idea.
he was
He
passionate
had
about.
expected
The
challenges,
foundation would
but not
focus
so
on
many so
education,
quickly. He
healthcare,
sat in his
renewable
small apartment
energy,
late one
and
evening,
other areas where he
staring at
could
his
leverage his
laptop.
company's
His latest
technologies
draft
for
of the
social good.
project proposal
On the
was
day of the
filled with red
announcement,
marks,
Elon stood at the
comments,
podium at a press
suggestions,
conference held in the
concerns.
heart of
He could
SpaceX
almost hear
headquarters.
the voices of the
Reporters
Tesla
and media
executives in
outlets
his head,
gathered, eager to
dissecting
hear
every
about the
sentence,
latest venture from the
questioning
world's
every
most
assumption.
ambitious
What
entrepreneur.
if they're right?
The room
What if
buzzed with
my
questions
idea
about his
isn't
next
viable?
move.
His
New
phone
rocket
buzzed on the
launches,
table.
new electric
It was a
vehicle
text from
innovations,
Amelia.
and of
How's
course,
it going?
the future of
Need
space.
a break?
But today was
Jake stared
different.
at the message
Thank
for
you
a
for
long
coming,
moment.
Elon
Amelia
began.
had been a
His
constant
voice steady,
throughout this
but filled
whirlwind
with
of
a
a
deeper
journey,
sense of
a
purpose
source of
than anyone had
encouragement when he
seen in
needed
him
it
before.
most.
Today,
Still,
I'm
he
here
hadn't
to
told
announce
her the
something
full
that is
extent of
perhaps
his
more
doubts.
important than
She only
anything
saw
I've
the
ever
surface,
done in the
his
world of
small victories
technology
in the
and
workshop,
innovation.
his ability to
Today,
keep pushing
I'm announcing
forward.
the creation
But
of
what if
the
she
Elon
knew the
Musk
truth?
Foundation.
What if she
This foundation will
realized just
focus
how
on
much he
giving
was
back,
struggling?
using our
Still,
resources and
he knew he couldn't
technologies to
shut
create
everyone out.
meaningful change
Not
in the
now.
world.
He
He
quickly
paused,
typed back,
letting
"I'm
the
hanging
weight
in
of his
there,
words
but I
settle
could
in.
use a break.
For too long,
You free
we've been
tomorrow?"
focused on
A
solving
few
the big
moments later,
problems that affect
Amelia
the future of
responded,
humanity.
"Sure.
Space
Let's
travel,
grab coffee.
renewable
You're
energy,
due for a
artificial
reset."
intelligence.
Jake smiled
And while
faintly.
these are still
She had a
incredibly
way of seeing
important,
through his
I've
walls,
realized that the
even
most
when he
urgent
tried to
challenges
hide
we
behind
face
them.
are the ones
The
we
simple
encounter right
invitation
here
to
on
get
Earth.
coffee felt
Access
like
to
the lifeline he
education,
needed. The
healthcare,
next morning,
and sustainable
Jake met
living.
Amelia at
Elon's
a
voice
cafe
grew
just a
even
few
more
blocks from
passionate as he
Tesla's
continued.
headquarters.
We
The
have
place
the
was
ability
small
to
but
make a
cozy,
difference.
with soft
And I
jazz
believe that
music
through the
playing in the
Elon Musk
background
Foundation,
and the smell
we
of
can make
freshly
that
brewed
difference a
coffee
reality.
filling the air.
This isn't just
Amelia
about
was
giving
already
money.
sitting at a
It's about
table by the
creating
window,
solutions.
her laptop
We're not just
open in
going to
front of her,
donate.
but
We're
her
going to
eyes were
innovate.
Focused on
We're
Jake
going
as
to
he
apply
walked
the
in.
same problem-solving
Hey,
mentality
Jake
that
greeted
we've
her,
used in
taking a
building
seat
rockets
across
and
from
electric
her.
cars to
Hey,
tackle issues like
Amelia
hunger,
said, a
poverty,
slight smile
and disease.
tugging at the corners of
He
her
looked out
lips.
over the crowd,
I've got a feeling
sensing
you've
the
been
shift
working
in
yourself to
energy.
the bone again.
This wasn't just
You look
another
like you
tech
haven't
announcement.
slept in days.
This was something
Jake
deeply
gave her a
personal,
tired grin.
a shift in his
That's because
perspective,
I haven't.
a new
It's
chapter
a
of his
lot.
journey.
I thought I
There's
had
so
something
much more to
solid
be
with this
done,
idea.
Elon
But now,
continued.
it
And
just
with your
feels like
support,
it's falling
we can start
apart.
taking real
Amelia
steps
closed
toward a
her
better
laptop
future
and
for
leaned
everyone.
forward.
The
Her
announcement was
expression
met
softening.
with mixed reactions.
Everyone
Some
hits a
reporters
wall.
were skeptical.
It doesn't mean your
After all,
idea's bad.
this was Elon
It
Musk,
just means you're learning.
the eccentric
That's how
billionaire known
progress
for his
happens.
bold statements
You're not
and
supposed to
often
have all the
controversial
answers
behavior.
yet.
But there
I
were
don't
others
know,
who saw the
Jake
potential in
muttered,
what he was
rubbing his
proposing.
eyes.
It was
There are
clear that
so
this
many
was
people
not
out
just
there with
another
the same
publicity
ideas.
stunt, but
I'm
a
starting
genuine
to think
attempt
it's
to
not
use
worth
his
it.
platform for
Maybe
good.
I'm just another
In the
guy
weeks that
chasing
followed,
something
the
impossible.
foundation started
Amelia
making
was
headlines.
quiet for a
The
moment,
first projects
considering
rolled
his
out,
words.
starting with
Then she
initiatives
spoke,
to provide
her voice
scholarships to
steady and
underprivileged
reassuring.
students
Do you
pursuing
know how many
careers in
ideas
science and
Tesla's
technology.
discarded?
Tesla's solar panels were being installed in areas without reliable access to electricity, and SpaceX was working with healthcare providers to explore how their technology could help deliver medical supplies to remote regions. The ripple effect was starting to be felt, though Elon knew this was just the beginning. He also made it a point to visit some of the communities the foundation was helping. One of the first stops was a rural town in Africa, where he and his team installed solar panels and worked with local leaders to build sustainable water systems. When he arrived in the village, he saw firsthand how the lack of basic resources affected people's lives.
His voice thick with emotion.
He also saw something else. A resilience,
smiled,
a hope that had been fueled by the idea of something better. Now, Elon had never seen himself as a philanthropist, at least not in the traditional sense. But as he stood there, surrounded by children who now had access to a brighter future because of the changes his foundation was making, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. It wasn't about recognition or accolades. It was about knowing that his work, in this moment, had a real and lasting impact on people's lives.
Because they wanted to
For the
see
first time in years, Elon Musk felt at peace with the work he was doing. It wasn't the revolution he had imagined in the world of technology. It was something far more profound, a revolution in the way he viewed success, in the way he saw his role in the world. And as he left that village, looking up at the stars above, he felt something else too. A sense of purpose, a sense that, for once, he was exactly where he needed to be. Despite the overwhelming success of the foundation's early initiatives, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. For the first time in his career, he was unsure of his next step, as if the weight of the responsibility he had taken on was beginning to affect his once unshakable confidence. The doubt came unexpectedly. Late one evening, while he sat alone in his office at SpaceX headquarters, he stared at the glowing screens of data and reports in front of him, but his mind wandered back to the mission of the foundation. The more he thought about it, the more it seemed like a gargantuan task. Solving the world's problems wasn't going to be as easy as revolutionizing space travel or electric cars. What am I really doing? He muttered to himself. Is this even enough? What if I'm not the right person for this? It was a rare moment for Elon Musk. He had always been confident, almost to the point of arrogance, but now, a quiet voice of uncertainty crept in, challenging everything he had set out to do. Kimball had been his rock through many of his life's uncertainties, and Elon knew that if anyone could help him gain perspective, it was his brother. The next day, he called Kimball and asked him to come to the office. Kimball arrived a few hours later, his expression instantly concerned when he saw the heaviness in Elon's eyes. Elon, you okay? Kimball asked, settling down in the chair across from his brother. You don't look like yourself. Elon leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling for a long moment. I'm not sure, Kimball. The foundation, it's growing, but the problems are so massive. I'm trying to make a difference, but there are days when I wonder if I'm doing enough, or if I'm even the right person to lead this. Kimball nodded, understanding Elon's internal struggle. You've always been driven by big goals, by pushing the limits of what's possible. But this isn't about building rockets or electric cars. This is about people, and that's a different kind of challenge, one that doesn't have the same clear answers. Elon chuckled darkly. That's what scares me. There's no roadmap for this, no set of equations to solve. Maybe that's the point, Kimball said quietly. Maybe you don't need a clear answer. Maybe the journey itself, the process of learning and growing and helping people along the way, is the purpose. Elon looked at his brother, searching for the reassurance he needed. Kimball had always been grounded, and the way he spoke about life was different from the sharp, analytical way Elon usually approached challenges. There was a quiet wisdom in his words, something Elon had often overlooked in favor of his own relentless drive. But what if I fail? Elon asked, his voice betraying a rare vulnerability. What if I can't make the difference I want to make? What if all of this, it's just not enough? Failure is part of the process, Kimball replied calmly. You've built your success by failing and trying again. And look where it's gotten you. But this isn't just about success or failure. This is about purpose. It's about doing the right thing, even when you don't have all the answers. You've always been a pioneer, Elon.
a
Maybe
former
now,
colleague from his
it's
time
time
at a
to
startup
pioneer
that
something
focused on
bigger
AI.
than technology.
Sarah had
Elon
always been
sat
one of
in
the
silence
sharpest
for a
people in the
moment,
room,
processing
and her
his brother's
expertise in
words.
machine learning would be
He had always
essential
sought
for
to
the
conquer the
AI-driven
unknown,
aspect of his
to
project.
break through
She was
barriers no one
meticulous,
thought
logical,
possible. But
and had
this
a
felt different.
no-nonsense attitude
It wasn't
that
about
Jake
building
admired.
something impressive
Sarah,
or
it's
revolutionary.
Jake.
It was about
talk to you
building
about
something lasting,
he said,
something that would change the world
There was
on
a
a
pause
personal,
on the other
human
end.
level.
Then,
After a long
Sarah's familiar
pause,
voice came
Elon
through.
finally spoke,
Jake?
his
Wow,
voice
it's been a
steady
while.
but thoughtful.
What's up?
You're right. I'm
spent
working
so
so
much
much
of
of
my
my
life
life
chasing
chasing
after
after
the
the
next
next
big
big thing,
I need a
the
lead
next
data
impossible
scientist for an
goal.
AI-powered
But maybe
energy
this,
efficiency
helping
system.
people,
It's
really
early
making a
stage,
difference.
but we've got
It's
a
the
chance
real
to partner
challenge.
with Tesla
Kimball
for a pilot
smiled,
program.
his expression
You in,
warm and
the
reassuring.
silence on the other
Exactly.
end stretched for a
And you're
moment.
not alone in
And
this,
Jake
Elon.
could feel the
You've got an
anticipation
entire team
building
of
in his
people.
chest.
Your
That's
companies, your
huge,
foundation,
Sarah finally
even the
said.
people who believe
You're
in
really
you.
doing this?
We're all in this
Jake's
together.
voice was firm.
Elon
With
looked
a
at his
spark
brother,
of the confidence
a sense
he
of
hadn't
clarity
realized
starting
he
to
regained.
replace the doubt.
Yeah.
He
And I
didn't
need
need to have
someone who
all
can
the
take the
answers,
tech side to
he
the next
realized.
level.
What
Someone who
mattered
can
was the
bring the
work,
vision to
the
life.
dedication,
I'm not doing
the
this
effort to
alone,
make the
Sarah.
world better,
I need
one
you.
step at a time.
There was another pause.
And if he stumbled
but
along
this
the
time,
way,
it
it wouldn't
wasn't
be a
filled with
failure.
uncertainty.
It would be part
It
of the
was filled
journey.
with the sound
That
of
night,
Sarah thinking,
Elon sat at
weighing
his
the
desk,
opportunity.
more at peace
Finally,
with himself than
she
he had
spoke.
been in a long
I'm in.
time.
When do
He
we
opened a
start?
new document on his
Jake
computer
exhaled,
and began
relieved.
writing. This
Tomorrow,
time, it wasn't
we'll
a
meet at my
strategic
place and
plan
figure out
or a
the
technical
roadmap.
blueprint.
But Sarah,
It was a letter to
we're
the
building
people he
something
had
big
met
here.
along the way.
I need your
the
best.
individuals and
I wouldn't
communities
give
his
you anything
foundation had
less,
already
Sarah
begun to help.
replied.
I
And
know we
Jake
have a
could hear
long
the
road
smile
ahead
in
of
her
us,
voice.
he
The
typed,
first piece
his
of his
fingers
team had
steady on
fallen
the
into
keyboard.
place.
But I
The next
believe in
person
the
Jake
power of
reached out
hope,
to was
in the
more of a
strength
wild
of the
card.
human
David,
spirit.
an
Together,
old friend from
we can do
college.
something
David
extraordinary,
had always been
not
an
just for the
inventor at
future,
heart,
but
his
for
ideas
today,
were often
for
ahead of their
everyone.
time.
He
Which made him
paused and
more of
read
a
the words
visionary
over.
than a conventional
There was something
engineer.
different about
Jake
this
had
letter,
always
something
admired
more
his ability
personal.
to think
It
outside
wasn't
the
about his
box,
empire
and that
or
was
his
exactly
ambitions.
the kind of energy
It was about
he
the
needed
people
for the
whose
prototype.
lives could be
David picked
transformed
up
by
on
the
the
work
first
they were
ring.
all doing
Jake,
together.
Man,
With a sense
I
of
haven't heard
finality,
from you in
he hit
forever.
send.
What's
The
up?
next morning,
Jake got
Elon
straight
felt
to
a
the point.
renewed sense of
I need
purpose.
your help.
The
I'm
doubts
building a
hadn't
team for a
disappeared,
project,
but they
and I
no
need
longer
someone who
held
can
the
take
same
the
weight.
creative side of
There were
things.
still
Think
challenges
outside
ahead,
the box.
so
Push
many,
the boundaries
in
of what's
fact,
possible.
but now he
You in.
understood that it wasn't
David was
about
quiet for a
perfection.
moment.
It was about
A project?
progress.
What kind
As
of
he walked into
project?
the SpaceX
Jake
building
grinned.
later that day,
I'm developing
ready to
an
meet with his team
AI-powered
again,
energy efficiency
he was greeted
system.
with a different
The
energy.
kind of thing that
There
could
was a
change the way
collective
we
sense
use
of
energy in our
excitement and
homes,
anticipation in
cars,
the air,
everything.
as if everyone
Tesla's
knew they
backing
were on
us
the
for a
cusp of
pilot
something
program.
transformative,
But I need someone
not just
who
in
can
technology,
build the prototype,
but in life.
someone who can turn
Elon
the vision
stood
into
before them,
reality.
a soft
still
but
up for the
determined
challenge?
smile on his face.
David laughed.
I've been
You're
doing a
telling me
lot
this
of
is the
thinking,
next big
he
thing?
began,
Man,
his voice
you've
calm but
always had a
resolute.
way of convincing
And I've
me.
realized something
All right,
important.
I'm in.
We're here
Let's
to build
do
the
this.
future. But the
Jake was
future is not
ecstatic.
just about the
David
things
had
we
always
make.
been unconventional.
It's about the people whose
but
lives
that's what
we
made him the
change.
perfect fit
And that's
for
what
the
we're
team.
going to do.
Now,
we're
with
going
Sarah
to change
and David
lives.
on board,
The
Jake
room
had
fell
two
silent
crucial
for a
pillars in
moment,
place.
then erupted
Technical
into
expertise
applause.
and bold
It wasn't
creativity.
just a moment of
As the days
celebration.
passed,
It was
Jake
the
worked to
beginning
bring
of a
in
new
more
chapter,
people.
one
He
that would be
hired Mia,
defined
a
not by the
project manager
technologies they
with years of
created,
experience
but by the
running
people they
large-scale
helped.
tech initiatives.
And in that moment,
Mia was
Elon
efficient,
Musk knew that,
organized,
despite the
and had a
doubts,
knack for
he
getting
was on the
things
right
done under
path.
pressure.
He had found his
Then,
purpose.
he brought in Leo,
The following months
a
were a
mechanical engineer
whirlwind
who
for
had worked
Elon
on some
and
of
his team.
Tesla's previous
The Elon
projects.
Musk Foundation
Leo's
began to
knowledge
grow,
of how things
evolving
actually
from a
worked,
simple
the
idea
nuts
into a
and bolts,
global
the
movement.
materials,
And Elon
the energy
quickly
systems,
realized that
was
this
going to
wasn't
be
just
critical
about
when it
making the
came
world a
time to
better
build the
place.
prototype.
It was about
The team was
truly
coming
connecting
together,
with people on a
each
deeper
person
level.
bringing their
The more he
unique
poured
skills
himself
to the
into the
table.
work,
But
the
Jake
more
knew
it
that
felt
the
like
most
he was on the
important
cusp of
element
something
of all
truly
was the cohesion
transformative.
between them.
One of the most
They weren't just
impactful
employees.
initiatives the
They were a
foundation
team
launched was a global scholarship program aimed at fostering the next generation of engineers, scientists,
This was about
and
collaboration,
thinkers. By working
trust,
closely
and the
with
shared belief
universities,
that they were
educational
building something
institutions,
truly
and
groundbreaking.
grassroots organizations in
About a
underserved
week after
areas,
assembling
the
the team,
foundation was
they
able to
gathered
open
in Jake's
doors for
apartment to go
thousands
over
of
the
students
first
who had
draft of the
previously been
prototype.
overlooked.
Sarah was first
Elon's
this
vision
week.
was clear.
Okay,
He
so
wanted
I've
to
been
equip
looking
the
at the
world's
data models,
brightest minds
and there
with the
are some clear
resources they
issues we
needed
need
to
to
tackle the
address before
problems
we
that
move
lay
forward.
ahead.
The
Elon
AI
also
algorithms
found
are
himself
solid,
more
but
involved
we
with
need to
local
refine the
communities
learning
than ever
process to
before.
ensure real-time
His visits
efficiency.
to rural
We
towns
can't
across
afford
the
to waste
world,
even a
places
fraction
that
of
lacked
energy.
basic
David
infrastructure,
leaned forward
were
with a
eye-opening.
grin.
One of his
Well,
most
if we're
memorable
talking
trips
real-time
was to a small
efficiency,
village in
I've got
India,
an idea.
where the
What if we
foundation had
design a
installed
modular
solar-powered
system?
energy
A
systems
plug-and-play
to provide
setup that
electricity
allows
to
different
families who had
devices to
never
connect
had
with minimal
access to reliable
downtime.
power.
Mia,
As he
who
walked
had
through
been
the
taking
village,
notes,
speaking to
nodded.
local
I
farmers,
like that.
teachers,
It could help
and
with
families who
scalability.
now had
If we
access
can
to
test the
light,
system with
Elon
just a few
felt a surge
devices
of
first
fulfillment
and
he hadn't
expand it
experienced
incrementally,
from any
we
of
can
his
gather data
technological
at every
successes.
stage.
He had
That
always
way,
dreamed
we don't
of
risk
revolutionizing
overwhelming the
space
AI at
travel,
the outset.
of making humanity a
chimed in,
multiplanetary
"I agree.
species.
But let's not
But
forget the
standing in that
hardware.
village,
We need to
talking
make
to a
sure
mother
these
whose
devices
children
can
could
handle
now
the
study at
AI,
night,
and the
he
energy
realized that
consumption
this,
has to be
too,
monitored.
was part of the
We
greater
don't want to
vision.
create a system
Thank
that
you for giving us
overconsumes
light,
energy while
one
trying
woman
to save
said,
it.
tears
Jake
in her
listened
eyes as
intently
she
the
held
team
Elon's
debated
hand.
the details.
It changes
Something
everything for
inside him
us.
clicked.
It was
He
moments
wasn't
like
just
this that
managing a group of
reinforced his
people.
new sense of
He was
purpose.
collaborating with
Elon
them.
wasn't just
Together,
changing industries.
they were going to make
he was
this
changing
happen.
lives.
As they
One small
finalized their
but
first
significant
plans
impact
and
at a
began
time.
developing the
But
prototype,
even as the foundation
reality of the
flourished,
task ahead
there was
started
still
to
something
sink
he
in.
hadn't
They were
fully
still
embraced.
months away from
It was the
presenting the
spiritual
pilot to
side of
Tesla,
himself,
and the
the
pressure
part
was
of him
mounting.
that had been
Every
awakened
day,
during that night
Jake
in
felt
Las
the weight of
Vegas
the
when he first felt
expectations,
the calling
not
of
just
something
from
greater
Tesla,
than himself.
but from himself.
The work he was doing
come
was
so
important,
far from that
yes,
man who
but
collapsed
there was
in
a
front of
deeper
Elon
connection
Musk.
he still
But the
hadn't
journey
fully
wasn't
explored.
over. It was
The one
only
with
just
God,
beginning.
with Jesus,
As the
with
team
the sense
worked
of grace he had
tirelessly,
felt that
the
night in
hours
the
grew
church.
longer.
It
and the
wasn't that
stress
Elon hadn't
intensified.
believed in
But in
something
those
greater
late-night
before.
sessions,
He had
where
always
everyone was
considered
pushing their
himself a
limits,
spiritual
Jake saw
person,
something
though his
incredible.
focus had often
The
been
team
more
was
on the
thriving
scientific
under
side of
pressure.
the universe.
Each
But
challenge
now,
they faced brought them
after
closer
everything
together,
that had
and
transpired,
every setback
he
was
found
met
himself
with renewed
yearning for a
determination.
deeper
One
understanding.
night,
He
after
began
a
to spend
particularly
more time
grueling
reflecting,
12-hour session,
praying in his own
Sarah
way,
stood up,
and
looking around the
contemplating the
room.
meaning of his
"We're
life's
making
work.
this happen,"
The drive to
she
make a
said.
difference in the
Her
world
voice
had
steady
never been
and full of
stronger,
conviction.
but now it was
This isn't
paired
just
with a
about
desire
energy
for personal
efficiency.
growth,
This is
a
about
desire
changing
to
the way
understand
people
his
think
place
about
in the grander
sustainability.
narrative. He
Jake
began to
smiled,
attend church more
feeling a sense of
frequently,
pride
though
he hadn't
quietly
known
and
was
without
possible.
fanfare.
The
The
dream was
visits were
becoming
for
real.
him, not
And
for
with every
publicity.
step forward,
Each time
they
he
were
entered the humble
rewriting the
building,
rules of what was
sat in the
possible.
pews,
The days
and
bled
listened
into
to the
weeks,
sermons,
and Jake's
something in him
apartment became a
shifted.
war room.
There was a
The
peace he
team was
hadn't
working
expected,
around the clock,
an
fueled
unexpected
by
sense of being
determination
home.
and an
The
unshakable
teachings of
belief in the
Jesus
project.
about love,
The early
forgiveness,
excitement of the
and
concept
compassion
had transformed
resonated
into the
deeply
grind
with
of
him.
execution.
The more he
They
allowed
were
himself
building
to
something that
absorb
could
these
change the
teachings,
world.
the more
But
they
the
seemed to
process was
align with
far
his
from
growing
glamorous.
sense of purpose.
Jake had
One
always known
Sunday,
that turning
after
an
a
idea
particularly
into
moving
reality
service,
wasn't easy.
Elon
But this
sat
was
in the
different.
church courtyard,
They weren't just
reflecting
building a
on
product.
everything
They
that
were
had happened
crafting
in the
something
last
that had
year.
the potential
He had
to
built
shift
companies
the
that had
entire
changed the
paradigm of
world,
energy
but
consumption.
now his
Every
mission felt
decision,
even more
every
personal.
calculation
The
had to be
lightheartedness he
flawless,
once
and
brought
the
to his
pressure
work
to
was now
succeed was
accompanied
mounting
by a
with each
deeper
passing
understanding
day.
of the
The
world's
first week of
suffering
testing was
and the
rocky.
desire to bring
They had a
real
working
healing.
model,
His
but it
thoughts
wasn't
were
yet
interrupted
close
by
to
the
what Jake
voice of
had
a fellow
envisioned.
churchgoer,
The AI
someone
system was
Elon had
sluggish,
seen several
failing to make
times
decisions
but
in
never
real
spoken
time
to.
as
The
efficiently as
man,
needed.
an
The
elderly
hardware
gentleman
wasn't
with a
syncing up
kind
properly
face,
with the
took a
software,
seat beside
and the
him on the
device
bench.
often overconsumed
"It's a beautiful
energy
day,
rather than
isn't
conserving
it?"
it.
the man
Okay,
said,
let's
his
be
voice
honest,
gentle.
Sarah
The
said
world
one
has so
afternoon,
much to
rubbing
offer
her
if we
temples
open
in
our hearts
frustration.
to it.
This
Elon
isn't
nodded,
working.
looking
Not
up
yet,
at the clear sky.
but that's okay.
"I've been
We need
thinking
to
a lot
rethink
about the
the way
world
the
lately,"
AI
he
interacts
said,
with the system.
"about how much
It's
work
too
there is to
slow.
be done.
If we don't
It feels
fix it now,
overwhelming
we're going to
sometimes."
waste more time
The
down
man
the line.
smiled.
David
"It's a
was
lot,
bent over a
yes,
desk,
but you're not doing it
scribbling
alone.
designs on a piece
You
of
don't have to
paper.
carry the weight
Yeah,
of the world
but
on your
here's the
shoulders.
thing. We
You're
can't
part of a
just keep
much
tweaking
bigger
the same
story."
model. We need to
Elon
make
felt
sure
a
the
shiver
hardware
run
is
through
up
him.
to spec first.
There was something
If
about
the
this
physical
man's words
components
that
can't
cut
keep
through
up
the
with
noise
the
in his
AI,
mind.
nothing else
For a
matters.
moment, he forgot
Mia,
about the pressure
sitting on
of
the
his
other
ventures,
side of the room,
the weight of his
adjusted
companies,
her glasses
and the
and tapped on her
responsibility of his
laptop.
foundation.
I've been running
All
some
that mattered in that
simulations,
instant
and it
was the
seems like we're
peaceful
using
presence
too
of
much
the man
energy
beside
just
him.
to make the system
The greatest
learn.
thing you can do,
We need a
the
more
man
refined
continued,
feedback loop.
is to love
Jake
people.
watched the team.
Everything else
Each
will
person
follow.
contributing
All
their
the
own
big
insight,
ideas,
their
all
own
the challenges
solution.
you take on.
It was easy to
Those
get
will
lost
fall
in
into
the
place when
frustration
you
of failure,
understand that the
but he
real
knew this
change
was all
comes
part
through
of the
love.
process.
The kind of
There were
love
no
Jesus
shortcuts
taught.
to greatness.
Elon sat
No
quietly,
easy road to
taking in the
revolution.
man's words.
Every failure was
He had
just
heard
another
similar
step
thoughts closer
before,
to success.
but for some reason,
It wasn't until
they felt
late
more
one
profound
evening,
now.
when they were
The work
all
he was
exhausted,
doing with the
that they
foundation,
found a
the
breakthrough.
technology he
They
was
were testing
developing,
the system yet
none of
again,
it would matter
once
if it
more,
wasn't rooted
it
in
failed to
love and
perform at the
compassion.
level they needed.
As the man stood
Jake
up to
leaned
leave,
back in his
he
chair,
placed a hand
eyes
on
heavy,
Elon's
when
shoulder.
Sarah suddenly
Keep doing
spoke
what
up.
you're doing,
I
he
think
said.
we've been
But
approaching
never
this
forget
all
that
wrong,
love is
she
the
said,
foundation of
her
it
voice
all.
sharp with
Elon
realization.
watched the man
The
walk
others
away,
looked up at her.
a profound
We're
sense of
focusing too
clarity
much on the
washing over
AI,
him.
too much
He realized
on the
that
complexity
this,
of the system.
his newfound
What if we
understanding of
simplify
the
the
world,
process?
the connection
Maybe
he
we've
had
been
with something
over-engineering
greater
it.
than himself,
Instead of
was
using
the
a
missing
massive,
piece he had been
data-heavy
searching
model,
for.
let's go with
The
something
road
more
ahead was still
straightforward.
filled with
We can
challenges,
always scale
but
up
now
later.
he felt equipped
Jake
to face
sat
them.
up, his
He
mind
understood that
racing.
his work with the
Wait,
foundation,
you mean
his
reduce
ventures
the
with
AI's
SpaceX and
complexity?
Tesla,
Sarah
and his
nodded.
future endeavors
Yes.
were not just
Let's
about
focus on
achieving
making the core
technological
system
feats.
smarter
They
instead
were
of
about
bigger.
uplifting
We start
humanity,
small,
making the
build
world a
up,
better
and
place,
iterate as
and
we
doing
go.
so with
The
love
system
and
can still
compassion.
learn and optimize,
In the months that
just
followed,
at a more
Elon's
gradual
approach
pace.
to his work
David,
evolved. who had
He
been
began to
silent
speak
for a
more
while,
openly about the
looked
role
up.
of faith in
"I
his
like it.
life,
We
acknowledging
scaled
the
the AI
ways that
down
his
and
spiritual
focused on
journey
rapid
was shaping his
prototyping.
vision for
We
the
can get to
future.
a working
His
version
foundation
faster that
project
way.
continued
If
to
the
grow,
AI learns
reaching more
slowly,
communities,
at least it will
more
have a
students,
reliable
and more
foundation to build
families.
on."
And through
Jake's
it all,
eyes lit up.
Elon found
This could
himself
work.
closer than
We'd be
ever
able
to the
to
vision
deploy a
he had
simpler
once
system
only
in the
dreamed
pilot
of,
program,
a vision
while
where
continuing to
technology and
refine the more
compassion worked
advanced
hand in
AI
hand
model in
to
the
create a
background.
better world
It's a
for
risk,
everyone.
but it could
As
pay
he
off.
stood in a crowded
Mia
auditorium one evening,
and we can test it in
speaking to a
real-world
group of
conditions,
students who
see
had
how it
received
performs,
scholarships
and
from the
adjust as we
foundation,
go. That's
Elon's
what
heart
iterative
swelled with
design is
pride.
all about.
He wasn't just
The next
giving a
few weeks
speech.
were a whirlwind.
He was sharing a
The team
vision,
stripped
a
down the
calling,
prototype,
a calling to
scaling
make a
back the
difference
AI's
not only in
complexity and
technology,
focusing on
but in the
efficiency
hearts
and
and minds of
reliability.
people.
They
The
spent
future
countless
is
hours on the
bright,
hardware,
he said,
testing
his
different
voice full of
materials
conviction,
and components to
but
ensure
only if we
everything
choose to
worked
build
in
it
harmony.
together.
Leo
And that
led the
begins
charge
with
on
love.
that front,
The
working
applause
with his
that
team of
followed was
engineers
deafening,
to create a
but
physical
to
product
Elon,
that could
it
withstand
was more than
the
just
demands
a
of
sign of
real-world use.
approval. It
Meanwhile,
was a sign that
Sarah
he had found
fine-tuned
his
the
true
data models,
purpose,
making
and for
sure
the
the
first
AI
time
was
in
learning in
years,
a way
he
that
felt at
didn't
peace.
overwhelm the system.
As Elon
The feedback
continued to
loop was
navigate his
adjusted,
new path,
simplifying the
blending
training
his
process
relentless
and making
ambition
it
with a
faster
deeper
and more
understanding
energy
of love,
efficient.
faith,
David,
and compassion,
ever the creative mind,
he found himself
worked on the
facing a new
interface,
and
making
unexpected
sure that the
challenge.
end user would
It wasn't
have
a
an
technical
intuitive
issue or a
experience.
global
He
crisis.
was passionate
It was
about
something
making
more
sure that
personal.
even if
It
the
was a
system was
spiritual
complex under
awakening
the
that he
hood,
knew he could
users
no
wouldn't
longer
have to
ignore.
understand the intricacies
Elon had
of
been
AI
working
to
on
benefit
several
from
key
it.
projects with
Mia
his
kept
team,
everyone on
including
track.
the ambitious
She
Mars
created
mission and
detailed
breakthroughs in
timelines,
sustainable
adjusted
energy,
milestones,
but he
and
found
made
himself
sure that they were
constantly
hitting their
distracted.
targets.
There was
She
an
was the glue
internal
that held the team
restlessness,
together.
a
And
deep
Jake
sense of
often
yearning
found
that he
himself
couldn't
relying
shake.
on her
It wasn't about
skills to
technology.
keep the project
It wasn't
on
about
schedule.
changing the world
After
through
weeks
his
of grueling
companies or
work,
foundations.
the team finally
It was
had
something
a version
more.
of the prototype
One evening,
they felt
while
confident
reviewing
in.
the latest
It was time
progress
to
on
test it on a
SpaceX's
larger
Mars
scale.
plans,
The pressure
Elon
was
felt the weight of the
overwhelming.
world on his
This was the
shoulders.
moment that could
The
determine
urgency to
everything.
create a future
Would
for
their system
humanity
work?
beyond Earth had
Could
been
it
a
actually
driving force
deliver
for
on the
years.
promise of
But now,
sustainable energy
with his
efficiency?
newfound understanding
Jake
of the
paced
power of
nervously
love
in his
and
apartment,
compassion,
watching as
something
Sarah
inside
set
him
up the
told him he
final
needed to
configuration.
focus on a different
He had
kind of
seen the
future,
prototype in
one that
action
started
many
not in the
times,
stars,
but this was
but
different.
here,
This
on
was
Earth,
the real test,
among the people,
one that would prove
among the
whether their
suffering,
efforts had
the
paid
hopes,
off.
and
"I'm
dreams
ready,"
of humanity.
Sarah said.
He closed
Her
his
voice
laptop,
steady despite
rubbed
the
his
weight of the
eyes,
moment.
and leaned
Let's
back
see
in
if
his
this
chair.
thing actually
His
works.
mind drifted back
The
to the
room
day
fell
he had
silent
spent
as
in
the
that
team
small
gathered
village in
around the
India,
prototype.
where the
Mia
light of
was watching the
electricity had
analytics
literally
dashboard,
transformed
while David
lives.
monitored the
It wasn't the
interface.
first time he'd
Leo
seen the
adjusted
raw
the
power
hardware
of human
settings one
connection,
final time.
but that moment
Jake
had
held his
solidified
breath.
something
The
deep within
prototype
him,
hummed to
a
life,
calling that
and for
now
a
felt
brief,
impossible to
exhilarating
ignore.
moment,
Elon had
nothing
spent so
happened.
much of his life
Then,
chasing
slowly,
innovations in
the data
space,
began to appear on the
technology,
screen.
and sustainable
Energy consumption
energy.
levels,
But now he felt
efficiency
drawn to something
ratios,
deeper, a desire to
optimization
understand
status,
how he can
and then
truly help
a
people,
breakthrough.
not just
The
through
system
tech,
began to
but
learn.
through love,
It
through
adapted to its
kindness,
environment,
through grace.
adjusting
Could
energy
he be
output
both the
based on
visionary
real-time
inventor
usage.
and the
The
compassionate
feedback loop
human
Sarah
being?
had designed
Could his
kicked
calling
into
be
gear,
both
and
world-changing
the AI
and
started
spiritually
optimizing for
profound?
energy conservation.
As if in answer to
It
his
wasn't
questions,
perfect,
a few
but it
days
was
later,
working.
Elon
"Is this
attended
it?"
a small
Jake
gathering at a
whispered,
church in
a
his
smile
hometown of
spreading
Los
across his
Angeles.
face.
It wasn't his
Sarah,
first time
her
attending a
eyes wide
service,
with
but
disbelief,
this time,
looked
it
at
felt
him.
different.
"This is
The
it.
church was more
It's
intimate,
really working."
filled with people
David
who were there
grinned
not
and
for the
slapped Jake
spectacle
on the
of
back.
worship, but
"Told
for
you we
something
could do
more
it."
personal,
Mia's
a
eyes
genuine
were glued
desire
to
to
the
be in the
dashboard.
presence of something
"We've got
greater.
something here.
After the service,
We really do."
Elon lingered,
Jake stood there,
speaking with a
his
few
heart
of the
racing
attendees.
as he watched the
One of them,
prototype
a
come
young
to life
woman named
before him.
Sarah,
He
had
was
been a
seeing something
volunteer
that
at
had
the church
only
for years.
existed in his
She
mind
was
for
passionate
months,
about social
and now
justice,
it was real.
particularly focused
Even
on
with the success
empowering
of the
underprivileged
prototype, there
communities
was
with
still more work
educational
to be done.
resources
The
and
pilot
opportunities
program
for
with Tesla
spiritual
was
growth.
just around the corner,
Her words struck
and the
a chord
team
with
needed to
Elon.
iron out the last
You
few
know,
details.
Elon, making
she
sure
said.
the system was
People
ready
like
for
you have the
deployment.
power to do
There
so
would be
much.
no room for
But it's not
mistakes.
just about making
Jake's
a mark
mind
in the
raced
world
with what
with
was ahead.
technology.
He knew
It's
the
about
pressure
seeing
was
people
only
as
going to
people,
grow as
not
they
just
moved
problems
closer
to
to the
solve.
pilot launch.
That's the
But
change
he was
that's
ready.
needed.
The team was
Elon
ready.
stood quietly,
And no matter what,
absorbing her
they had
words.
already achieved
She
something
spoke with a
incredible.
clarity that reflected
Jake
the
woke
deep
up to the
faith
sound
she
of his
had,
phone
a
buzzing
faith rooted
furiously
not
on
in
the
doctrines or
nightstand.
dogma,
He groggily
but in a
reached
sense
for
of
it,
moral
blinking as the
responsibility to
screen lit
others.
up with
Her
multiple
passion reminded
notifications.
him of the
One name
spiritual
stood out
peace
among
he
the
had
rest:
experienced
Tesla.
during his own
His
moments
heart
of
skipped a
reflection.
beat.
He
It's
realized
time.
that this
A
journey
week
he had
ago,
begun,
they had
this
submitted
calling
their
to do
prototype
good
to
in the
Tesla for
world,
review.
needed to go
And now,
beyond even
after
the
what
scope
felt
of
like
his
an eternity
foundation's
of
work.
waiting,
It needed
Jake
to
was
come
about
from
to
a place
find
of
out
divine
whether they had made the
inspiration,
cut.
not just
He sat up
scientific
in
insight.
bed, rubbing
As they
his
spoke,
face, and
Sarah
quickly
shared her
tapped on
vision
the
of how
email
the
from
church was
Tesla.
helping people in need,
Subject:
not just through
confirmation
charitable
of pilot
donations,
program
but through
partnership.
mentorship programs,
We're
spiritual
impressed with the
guidance,
progress your
and by
team has
offering
made.
hope to those who
After
had none.
careful review,
Her words
we are
echoed
pleased
in
to inform
Elon's
you that
mind
we're
long
moving
after he
forward
left
with
the
the pilot
church that
program.
day.
That night, as Elon sat alone in his office once again, he felt a stirring in his soul. The questions about his purpose and his mission had only grown louder. Could he be both an inventor and a servant? Could his legacy be built on something more than just technology? Could he be the example of what it meant to not only create but to serve? The next morning, Elon made a decision. He called Kimball. "I've been thinking a lot, Kimball, about what I really want to do next," Elon said, his voice serious. "It's time for a change, a bigger change." Kimball, ever the grounding presence, was immediately interested. "What do you mean by that? You're already doing amazing things with the foundation and the companies." "I know, but there's something more I'm being called to do," Elon replied. "I've been feeling like I'm being led to serve more directly, to focus more on people and not just on tech. There's a spiritual side of this journey I can't ignore anymore." Kimball paused, sensing the gravity of Elon's words. "You've always been a visionary, Elon. But maybe it's time to combine your tech vision with something deeper. Maybe that's what the world really needs from you." The conversation continued, and Elon began to articulate a vision that had been quietly forming in his mind. He realized that the work he was doing through his companies and foundation could take a back seat for a while. There were still so many global challenges to solve, but now he understood that the most important work, his true calling, was to help people understand that they mattered, that love and kindness had the power to transform lives. This realization led Elon to a decision that would shape the rest of his life. He wanted to use his resources and influence to lead a movement, not just about technology, but about faith, love, and spiritual awakening. This movement would empower people to live more fulfilling lives, not just by solving technological problems, but by addressing the inner, human needs that so often went unnoticed. He knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be skeptics, critics, and challenges, but he also knew it was the right path. In the weeks that followed, Elon began to step away from some of his other projects to devote more time to this newfound calling. He attended more church services, read more about spiritual leaders and their teachings, and began to look for ways to combine his passion for technology with his growing commitment to spiritual service. His team at the foundation noticed the shift. Elon's emails became more personal, less about business and more about people. He started to speak more openly about his faith, not in a preachy way, but in a humble, authentic manner. It wasn't long before Elon took another bold step. He publicly announced a new initiative that would combine technology, compassion, and spirituality. It would aim to not only solve problems like hunger and poverty through innovation, but also help people heal from the inside out, creating spaces for spiritual growth, community, and service. Elon wanted to create a world where the breakthroughs of the future didn't just change the physical world, but changed hearts and minds as well. The announcement made headlines across the world. People were intrigued and even skeptical, but for Elon, this felt like the most significant moment of his life. He was stepping into the unknown, and we're guided by something far greater than his intellect or his career ambitions. And as he stood before a crowd at the launch event, the weight of his decision settled on him. It was no longer about launching rockets or building electric cars. It was about building something eternal, a movement of love, hope, and transformation. "Elon, you've built incredible things," the reporter said as the cameras clicked. "But this is something different. What do you hope this new journey will lead to?" Elon looked out at the crowd, his face serious yet peaceful. "I hope it leads to a world where people aren't just surviving, they're thriving. A world where we learn to love each other, to serve each other, and to build something that lasts forever. That's my mission now." And with that, a new horizon began to unfold. The announcement of Elon's new spiritual initiative sent ripples through the tech and philanthropic worlds. The mainstream media buzzed with speculation, and critics questioned whether this was simply a public relations stunt. Yet, amid the controversy, Elon's resolve remained unshaken. He knew that he was not embarking on this journey for accolades or approval. He was following a deeper calling. As the weeks went on, Elon threw himself into the mission with the same intensity he applied to his ventures in space or electric vehicles. But this time, his focus was different. It
Over
wasn't
the
about
next few weeks,
profitability
the
or
team
market
worked
share.
closely with
It was
Tesla
about
engineers
fostering
to
true
integrate
human
their system
connection
into
and
Tesla
bringing
vehicles and
transformative
homes.
change to
They
people's
conducted
lives,
real-world
not
tests,
just through
running
technology, but
simulations,
through
and
love and
refining their
faith.
prototype
His
based
team
on
at the
live
Elon
data.
Musk
But
Foundation,
no matter how
initially
prepared they thought
unsure
they
about the
were,
shift in
the
focus,
challenges kept
soon
coming.
became some of
The
his
system
most
sometimes
enthusiastic
failed to
supporters.
communicate with
The
Tesla
foundation's
software,
work in
and the
education,
energy
healthcare,
optimization wasn't
and sustainable
always as
energy
efficient as they'd
continued.
hoped.
But now
Jake
with an
stayed up
added
late,
emphasis on
staring at
community and
lines of
spiritual
code,
well-being,
running simulations,
Elon made it a point to
working
emphasize
alongside
the
his team
importance
to
of
fix the
mental and
problems.
emotional
They
health
pushed
in all his
themselves harder
initiatives.
than they ever
He
had
knew that
before.
without addressing
One
these
evening, as
aspects,
Jake
any
and Sarah
advancements
were
in
reviewing the
technology
system's
or infrastructure would
she
only
spoke
go
up.
so far.
I think we're
Elon's
close,
first major
she
project
said,
under this new
exhaustion in her
initiative was the
voice.
creation
The
of what he
data is
called
showing real
spaces of
improvements.
grace.
We just need to
Physical and
fine-tune
virtual
the user
spaces where
interface.
individuals
It's
could
a little
gather for
clunky
spiritual
right now.
growth,
Jake
community
nodded.
service,
Let's get
and
that
emotional
right.
healing.
I don't want
These
anything to
spaces
ruin
would
the user
combine the
experience.
latest in
It
sustainable
wasn't until
technology
the
with
third
places
week
of
testing
worship,
that the breakthrough
counseling,
came.
and
They had
personal
implemented
reflection.
a series
Elon's
of
vision was
refinements to the
clear:
interface
to create
and improve the
environments where
system's
technology
real-time
served
learning
humanity,
capabilities.
not the other way
Sarah and
around.
David worked
The launch
closely
of the
to
first
ensure the
space of
AI
grace
was
took
adapting
place in San
faster and
Francisco,
more
a
accurately.
city that had
Then,
always been a
late
hub of
one night,
innovation.
Leo called
The space
Jake
was
into
a
the lab.
stunning blend of
Jake,
modern
you need to
architecture
see
and
this.
natural elements.
Jake hurried down
Solar
the hall
panels,
to the lab,
energy-efficient
where Leo was
lighting,
standing next
and
to a
green
large
spaces
screen
filled with
displaying
native
live
plants.
data from the system.
Inside,
The
there were
interface was
areas
showing a
dedicated to
Tesla car
spiritual
connected to
workshops,
the AI system,
counseling rooms,
and the energy
and even a
consumption
small
was falling
chapel
steadily.
where people could
Leo
come
pointed
together
to
in
the
prayer
screen.
or meditation.
It's working.
It was a
The system
testament
is
to
actually
Elon's belief that the
optimizing
future
energy
of
in real time.
technology and
It's making
humanity was
smarter
deeply
decisions about power
interconnected,
usage
and that
and
innovation
reducing
could be a
waste.
force for
Jake's heart
healing and
raced.
unity.
For the first
Elon was
time,
there for the
everything
opening, of
clicked.
course.
They had
He
done
stood
it.
in front of the
system
crowd
was
that had
finally
gathered to
operating
witness
at
the
peak
event.
efficiency.
His usual
They had
air
just
of
made
confidence
history.
tempered by a sense
Sometimes
of humility.
the hardest moments
This
are
wasn't
the ones
about
that
him.
define us.
It was about
The
something
late
much
nights,
larger.
the doubts,
This is
the
not a
setbacks.
project,
They are
he
all
began.
part of the process.
His voice steady
but when
but full of
everything falls
conviction.
into place,
This is a
when all
calling.
the pieces
A calling
come
to
together,
create spaces
that's when the
where
real
love,
magic happens.
hope, and
And
healing
that's when you
are
know
just
that
as
all the
important as
sacrifice
innovation.
was worth it.
A calling to
The
build a
following
future
week,
that
the
honors
team
the
found
human
themselves
spirit
standing
as
in a
much as it
large,
honors the
sterile
advancements we
Tesla
make in
testing
technology.
facility.
We
The
can
hum
do
of
better,
machinery
and we
and the
must.
faint scent of metal
The
and
crowd
rubber
applauded,
filling the air.
but it wasn't
This
just
was
the
no
novelty of the
ordinary test
project
run.
that impressed them.
This was the moment
It
they'd
was the
all been
sincerity
working
with
for.
which Elon spoke.
Jake could feel the
It was
weight
clear
of the
that this was
situation
no
pressing
longer a
on
man
him.
obsessed
The
with the
team had
next
spent
big
countless
breakthrough in
hours
tech.
perfecting their
This was a
system.
man
But
seeking
now
to
they
make
were
a
about to see
profound
how it
impact
performed
on the
in
very
real-world
fabric of
conditions.
humanity.
Would it
The
live up
launch
to the
event was
promises
just
they'd
the
made to
beginning.
Tesla?
Over the
Would
next
the
several
AI
months,
truly
Elon
optimize
began to
energy
expand the
consumption
initiative,
in a way that could
partnering with
transform the
churches,
industry?
community
This is it,
organizations,
Sarah
and
said,
spiritual
her
leaders
voice
from
barely
around
a
the
whisper
world.
as she stood
Together,
next to him.
they would
Her
create
gaze
more
fixed on the
spaces of
Tesla
grace,
vehicles lined
each
up
one
ahead.
unique to its
This is the
location,
moment we've
but
been
united
waiting
in
for.
purpose.
Jake
Whether in the
nodded,
bustling
his
streets
throat
of New
tight
York
with
City or in a
anticipation.
quiet
They had
village in
spent months
Africa,
preparing,
the spaces
and
were
now,
designed to be
it was time to
sanctuaries
see
for
if their
people to
hard work
reflect,
could change the
connect,
world.
and
A
grow.
sleek
In
Model
the
S
midst of
stood
all
at the
this,
front of the
Elon
facility,
found
its
himself
shiny
confronted with
surface
new
gleaming
challenges,
under the harsh
challenges
overhead
he
lights.
hadn't anticipated.
Tesla engineers were
The more
gathered
he
around,
immersed himself in this
preparing
new
for the
mission,
first test.
the more he
Mia
realized
and
that
Leo
it
were
wasn't
by the
just
control
about the
panel,
spaces or the
ensuring the system
technology.
was synced with
It
the
was about
car's
changing
onboard
hearts.
systems.
And that,
David was
as
at
he
the
quickly
ready with a
learned,
tablet,
was no easy
monitoring
task.
the data that would
In
come
his
in
meetings
once the
with
test
religious
started.
leaders,
Jake
he
took a deep
encountered
breath.
differing views on
Okay,
faith and
let's do this.
spirituality.
The
Some
team
welcomed
moved
him
into
with
position.
open arms,
The car
seeing
was
his
prepped,
efforts
and
as a
all the
long
systems were
overdue
linked to the
marriage of
AI.
technology
The goal
and
was to see
spirituality.
how effectively
Others,
their energy
however,
optimization
were
system
skeptical,
worked in real
even
time
critical
as
of
the
his
car drove
motivations.
across different
You may
terrains
be
and
a genius
speeds.
in
If the
technology,
system could
Elon,
reduce energy
but that
waste
doesn't mean
without
you can lead
compromising
people to God.
performance, it
One
would prove
prominent
that their
pastor told
technology
him
was
during a
ready for
private
the
meeting.
world.
The
Elon
criticism
Musk was at
stung,
the front of the
but
room,
Elon knew it was
leaning
part of
against
the
a wall
process. He had always faced skepticism in his career, first with SpaceX, then with Tesla, and each time, he had proved the doubters wrong. This was no different. He was on a journey, and not everyone would understand or approve of it. But he believed that, in the end, the truth of his mission would speak for itself. One of the most challenging aspects of this new path was the internal struggle Elon began to face. He had always prided himself on his ability to think rationally, to solve problems using science and data. But now, he was being called to embrace something that could not be quantified or measured. Faith, love, and grace were intangible concepts that didn't fit neatly into the frameworks he had spent a lifetime building. At times, the conflict was overwhelming. He would find himself lying awake at night, wrestling with questions that seemed impossible to answer. How could he reconcile his drive for innovation with his growing commitment to something as elusive as faith? Could technology really serve the soul? Could his work in this new mission truly make a lasting difference? One night, as Elon sat in the quiet of his office, reflecting on these questions, a text message from his brother, Kimball, appeared on his phone. "How are you doing, bro?" The message read. Elon hesitated for a moment before typing his response. "Honestly, it's struggling. I know I'm doing the right thing, but it's harder than I thought. I can't always explain why I'm doing this. Sometimes I don't even understand it myself." Kimball's reply came almost immediately. "You're not alone in this. We're all just trying to figure it out, and that's okay. The path you're on, this is the right one. Trust that." Elon read the message several times, the words sinking in deeper with each reading. He had been so focused on figuring everything out, on having all the answers, that he had forgotten the most important part of the journey. Trust that the path would unfold, even when it didn't make sense. Trust that his purpose would become clearer as he walked in faith. The next morning, Elon made a decision. He would not let doubt hold him back. He would embrace the unknown, not as a challenge to be overcome, but as a gift. He would continue to build, to innovate, and to serve, but with a heart full of trust in something greater than himself. And so, with renewed conviction, Elon pressed forward. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a profound peace. He was on the right path, one that would lead him and the world to a future that was as spiritually fulfilling as it was technologically advanced. With each new step, Elon Musk was becoming more than a visionary. He was becoming a servant, a leader not only in innovation, but in compassion and faith. And with that, his journey was only just beginning. As Elon embraced his new mission with unwavering determination, the fruits of his labor began to show. The spaces of grace were becoming a symbol of hope in communities across the globe, and his vision for integrating faith, compassion, and technology was taking root. However, as with any profound transformation, the challenges were growing, both external and internal. Elon had always been a man of action. Whether it was launching rockets, building electric vehicles, or reimagining the future of human civilization, he was used to being in control. But now, as he delved deeper into the world of spiritual service, he realized that the forces at play were not ones he could control much more quickly. He was dealing with the unseen forces of faith, human emotion, and divine intervention. The forces that didn't always operate within the confines of logic and reason. At one of his regular meetings with spiritual advisors and leaders, a conversation began that would challenge his entire worldview. "Elon," said Father Michael, a Catholic priest who had become one of his closest mentors, "you are doing something truly remarkable. But you must understand, this work is not just about you. There are unseen forces at play here. Forces that guide us all, whether we are aware of them or not." Elon leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean by that?" Father Michael smiled gently, as though he had anticipated this question. "You see, Elon, the spiritual path is not one that can be entirely navigated by intellect or strategy alone. There are moments in this journey where you will be led, not by what you know, but by something deeper. Something that transcends your understanding. It's in those moments that you will need to trust the unseen forces." Elon, who had always relied on his sharp intellect and scientific reasoning to guide his decisions, felt a flicker of doubt. The idea of trusting something beyond his comprehension was, frankly, unsettling. "I've always believed in data, in facts, in what I can see and measure," Elon said slowly. "This is different. I'm not sure I understand." "You don't have to understand," Father Michael replied, his voice calm. "Sometimes, faith is about trusting when you cannot see the road ahead. And in those moments of uncertainty, the unseen forces, love, grace, and faith will guide you." The conversation left Elon contemplative. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of vulnerability. How could he, a man known for his ability to control the most complex technologies, surrender to something he couldn't fully understand? That night, as he sat in his office, office, but Elon reflected on Father Michael's responsiveness was improving. He felt a deep stirring in his soul, but it was accompanied by the same skepticism he had often felt when confronted with the mysteries of the universe, whether in science or faith. The question was, could he let go of his need for control? As Elon grappled with this inner conflict, something extraordinary happened that would shift his perspective in ways he could never have anticipated.
Jake hesitated.
One evening,
"We're close,
while visiting
but
one
not
of the
there yet.
spaces of grace in
more
Los
fine-tuning.
Angeles,
The system
Elon was
has to
approached by an
anticipate the
elderly
terrain
man who had been
changes
sitting
without any
quietly in
delays.
one of the counseling
Leo,
rooms.
who had
The
been
man
sitting
had an
quietly,
aura of peace
finally
about
spoke
him,
up.
as though
"We've been
he had
tweaking
spent
the response
decades
time,
in deep
but I
reflection.
think we need
He
to
was not
rethink our
one to speak
approach
often,
entirely.
but when
Maybe
he
we're
did,
focusing
his
too
words
much on the
carried a weight
algorithm
that
itself
demanded
and
attention.
not enough on the real-world
Mr. Musk,
variables."
the man
Jake
said,
frowned,
his voice
running a
gentle yet
hand through
firm.
his hair.
"I've been
He knew
following
Leo
your
had
work
a
for
point.
many years,
The AI
and
was
I know
working
you are
under
trying to
controlled
change the
conditions,
world.
but
But I
once it
want
was
you to
out in the
understand
world,
something
on
important."
highways and
The man
cities with
paused, as if
unpredictable
choosing
human
his
drivers.
words carefully.
That's when the real
The
challenge
greatest
would begin.
change you will
We
ever
can't
make will
afford to
not
overlook
be in the
anything,
technology you
Jake
create,
said,
but
his
in the
voice
hearts
firm.
you touch.
This isn't just
And
a test run
sometimes
anymore.
you must allow
This
the
is the
change to
beginning of
happen through
something
you,
huge.
rather than because
Tesla
of
wants
you.
to launch this
Elon
in
blinked,
real-world
taken
environments.
aback.
If we
He had
want to stay in
encountered
the game,
countless
we need
advisors,
to adapt
mentors,
faster.
and
The next
experts in
few
his
days
life.
felt like a
But this
blur of
man seemed to
endless
speak
work.
directly to his
The
soul.
team was
It was
practically
as if the
living at the
words were
Tesla
coming from a
facility,
place
running
beyond
simulations,
intellect, from somewhere
recalibrating
much
the
deeper.
AI,
The
and
man
testing it on
continued,
different tracks.
his eyes locking
With
with
each test,
Elon's.
the system
You're
got
not
better,
meant to control
but it
everything.
still wasn't
The
perfect.
power you seek
Every time
isn't in your
Jake thought they
intellect
were on
or
the
your
verge of a
inventions.
breakthrough,
It's in
another
your
issue would
ability to let
arise.
go,
Late
to
one
trust,
night,
and
as
to
Jake
allow
and
something
Sarah sat
greater
in the
than
lab
yourself to
surrounded
work
by
through you.
monitors
That is
displaying
where
lines of
true
code.
transformation
Sarah
begins.
spoke up, breaking
Elon
silence.
felt a wave of
"You're
emotion
pushing us
wash
too
over
hard,"
him.
she
It was
said,
as if the universe
her voice
itself
soft
had
but laced
conspired
with
to
concern.
deliver this message
all
at the
doing our
exact
best,
moment
but
he
if we
needed
keep
to
going
hear it
like
most.
this, we'll
He had
burn
spent
out.
so many
Jake
years
glanced
trying to
over at
force
her.
change,
Her
to
face was
dictate
pale
outcomes.
from lack of sleep.
But now,
Her
for the
eyes
first
bloodshot
time,
from days
he
of
understood
constant
that
work.
true
He
change
could
didn't
tell
come
she
from
was right,
force.
but
It
he
came
couldn't
from
shake
surrender.
the feeling that they
As
were
the man
so
finished
close to something
speaking,
monumental,
he offered
and he
Elon a
wasn't willing
simple
to back
smile.
down now.
"Remember,"
"I know,
he
Sarah.
said,
I'm
"the
sorry,"
greatest
he
inventions
said,
are the
his
ones that
voice
come from
quieter.
the heart.
But this is
Let your
everything.
heart lead you,
and
and the world
I don't
will
want to
follow."
mess it up.
The
If we
elderly
get this
man
right,
left the
we
space
change
shortly
everything.
after their
The
conversation,
industry, the way
but
people
Elon
think about
remained
energy.
in the room,
This could
absorbing
make
the
a
gravity
difference.
of the encounter.
Sarah didn't
For the
respond
first time in
immediately.
his life,
She just
he felt a
nodded,
deep sense of
understanding the
clarity,
pressure Jake felt.
like a veil
But she
had been
also knew
lifted
that
from his
pushing too
eyes.
hard could
His
lead to
life,
mistakes,
his
and
mission
they couldn't
had
afford to
never
make
been
more of
about the
those.
next big
"We've come
breakthrough
this
or
far,"
invention.
she said
It had
after a
always
pause.
been about connection,
But we need to make sure
about
we're
allowing
not
love,
sacrificing our
grace,
health and
and
sanity
faith
in the
to
process.
flow through him to others.
Jake stared at the
Elon
screen
knew
for
that
a
the
moment,
journey ahead
his
would
thoughts
not be
racing.
easy.
She was
There
right.
would still be
They
moments
couldn't
of
keep this
doubt,
pace up
moments
forever.
of struggle.
He needed to
But for
find
the
a
first
balance,
time,
not
he
just
felt
for
truly
himself,
at peace
but
with
for
the
the
path
whole
he was
team.
on.
"I'll
He
get
was
us
not
a break
alone in
after
this
this
journey.
test,"
The
Jake
unseen
promised,
forces,
even though he
love,
wasn't sure if he
faith,
could actually
and
follow
grace
through.
were
"Let's
guiding
just get
him.
this one
The
right."
next morning,
By the time the
Elon
next
made a
test
bold
arrived,
decision.
the
He
team
would
had
no
worked
longer
through
just
most of the
focus on the
remaining
projects
issues with the
or the
AI's
grand ideas.
responsiveness.
He would
They were
focus on
ready
the
to put
people.
the system
He
through
would
its
pour his
paces in
energy
a
into
real-world
building bridges
environment.
of connection,
This time,
allowing
they were
others to feel
testing
the
in downtown
transformative
Palo Alto.
power of love
Steep
and
hills,
faith.
crowded
He would focus on
intersections,
creating
and
spaces where
unpredictable
healing
traffic.
could take place,
It was the ultimate
not just
challenge.
physically,
Jake
but
stood at the
emotionally
edge of
and
the track,
spiritually.
watching
This
the car
decision
as it
marked a
prepared
shift
for
in
the
his
test.
approach.
He could feel
Rather
the
than
weight of the
striving
moment.
for immediate
Tesla
results,
was watching
Elon
closely.
embraced the process
Elon had
of
made it
allowing.
clear that
He
any
began
more
to trust
glitches
that,
would send
in
them back
time,
to square one.
the impact
The
of his
stakes
work
couldn't be
would be
higher.
felt not just
Ready
through
to
his
roll?
inventions,
Leo
but through
asked
the
as he
hearts and
approached,
minds of
his
those he
expression
touched.
serious.
Months
Jake
passed,
nodded.
and the
"Let's
spaces
do
of
it."
grace
The Model
continued to
South
flourish.
rolled onto the street,
People began to
merging
flock
into
to them,
traffic with
not
precision.
just for the technology,
Sarah,
but for the sense
Leo,
of peace
and
and
the rest of the
purpose
team
they found
gathered
there.
around the control
Through
panel,
counseling,
monitoring
prayer,
every variable,
and community
from
building,
energy efficiency
individuals
to system
began to
response time.
heal, to
The car drove
transform,
through tight
and to
city
rediscover
streets,
a sense of
weaving
hope.
through traffic,
But Elon knew
making
this
sharp
was
turns
only the
and
beginning.
climbing
There was
steep
still so
inclines.
much more to do.
The AI
Yet,
adjusted the
as he
vehicle's
stood at the
energy
helm of
usage
this
in real
growing
time,
movement, he felt
recalibrating
no
power
pressure,
flow as the car
no
shifted
burden.
from one kind
He had
of
learned to
terrain
trust
another.
the unseen
For the
forces
first
that
time,
guided him,
the system
knowing
felt
that the path
seamless,
ahead would
reacting
unfold
instantly
exactly
to
as it was
every
meant
change
to.
in the road.
And so,
Mia's
with
voice
renewed
came through
faith
the
and
intercom.
purpose,
The
Elon
data
Musk
is
continued
solid.
his journey,
We're maintaining
not just as an
performance, and
inventor,
energy
but as a
consumption is
servant of
lower than
something
it's
much
ever been.
greater than
Jake
himself.
couldn't help but
The
smile.
road was long,
For the
but with
first time
each
in
step,
weeks,
he felt
a
more
sense of
certain
hope.
than ever that
Just
he
as
was
the
walking
test was
in the
about
right
to wrap
direction.
up, a
In
black
the end,
Tesla Roadster
Elon
pulled
would
up
come to
beside the
realize
test
that the
track.
greatest
It was a
force
rare
of all
sight,
was not
and
the
Jake's
rockets he
stomach
launched
tightened
or the
when he
cars he
recognized the
designed,
driver.
but the
It was
invisible,
Elon Musk.
boundless love
Elon
that
had
had
been
always
watching
been
from a
there,
distance,
guiding
but
him
he wasn't
every
just
step of the
observing
way.
now.
The days and
getting
the
up
spaces
close
of
and
grace
personal.
had turned
The
into
car
weeks
slowed to a
and
stop,
weeks into
and
months.
Elon stepped out,
Elon had made
wearing his
significant
usual black
progress with his
t-shirt and
mission to
jeans,
bring
his
faith
face
and
a
innovation
massive
together.
focus.
But the
He
journey
walked
was
over to
anything
Jake
but
and the
smooth.
team,
The
his
deeper he
eyes
delved
scanning
into
the
the
data on the
spiritual side
screens.
of his work,
Well,
the more
he said,
complex and
giving them a
demanding it
look that was
became.
hard to
It
interpret.
wasn't just about
This is
building and
interesting.
expanding.
Jake's pulse
It was about
quickened.
being
We're getting
transformed
there.
from the inside
The
out.
system is
And
performing
as time
well,
wore on,
but there's still
Elon
room
began
for
to realize
improvement.
that the hardest
Elon
test of
raised an
all
eyebrow.
was not just in his
Improvement is
ability to
good,
lead,
but I need
but
to
in
know
his
if you can
ability
scale
to
this.
trust.
Can
The
your
world
system
was
work
watching.
on a global
His
scale?
name,
Can it
synonymous
manage the
with
energy
innovation,
demands of
was now
millions of
linked with a new
vehicles and
kind of
homes,
mission,
all
a
connected in
spiritual
real
one.
time?
His latest
Jake
project,
hesitated.
an even
His
grander
confidence
space of
wavered
grace
for a
that would be
moment.
built in the
We're
heart of
working
New
on
York
that.
City,
We've
was
built the
his
system to
boldest yet.
scale.
But
It
even
learns
with
and
all
adapts
his success
faster
in
the more data it
technology,
receives.
Elon could feel
But
a
we're not
growing
there
pressure
yet.
mounting
We
as
need
this
more time
project
to
neared
refine
its
it.
completion.
Elon
The
studied
media,
him for a
his
long
colleagues,
moment.
and
You've got
even
the
his
right
own
idea,
friends began to
but
ask
the world
questions.
doesn't wait.
Could a man
If you
so
want to get this
focused
out
on
there,
technology
you need to
truly
move
understand
faster.
the deep,
Jake took
often
a deep breath.
unseen
The
needs
pressure
of the
was
human
unbearable.
spirit?
But
Was this
Elon
just
was
another
right.
one of his
They
ventures,
couldn't afford to
or was it
hesitate.
something more?
We'll speed
Elon
up,
found
Jake
himself
said
questioning
firmly,
his own
meeting
motives,
Elon's gaze.
unsure if his efforts
We'll
to
make it
build
work.
these sanctuaries were
Elon
truly
nodded,
rooted in faith,
offering a
or
faint,
simply his desire to
almost
change the world.
imperceptible smile.
The self-doubt began
Good.
to creep in,
Because when you're working
gnawing
with
at him
Tesla,
at night when
you
he
don't
was
get
alone
second
in his
chances.
thoughts.
The
As he
days
sat in his
following
office,
Elon's visit
staring
were a
at the
blur of
plans for the
activity.
New York space
Jake
of
couldn't
grace,
shake the
he
feeling
couldn't
that they
help
were
but
on the
wonder
cusp
if
of
this
something
whole mission
huge.
was nothing
But the
more than a
constant
distraction,
pressure to deliver
a
was
way to
wearing
make
him
up for the
thin.
emptiness
The
he
team had
sometimes felt
finally
in the
worked through
face
the
of his
last
great
of the
success.
glitches with the
Am I
AI's
doing the
real-time
right thing?
adaptability.
He thought to
The
himself,
system was running
as his
smoother than
fingers
it
ran
ever
across
had.
the edges
But
of
Jake
the
knew
blueprint.
it wasn't enough
Or
to
am I
just
just
be good.
chasing the next
They
big
needed to
thing
be
again?
flawless.
It was
Elon's
in the midst
words
of
were
this
never
inner
far from his
turmoil that
mind.
Elon had
You
a
don't get second
conversation that would
chances.
change everything.
That night,
It was a
after
quiet
another
morning,
exhausting round
and
of
Elon
tests,
was meeting
Jake
with his
found himself
spiritual
staring at
advisor,
his computer
Father
screen,
Michael.
reviewing
Elon
the
had
feedback
always
from the team.
appreciated Father
The
Michael's
numbers were
calm
looking
demeanor
good.
and
The energy
unwavering faith,
optimization system
but this
was
time,
performing
he
better
felt
than
a growing
expected.
sense of
But Jake
unease
knew
as
that
he sat
wasn't the
across
full
from
picture.
him. I'm
The real
struggling,
challenge was
Father,
still ahead.
Elon admitted,
Scaling the system
his
to
voice
a level
carrying
that
a
could
rare
handle the
vulnerability.
demands of millions
I
of
thought I
vehicles,
understood why I'm
people,
doing
and
this,
households.
why I'm trying to
Jake,
change the world
we
in
need
this
to
way.
talk.
But
Sarah's
lately,
voice broke
I'm not
through his
sure
thoughts.
anymore.
He
I feel
glanced
like
up
I'm
to see
being
her
pulled in two
standing in the
directions.
doorway of his office,
The work I do
a
in
concerned
technology
look on her
feels so
face.
concrete,
He motioned
so
for her to
real.
come in.
But this
What's
spiritual
up?
journey,
Sarah
it feels
stepped
less
inside,
tangible.
closing
How
the
can
door
I lead
behind
people
her.
to something I
I've
can't
been
even
thinking,
fully grasp
she
myself?
Sitting
Father
down
Michael
across
listened
from him.
attentively,
You're pushing
nodding
us all
slowly.
harder than we've
Elon,
ever been
what
pushed
you are
before.
experiencing
And
is a
yes,
test of faith.
we're seeing results.
The journey you are
But I'm
on
worried
is
that we're
not one
burning
that can
out.
be measured
We
with
can't keep
data
going
or
at this
controlled
pace.
with intellect.
Jake's jaw
It is a
tightened.
journey that
He
requires
had expected
trust,
this
trust in
conversation.
something far
The team was
greater
feeling
than
your
yourself.
strength. He
But
could
how do
see
you
it in their
trust when you
tired
can't
eyes.
see where the
way
road
they
is
moved
leading?
more slowly,
Elon asked,
their
his
hands
eyes
trembling
searching
from
for an
too many
answer.
sleepless nights.
Father Michael
But the
smiled
pressure
softly.
wasn't just coming
That's the
from
heart
him.
of faith.
It was coming
It's
from the
not
top.
about seeing the way
I know,
ahead with
Sarah,
certainty.
Jake said,
It's about knowing
rubbing
that,
his forehead.
even when the path
But we're
is
so
unclear,
close.
you are
I can
being
feel it.
guided by something
Elon wants
deeper than your
results,
own
and
understanding.
I don't want to let him
You must let
or
go of the
anyone
need
down.
for control.
Sarah sighed
Surrender.
and leaned back in her
Elon
chair.
sat in
I
silence,
get that.
the
We
weight
all
of Father
do.
Michael's
But this-
words settling
this
in his
obsession with
chest.
perfection.
Let go.
It's taking
Surrender.
a toll.
These
We
were
can't
not
just throw
words he was
everything at
accustomed
this
to
and hope it
hearing,
works.
especially
If we're
not
going
in
to
the
do
context
this,
of his
we
high
need to do it
stakes,
right.
always
Not just
moving
for
world
Tesla,
of business
but
and
for
technology.
ourselves too.
I've always
Jake
believed
stared
in
at her,
being in
the
control
weight
of my
the decision
destiny,
pressing
Elon
down on
said,
him.
his
She
voice
was
soft.
right. He
That's
could
what's
feel
gotten
the
me this
exhaustion
far.
building,
How
not
can I
just in
suddenly
himself,
trust something
but
I
in the
can't
team
even
as a
see?
whole.
Father
But the
Michael
stakes were
looked
so
him in
high.
the eye,
If they
his
didn't
expression
succeed,
filled with
everything they had
compassion.
worked for would
You've been
crumble.
given
Jake
extraordinary vision yesterday. But sometimes, even the most visionary leaders must learn to follow.
Scale back.
Trust that you are not alone in pushing forward. There is a purpose to your journey, even if you can't see it right now.
Her eyes
The
softening.
conversation left Elon both unsettled
and
relieved.
It's not just
The
about
tension
the
within
technology.
him had not
It's about the
dissipated,
people.
but there was
The
a
next
shift,
week brought with
a
it
quiet
an entirely
stirring that
new
began
set
to
of
grow in
challenges.
his heart.
The media
A
had
flicker
caught
of
wind of
understanding.
Tesla's upcoming
He
project,
wasn't supposed to
and
have all the
speculation was
answers.
running wild.
It was okay
The
to
team
be
was under the
uncertain.
spotlight
It was
now,
okay to
not
step
just from
forward
Elon
in
Musk,
faith,
but
even
from
when
the
he didn't
entire
have a
world.
clear picture
Every
of what lay
decision,
ahead.
every
As
test,
days turned
every
into weeks,
misstep was being
the internal
watched and
battle
analyzed by
continued.
millions.
But Elon's
Jake had
understanding
always known
began
that
to
working at
evolve.
the cutting
He
edge
started
meant
to
walking the
recognize the
fine
difference
line
between faith
success
as
and
a
failure.
concept and
But
faith
now,
as a practice.
that line felt
He had
more
always
like a
admired
tightrope,
people who
and he
held
could
deep
feel the wind
convictions,
threatening
who
to knock
trusted
them
in
off
something
course.
greater than themselves.
The first round of
But
press
now,
releases came
he was
through,
beginning to
all
experience
focusing
that
on
kind of
Tesla's
faith for
secret of new
himself.
technology that would
Elon's
revolutionize
breakthrough
the
came
energy
in an
sector.
unexpected
The
way.
excitement was
One
palpable.
afternoon, on, as he stood in the construction site of the New York space of grace, surrounded by scaffolding and half-built walls. He overheard a conversation between two of the workers. I've never been to church before, one of the men was saying, but there's something about this place. I've been coming here every day, and I feel different, more at peace, you know? The other man nodded. Yeah, I get it. I've been going through some rough stuff, but when I walk in here, it's like a weight lifts off my shoulders. I don't know what it is, but I feel like I'm supposed to be here. Elon stood still, listening to the exchange. It wasn't the kind of conversation he had expected to hear on a construction site. But in that moment, he realized something profound. The spaces he was building were not just structures of steel and glass. They were vessels for something deeper. But they were a place where people could come to experience peace, healing, and hope. The words of the workers echoed in his mind long after the conversation ended. The work he was doing wasn't just about the technology or the design. It was about creating a space for people to experience a connection to something greater than themselves. It was about offering them a place to heal, to reflect, and to trust. Just as he was learning to do. That evening, as Elon stood alone in the nearly completed building, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. The doubts were still there, but now they felt different. They weren't barriers anymore. They were challenges, tests of faith that he had to pass in order to continue the journey. In that quiet space, Elon made a decision. He would continue to build these spaces. Not because he had all the answers, but because he believed in the power of faith, love, and human connection. He would trust that the unseen forces were guiding him, even when the way ahead seemed unclear. The test of faith was not over, but for the first time, Elon Musk felt that he was truly on the right path. And with each step forward, he knew that the journey would lead him to something greater than he could ever have imagined. Elon Musk stood at the pinnacle of his journey, both physically and spiritually. The New York space of grace had opened its doors to the public, and as anticipated, it became an overwhelming success. People from all walks of life visited the space, many seeking solace, peace, and answers that they could not find in the fast-paced, technology-driven world outside. As the sanctuary flourished, Elon felt a growing sense of fulfillment, but also an unsettling awareness that the journey was far from over. Despite the outward success of his spiritual initiatives, Elon was facing a new and unexpected challenge. The deeper he ventured into the world of faith and compassion, the more he realized that the world he had come to know, one governed by science, logic, and measurable outcomes, did not always translate into the realm of the heart and spirit. His mind, always eager for solutions and systems, found it hard to reconcile the idea of surrendering to forces he could not control or quantify. Yet, as he stood in the grand hall of the space of grace in New York, surrounded by people experiencing transformation and healing, he realized that this was the heart of it all. This was the purpose he had been seeking, even if it meant embracing uncertainty. In the weeks following the opening, Elon continued to reflect on the lessons he had learned so far. But as with all great transformations, he was soon confronted with another obstacle, one that would force him to take his faith to an even deeper level. It began with a call he had received from a close friend, an influential figure in the tech world, someone Elon had always respected and admired. The call, however, was not about business or innovation. It was about Elon's recent endeavors, specifically his growing association with faith-based initiatives. Elon, I've been hearing a lot about your new Space of Grace projects, and I have to say, I'm concerned, his friend said. Jake was a whirlwind of anxiety. You're a visionary. You've changed the world with Tesla and SpaceX. But this is different. This is risky. I've seen it happen before. People dive into these kinds of projects with the best intentions, but they end up getting lost. You're not a preacher, Elon. You're a scientist, a businessman. Elon listened quietly, a familiar unease creeping in. He had heard these concerns before, but this conversation felt different. His friend wasn't just questioning his motives. He was challenging his very purpose. You've always been about the future, Elon, his friend continued, about pushing humanity forward, beyond what we think is possible. But this feels like you're retreating into something that doesn't have any real solutions. What happens if this whole thing falls apart?
He could tell she was
What
just
happens
as
if
nervous
people
as
start
he was.
questioning your
The
intentions?
team had been working
You
at
could lose
maximum
everything.
capacity for
The
weeks,
words hit harder than
sacrificing
Elon had
sleep
anticipated.
and personal lives
For a
this
moment,
one moment.
he was
But no
paralyzed
matter how
by
much
doubt.
they tested,
The same
no matter
doubt
how
that
many
had
hours
plagued
they
him in the
logged,
past.
there was always
Was he
that
truly
doubt.
on the right
The
path?
fear of the
Was
unknown.
this all just a
The fear that
distraction
something would
from
go
his
wrong
greater
at the
purpose?
worst possible
Before he
time.
could respond,
I trust you
his
all,
friend added,
Jake said.
I don't want to see
His
you
voice
throw away
barely above a
everything you've
whisper.
worked for.
Let's do this.
You're meant to change the world,
With a deep breath,
not chase
Jake
after something
slid into the
intangible.
driver's seat.
The call
the familiar
ended,
feeling
and
of the
Elon
car's
sat
leather
in
interior
silence,
grounding
the
him
weight
for
of
a
the
moment.
conversation
He was
pressing
the one
down
who
on
had
him.
to initiate
He had
the
always
test.
known that his
The AI,
spiritual journey
the
would be
system
met
they'd
with
spent so many
skepticism,
sleepless
but this
nights
was
perfecting,
different.
was
This
ready
wasn't
to
just
take
the
over
usual
once the car
backlash from the
started
tech
moving.
world.
He glanced
This was
around
someone
at
who
the
knew
team,
him deeply,
giving them a
who
nod.
understood his
Leo
potential
was
and was
manning
now
the control
questioning the
panel,
very
his
foundation
fingers
of his
hovering
mission.
over the
For
console.
days,
Sarah
Elon
and Mia
wrestled
were
with the
watching the
words of his
screens,
friend.
their eyes
The doubts
scanning
were
for
louder
any
than ever,
anomalies.
and he began
Everyone
to
was in
question the
position.
very mission
Everyone
that had
was
brought
ready.
him so
Jake
much
pressed the
peace and
ignition
purpose.
The
Could
car
he
hummed to
continue
life.
this journey when
System is
everything
online.
he had built,
Mia's voice
his legacy,
echoed through the
his
intercom.
companies,
We're
his
good to
future,
go.
was at
Jake
risk?
gave the car
It was
a
during
gentle
one of
push
his
forward,
darkest moments,
the wheels
standing
slowly
alone
rolling
in the
over
empty
pavement.
chapel of the New
The
York
first few
space of
moments were
grace,
smooth.
that Elon
Everything
found
was
the
working,
answer.
just like
He
it
had come
should.
to the space
But
to
Jake
clear
knew
his
better than
mind,
to get
to
complacent.
reflect in solitude.
There was a long way to
The
go.
room,
The car
bathed in the
navigated the
soft
streets
glow
of
of
Palo
candles,
Alto with
was
precision.
silent except
The
for the
AI
distant
was
hum of the
responding
city
to every
outside.
curve,
As he
every
sat
stop
down
sign,
in one of the pews,
every
a
intersection
familiar
with a grace
feeling
that
of
made Jake's
peace
heart
washed
race
over
with
him.
excitement.
It wasn't the kind
vehicle's
of peace
energy
he had felt
management
when
system was
launching a
working
successful
flawlessly,
rocket or
adjusting in
achieving
real
a new
time as
business
the terrain
milestone.
shifted.
It was deeper.
Smooth.
It was a
Too
calm
smooth.
that reached
As
into
the
his
car
soul,
approached a
beyond
sharp
his
turn,
doubts and
Jake's
fears.
fingers gripped the
In that
wheel.
moment,
His knuckles
Elon
white.
closed his
This
eyes
was the
and
moment.
began to pray.
Would the AI
Not in
react
any
fast
formal
enough?
sense,
Would it
but in a
calculate the
quiet
best way to
conversation
handle the
with the
sudden
greater
change in
force that
speed
had been
and
guiding
incline?
him?
The car
I don't
took
know
the
if I'm
turn
doing the
flawlessly.
right thing,
Jake
he
couldn't
whispered.
help but let out
I
a
don't know
breath
if I'm
he
meant to
didn't
lead
realize
people
he
in
had
this
been
way.
holding.
But I do
We've
know
got it,
this.
Sarah
I
said
can't keep
softly,
chasing the same
almost in
dreams.
disbelief.
I've seen
But
what
just as
happens when
Jake
I push
started to
forward
relax,
with just my
the
mind,
unexpected
with just my
happened.
vision.
The car's
But when I
sensors
surrender to
detected
something
an
bigger
anomaly
than
ahead,
myself,
an issue
something
they hadn't
unexpected
planned for.
happens.
A
Lives are
cyclist,
changed.
weaving erratically,
People are healed.
came into view.
I feel a deep sense
His
of
movements
peace.
unpredictable.
As he sat there in the
AI
quiet
should have
stillness,
reacted in time,
something
but
profound
the system
happened.
hesitated.
It was as if the
For a
weight of
split
his
second,
doubts was lifted,
Jake felt the
and
car
in its
slow,
place,
as if
there was an
unsure of what to do.
undeniable sense
That
of
hesitation
clarity.
was enough
For the
to
first
send a
time,
wave of panic
Elon
through him.
realized that his true
No,
mission was
he
not about
muttered under
proving
his
something
breath,
to the
willing
world
the car
or
to
achieving the
react.
next big
But
breakthrough.
then it did.
It was about
The
living
AI
out the truth of
recalibrated,
what he had learned.
shifting into a
That
safe
faith,
lane and avoiding
love,
the cyclist
and
with
connection
inches
were the
to
most
spare.
powerful
The car
forces on Earth.
accelerated smoothly,
With a sense of
and the
calm
anomaly was
certainty,
over.
Elon
Jake
made a
exhaled
decision.
deeply,
He would
but his
continue on
hands
this
were
path,
shaking.
not because
What the
it was
hell was
easy,
that?
but because
Leo
it was the
was
right
already
thing to
scanning
do.
the system
He would
logs.
trust the unseen
The algorithm
forces,
didn't
even when
factor
he
in the
couldn't
cyclist's
fully understand
unpredictable
them.
movement.
He would put his
We need
faith
to
in the
adjust the
journey,
system for
knowing
that
that
kind
it
of
wasn't
behavior.
about the
Can we
destination.
fix it on the
It was
fly?
about the transformation
Jake
along
asked,
the way.
his eyes
The
darting
decision
between
marked
the
a
road
turning
and the
point.
control panel.
Elon began to
It's
see
a
his
quick
mission
fix,
in a new
Leo
light.
replied.
The
But
spaces
we'll
of
need to
grace were
recalibrate
not
a
just
few
places of
parameters.
refuge for
The
those
rest
who
of the
sought
test
healing.
went smoothly,
They were
but the
spaces
glitch
of
was on
transformation
Jake's
for
mind
him,
the entire
too.
time.
Through
The car
each
was
challenge,
handling
through
everything
each
else
doubt,
perfectly.
Elon
But
was
that
being
brief
shaped
moment
into
of
something
hesitation
greater
had
than the
shaken
tech
him.
mogul the
He knew
world
that
had
this was
known.
the kind of issue
It
that
wasn't
could
about
easily
abandoning the
escalate
world
into
of
something far
technology.
worse.
It was
The
about
system had to
integrating
be
it
able
with a
to
deeper
anticipate
purpose.
and react
It was
to
about using his
unpredictable human
influence to
behavior,
help people
not just
rediscover
ideal
connection,
scenarios.
healing,
Back at the
and hope.
facility,
He
the
had
team
always
went straight
believed
into
that
damage
humanity
control
could
mode.
achieve the
Leo
impossible,
and Mia
but
dove
now,
into the code
he
while
was
Sarah
learning
ran
that
a
the
series of
greatest
diagnostics
possibilities
to
lay
isolate
not
the
in
issue.
technology,
Jake
but in
stood
the
off to
power
the
of the
side,
human heart.
His arms
As
crossed,
Elon stood up from the
watching them
pew
work.
and
"We
walked
need
out
to
of the chapel,
reprogram the
he
system's
felt a
behavior
renewed sense of
algorithms,"
purpose.
Mia said,
He was
pulling
no
up a new
longer
set of
seeking
parameters on the
validation from the
screen.
outside
It's
world.
not enough to just
His path
follow
had
road
been made
signs and
clear,
track patterns.
and he was ready
The
to walk
system
it
needs to predict
fully,
what humans might do.
wholeheartedly,
Jake
and with
nodded.
faith.
That's
And
exactly
so,
what we're
with a
missing.
quiet resolve,
It's not just
Elon
about
Musk
reacting
took
to
the
data.
next step
It's about
forward,
anticipating
knowing
the
that the
chaos
true
of the
leap
real
of faith
world.
was not in
People
what
are
he could build with his
unpredictable.
hands,
They worked
but in
in
what he
silence
could
for
build
hours,
with his heart.
reprogramming
The world was
and
watching,
recalibrating.
but this time,
The pressure
it
was
didn't
palpable.
matter.
The
His
media
mission
was
wasn't for
already
the
buzzing
world's
about the
approval.
project,
It was
and
for
Elon
something
had
much
made it
greater,
clear that there was
a
no
purpose
room
that
for error.
transcended
By the
all
time
he
the
had
night
ever
shift
known.
came around,
Months
the team
passed,
was
and the
exhausted,
space of
but they
grace
had
in
a
New
new
York
solution.
City was now
The
a
AI would
thriving
now adjust its
sanctuary,
behavior based
one that
not
had
just
touched
on
the
static
hearts of
data,
thousands.
but on live
Elon
feedback
Musk,
from real-time
once the man
human
known
actions.
for his high-tech
The system would
innovations,
learn to
was now a
adapt to
different
those
kind of
actions,
leader. He had
anticipating
embraced
sudden
the
changes in
unexpected,
behavior.
surrendering
It
to
was
the
time for
spiritual
another
calling
test.
that had
This
awakened in
time,
him. They were
even
ready.
when it challenged
Jake
his
sat in the
need for
driver's
control.
seat again.
He was no
Though he felt
longer
a
just
sense
the
of
face
calm
of
he
Tesla
hadn't
or
experienced
SpaceX.
before.
He was
The
becoming
team
a
was standing
quiet
by,
guide to those
waiting
searching
for the
for something
results.
deeper.
He started
Something
the
that
car and set it
transcended
into
the material
motion,
world.
this time
But with the
an
growth
added
of the
level
spaces of
confidence.
grace
The
came
road ahead
growing
was
opposition.
familiar, but this
Many
time,
people still
they had
questioned
more
the
confidence
sincerity
in
of
the
Elon's
AI's
mission.
ability to handle
Was he truly
unexpected
acting from
obstacles.
faith? Or
As
was
the
he
car
simply
navigated
using
through the
religion
streets,
as another branding
Jake saw
opportunity?
a jogger crossing
Others who
ahead.
had once been
In the
close to
past,
him in the tech
this might have
world
been a
felt that
simple
Elon's
obstacle,
spiritual
something to
journey was a
swerve around.
dangerous
But
diversion
with the
from his
new
larger-than-life
the
potential.
system anticipated
Yet,
the jogger's
Elon
pace
had long
and
since
adjusted the
made
car's
peace with
speed
this
accordingly,
scrutiny. He
ensuring there was
continued to
no
build
need for a
spaces of
sudden
healing,
maneuver.
pouring
The
more
car
energy
continued
into
on
these
its journey,
projects than ever
weaving through
before,
tight corners
but without
and
any
reacting
expectation
to
of
every
immediate
human-driven
results.
vehicle on the road
He
with
found deep
fluidity
satisfaction
and
in the
precision.
quiet,
This is it,
transformative
Sarah
moments,
whispered into
like
Jake's
the tears of
earpiece.
gratitude from
It's
a mother
working.
whose child
For
had
the
been
first
healed,
time in days,
or the quiet,
Jake allowed himself
meditative
a smile.
moments shared
But just
between
as he
people
thought
who
they
had
might
lost their
finally
way
have it,
and had found new
another
hope.
cyclist
But
appeared.
even in the midst
This
of
time
this peace,
swerving into the
a new
street
challenge
without
was
warning.
coming.
The AI
One that would
hesitated
push
for
Elon
only a
further
moment,
than he had
and then
ever
it
imagined.
did something
It was
Jake
late
wasn't
one
expecting.
evening when Elon
It
received an
accelerated.
unexpected call.
Wait, what?
A call that would
Jake
alter
said
the course
aloud,
of his journey.
his hands
His heart
instinctively
skipped a beat
tightening
as
on
he
the wheel.
recognized the number
But
on the
before he
screen.
could react,
It was
the
Father
car
Michael,
adjusted once
his
more,
mentor and
swerving out of the
spiritual
way
guide.
just in time
The
to
priest's
avoid
voice
hitting
sounded
the
urgent.
cyclist. The
Elon,
system had predicted
I
the
need you to
sudden
listen to me
movement,
carefully,
recalibrated
Father
the path,
Michael said,
and
his
reacted
tone
faster
serious.
than Jake could process.
There's a man,
The team
an
cheered as the
influential
car
figure,
continued its
who
path,
needs your help.
now fully
He's
in
come to the
control.
space of grace
Back
in
at the
New
lab,
York, and
the
he's on the
tension in the
brink
room
of
dissolved.
despair.
The
He's
test
been
had
through
gone
an
better than
unimaginable
anyone could have
personal
hoped
crisis,
for.
and
The
nothing
system
seems
wasn't
to have
just
worked
good.
for him so
It
far.
was incredible.
We believe that you're
Jake's
the one
heart
who
was
can
still
help
pounding,
him, but it's
but
going
this
to
time it
require
was from
everything
excitement,
you've learned.
not fear.
It's going to
They had
require
done it.
not just
They
your
had created
mind,
something that
but
could
your
change
heart.
the world.
Elon's
As the
mind
team
raced.
gathered around,
Who could this man
Elon
be?
Musk appeared
And
again,
why was Father
this time
Michael
in
so
person.
adamant that
He
he
didn't
could
need
help
to say
him?
much.
Father Michael
His expression
continued,
said it all.
explaining that
He'd
this
seen
man
enough.
was a billionaire
Well done,
entrepreneur,
Elon
much
said
like
with a grin.
Elon.
This
But
is
he had lost
exactly what I was
everything.
hoping for.
His empire was
Jake
crumbling,
let out a breath
and his
he didn't
personal
realize
life was
he'd
in
been
tatters.
We couldn't
Desperate
have
for a
done it
way out,
without the
the
team.
man had come to the
Elon
space
nodded,
of grace,
his face
but he had
serious
closed
but
himself
pleased.
off from
Now,
everything,
let's make
unable
sure the
to
world
accept
knows
the
about
healing
it.
that others
Jake
had
hadn't
found.
been able to sleep
He's not
since
going
the
to
breakthrough.
respond to your
The
usual
team had made
tactics,
history,
Father
no
Michael
doubt about
warned.
it. But
This
the
isn't about
excitement,
offering
the
solutions
pride,
or
and the relief
technology.
that followed
This is
didn't
about
erase the weight
compassion,
of what was still to
patience,
come.
and showing
The
him
product
that
was
there is
ready.
hope,
The AI
even
was
when
performing
everything seems
perfectly,
lost.
and Elon had
Elon's
given
heart
his
tightened.
approval.
He
But there
knew
was
what
still
Father
one
Michael was
massive hurdle
asking of
left to
him.
overcome.
He had spent his life
Scaling it up
solving
for mass
problems,
production.
fixing
Jake
things,
sat in his office,
creating
eyes
solutions.
glued to his
But this
laptop screen.
This was
The
different.
feedback from the
This
test
was
run
about
had
reaching
been
the man's
overwhelmingly
heart.
positive.
This was about
and the
something
project
far
was
beyond the
officially
rational,
moving forward.
far beyond
Yet,
what Elon was
something
used
gnawed at
to.
him.
He
There
agreed
was
to meet the
something they
man
had
the next
overlooked.
morning, but the
Something
meeting
crucial
filled
that,
him with
if
anxiety.
ignored,
How
could
could he
unravel
offer help when he
everything
had
they
no
worked
answers?
for.
How
He
could he
leaned back
offer
in his
hope
chair,
when he,
his
too,
thoughts racing.
had
They
struggled
had
with
just
his own
one shot
doubts?
to make this
The
work.
next day,
Elon wasn't
Elon
going to
arrived
wait
at the
forever,
space of grace
and
early,
investors were
his
already
mind
salivating
swirling
over
with
the potential
questions.
returns.
Father
If they
Michael
didn't meet
introduced
the
him to the
upcoming
man.
deadlines,
His
the
name
whole
was
project
Thomas,
would become
a
nothing
successful
more than a
entrepreneur
footnote
who
in
had once
Tesla's
seemed
history.
invincible.
The last
But
few
now
days
he
had been
looked like a
blur of
broken
activity.
shell of the person
Interviews
he had
with the
once
press,
been. His
meetings
eyes
with
were
engineers,
hollow, and his
conference
shoulders
calls,
slumped
and
with the
constant
weight of
media
a
hype.
failure he
Every
couldn't
headline
escape.
seemed to
For
carry
a
a
long
more
moment,
incredible
the
promise
two
than
men
the
sat in
last.
silence,
But Jake knew
neither
that as
knowing
soon as
what
they
to
went
say.
public, there
Elon
would
had
be
been
no
trained to
turning
take
back.
action,
The
to
next
think
morning,
strategically,
Elon
to
showed
find
up
solutions.
unexpectedly.
But
He
this
walked
moment
into the
required
lab with
something
his usual
entirely
quiet
different:
intensity,
stillness,
his presence making
empathy,
everyone
and
pause.
listening.
Jake
As they
looked
sat
up
in the
from his
quiet,
desk,
Elon
trying to
began to
suppress
feel
the weight of Thomas's pain. He didn't need to fix it. He needed to be present with it. After what felt like an eternity, Elon spoke softly. I know what it feels like to lose everything, he said, his voice steady but filled with compassion.
What's on your mind?
I've been there myself.
Elon didn't
I've
waste
experienced
any
the
time.
emptiness of
The product
chasing
is
after
good,
something that
but
doesn't
good isn't
truly
enough.
fulfill you.
We need to
But
start
I also
thinking
know
bigger.
that in those moments,
This isn't just
there's
about a few
always
cars,
a chance to
or
start
even a
over.
few thousand.
It's not the
This
end
is
of the
about
road.
changing the
It's a
entire
beginning.
energy infrastructure.
Thomas's
I want
eyes
this to
flickered
work
with
for
something
every
that
home,
resembled hope,
every business,
though it was
everywhere.
buried deep.
Jake's
You
pulse
don't
quickened.
understand,
The scale
he
Elon
said,
was talking
his
about
voice
was
cracking.
huge.
I've
Too
lost
big
it
to even
all, my
imagine right
family,
now.
my wealth,
I understand,
my purpose.
but
I don't even know
no
who I
buts,
am
Jake.
anymore.
I
How
need
can I
you
start
and your
over
team
when
to
it
think
feels
of
like
everything.
everything's gone?
The scaling challenges,
Elon felt a
the
deep sense of
infrastructure,
empathy.
the logistics.
He wasn't there to
It's
offer
not
a
just
solution,
about technology.
but to simply
It's
share
about
what he had learned
execution.
from his own
We're
journey,
not just
a journey that
revolutionizing
was still
transportation.
unfolding. We're all lost
revolutionizing
sometimes,
society.
Elon
Jake
said,
felt a pang
leaning
of
forward
nervousness.
slightly.
We're working
I've
on
come
it,
to
Elon,
realize that
but it's
even
going
when
to
we
take
feel
time.
lost, we're
Elon
exactly
fixed
where
his
we
gaze
need to
on
be.
Jake.
Sometimes we have to surrender everything we thought we knew. You've got to make room for something new to emerge. I'm not asking you to fix it all at once.
The pressure
Just take the first step. Sometimes that's all it takes. A single moment of faith, of trust, can be the turning point.
We'll make it happen.
Thomas's eyes glistened as he listened,
though the
layers of defensiveness slowly beginning to crumble. Elon didn't try to fix him, didn't try to provide answers.
Don't let me down.
Instead,
as the days
he offered something far more powerful,
threw themselves
his presence,
into the task of
his willingness
the
to sit with the pain,
They had
to acknowledge the struggle, and to offer hope without an agenda. And then,
power grids,
something miraculous happened.
And the
As
AI
Elon
integration
spoke,
with other
Thomas's tense posture began to soften.
Expansion that
His
Elon
eyes,
had demanded.
once clouded
The
with
challenges
despair,
were immediate
grew clearer.
and overwhelming.
There was
The
no
predictive
instant cure,
AI,
no
while
sudden
revolutionary,
transformation.
needed
But
to
in
be
that moment,
recalibrated for
Thomas
every
allowed
kind of
himself to
terrain,
feel.
climate,
He
and
allowed
scenario
himself to
that they hadn't
acknowledge the
tested yet.
possibility that,
And then there was the
despite
problem of
everything,
supply chain
there was
logistics.
hope.
The
There
team
was a
had
way
to find
forward.
ways to quickly
Father
build
Michael,
out a
who
global
had been
network of
quietly
charging
observing from
stations
across
and
the
energy
room,
management
approached
systems.
them after a
Jake
while.
couldn't shake
With
the
a
feeling
knowing
that something
smile,
was missing,
he placed a
that there was
hand
some
on
key
Elon's
element
shoulder.
they hadn't thought of.
"You did it,"
Buried
he said
beneath the
quietly.
avalanche of tasks
"You didn't
at
try to
hand.
fix him.
Late one
You
night,
showed him that it's
while
okay to be
reviewing
broken
technical
and still have
documentation,
faith.
Jake
That's the
stumbled
miracle."
upon something that made his
Elon
blood
nodded
run cold.
slowly,
It was
feeling
a
a
small
deep
section
sense of
in the
peace
original
settle
AI
over
code,
him.
buried
He
deep
hadn't
in the
solved
system's
anything
energy
with his
prediction
mind.
model.
He had
It was a
simply been
vulnerability,
present.
an
In that
overlooked
moment,
aspect of
Elon
how the
understood
AI
something
managed
profound.
high-intensity
The
situations.
true miracle was
If the
not in
system
what
were
he could
forced to
build or
handle a
achieve.
mass influx of
It was in
data,
the human
say,
connection.
during an
It was in
energy
offering a
crisis or
glimpse of
nationwide
grace to
blackout,
someone who had
it
lost
could easily
everything.
buckle under the
And in
pressure.
doing so,
Jake's heart
giving them the
raced.
strength to
This
find a
wasn't
new
just a
path
bug.
forward.
This was a flaw
As
that could
Elon
bring
walked away
everything
from the
crashing
meeting,
down if they
he
scaled too
realized that
quickly.
this was the
The system had
culmination
been
of his
tested
journey.
in ideal
The
conditions.
transformation was
But what if
not
the
about
city suddenly
technology,
needed to
not about
reroute
innovation.
millions of cars
It was
to
about
safe
opening
zones
his
during an
heart to the
emergency?
unseen forces,
What if there was a
about
surge in
trusting that
electricity
even
demand
in
that
moments of
outpaced
doubt,
the AI's
grace
ability
could
to adjust
emerge.
in real time?
And with that,
He immediately
Elon Musk
alerted
knew
the
that his
team.
greatest mission
Leo
had
and
only
Mia were
just
the
begun.
first to arrive,
The journey of
and they
faith,
huddled over the
love,
code for
and
hours,
transformation would
tracing
continue,
every thread.
not just
The
in the
issue was
spaces of
buried
grace,
so deep in the
but in
system
every
that it took them
interaction,
until dawn
every
to isolate it
relationship,
fully.
and every
But the
step he took.
solution, while
The
simple in
miracle,
theory,
after
would
all,
require a
was not in the
complete
grand
overhaul
vision
of
he
how
had
the
once
system
had.
processed
It was in the
time and
quiet
data.
moments
Can
where
we fix
faith
this in
unfolded
time?
in ways
Jake
he could
asked,
never have
rubbing
imagined.
his eyes as the
Hit
first
subscribe
rays of light
and leave a
broke through
comment
the
with where you're
windows.
watching from.
We'll have to.
This story
Leo
might
said
just spark a
grimly.
new beginning.
If we don't,
What's one thing that
everything we've
always
built could
pushes you
fail when we
forward,
need it the
even
most.
when things get
The
tough?
team worked around the clock, tweaking and
Just
testing.
as Trump is
They had to
threatening allies
rewrite
and
vast
friends from
portions of
Denmark
the
to Panama,
AI's predictive
giving new meaning
algorithms
to
to
the term
accommodate the
America
possibility
First.
of mass
Next.
energy fluctuations. They also had to ensure that the system could adjust
This
in
is
real time,
Washington
not
Week
just for
with the
individual
Atlantic.
vehicles, but for entire
Corporate
regions or
funding
cities.
provided
It was
by
exhausting. The constant
Consumer
pressure
Cellular.
to meet Elon's impossible deadlines
Additional funding
weighed
is
heavily
provided
on
by
everyone. As the team
Koo and
sat in
Patricia
front of their
Ewan for the
screens,
Ewan
they barely
Foundation,
spoke.
committed
Their
to
focus
bridging
consumed
cultural
by the
differences in
daunting
our
task at hand.
communities.
By the end of the
Sandra
week,
and
they
Carl
had a new
DeLay
version
Magnuson,
of the AI ready for testing.
Rose Herschel
This
and
time,
Andy Shreve,
they didn't just test the
Robert
system
and
with
Susan
vehicles on the road.
Rosenbaum,
They
the
simulated a
Corporation
crisis.
for Public
The team
Broadcasting,
set up a series of
and
stress
by
tests,
contributions to
mimicking what
your
might happen
PBS
during
station
citywide
from
power
viewers
outage,
like you.
or when millions of
Thank
cars
you.
needed to reroute to safety.
Once again,
As
from
Jake
the
watched
David
the
M.
simulation
Rubenstein
run,
studio
he
at
held his breath.
WETA
This
in
was the
Washington,
moment. The system
editor-in-chief
had to
of The
prove that it
Atlantic
could
and
adapt under
moderator
extreme
Jeffrey
pressure.
Goldberg.
The first test ended with a
Good
smooth,
evening and welcome to
controlled
Washington
response.
Week.
The
Next
AI
week's going to be a
adjusted
busy
traffic,
one when Senate
rerouted
confirmation
cars,
hearings
and
for Senator Donald
stabilized the
Trump's
energy
cabinet
flow to
picks
power
begin.
grids.
But the
But
biggest
Jake knew
news
that
this week,
wasn't enough.
the
They
wildfires
had to
in
push
Southern
it further,
California.
make the AI
Joining me at the
handle
table to discuss
scenarios
all of
beyond
this,
what anyone
Laura
could
Barone
predict.
Lopez, the
The
White House
second test was
correspondent
more
for
chaotic,
PBS NewsHour.
more unpredictable.
Carl Hulse is
and
the
that's when
chief
things
Washington
started to get
correspondent
tricky.
at the New
The
York
system
Times.
handled most of the
Tom
simulation
Nichols is
well,
my colleague
but as
and
the
a staff
scenario
writer at
grew
The
more
Atlantic,
complex,
and Vivian
the AI
Salama
began
is
to
a
struggle.
national politics
Jake
reporter
watched as the
at the
car
Wall
fleet
Street
began
Journal.
to slow, then
Thank
freeze,
you all for
as if the
being here.
algorithm couldn't
I want
keep
to
up
talk
with
a
the
little
demands.
bit about
Damn it,
the terrible,
Jake muttered,
terrible
his
fires
fist
in Los
slamming
Angeles
down
and
on the
Los
desk.
Angeles.
Why is it failing?
And I want to talk about
Leo
it in the
and Mia
context
were
of
scrambling,
Washington politics
trying
and
to
national
pinpoint the
politics
flaw
for a
in the
moment.
code.
So in
The
ordinary
AI couldn't
times,
handle the sudden rise in
president or a
energy
president-elect
demand when
will
too
show
many vehicles
support for
attempted to
local
recharge at
leadership
once.
while they're
The
dealing
whole
with
thing
an
was starting to
actual
crumble.
emergency.
We need to fix this now,
in the hour of
Leo
need,
said,
as it were.
panic creeping into his voice.
This is what
If this
President-elect
doesn't
Trump
work,
wrote
we
recently
can't
on
scale.
Truth Social, his
Jake's
platform.
mind was racing.
As
What
of
if
this
Elon
moment,
was right?
Gavin
What if they couldn't
Newscomb
get this right
and his
in time?
Los Angeles
He turned to
crew
Sarah,
have contained
who was
exactly
standing by,
0%
watching
of
the
the fire.
chaos
It
unfold
is
on
burning
her
at levels
screen.
that even
Sarah,
surpassed last
we
night.
need a solution
This is
now.
not government.
Fast.
I can't wait till
Sarah,
January 20th.
her eyes wide with exhaustion,
Put
didn't
aside,
hesitate.
if we
We
can,
need to rewrite the
insult
energy allocation
against
system
the California
fast. It's too
governor,
rigid.
the cheap insult
We
against
need
the
it to
California
scale
governor.
more dynamically.
I'm interested in
The
the
team dove
implied
back into the
promise
code, tweaking it in
these
real
posts,
time, racing against the clock.
that come
the
January
entire lab
20th,
felt suffocated.
government will work.
The stakes were higher than ever before,
Presumably,
and it was clear that one mistake
fire
could
wildfires
cost
like
them
this will
everything.
be contained. Laura,
Hours later,
is there any
just before dawn, they had
anxiety
an update
on the
ready.
Trump
It was a
team
radical
about
overhaul.
the number
They had
of
to allow the system
promises
to delegate
that
power
are
more
being
efficiently
made
between
in that
vehicles,
kind of way? I mean, it's very
homes,
hard
and
to
the energy grid
hide
based on
your
real-time
failure
demand,
to contain
rather
a
than
wildfire
relying solely on the
for any
AI's predictions.
official
Let's
of any
do
party.
it, Jake said.
No, I mean,
His
there's
voice
no
barely above a
sense
whisper.
that I'm getting
One
from
more
the
test.
people close to
If
the
this
transition,
works,
inside the
we're good to
transition,
go.
work
If
that
it
are going
fails,
to enter the
we pull the
administration.
plug.
Any
He slid
concern
into the
about
driver's seat once
promises
again,
that the
ready
president-elect
to
has
face
made,
whatever
and
came
especially the
next.
promises that he
The
said he
pressure
will just
was
try to
unbearable,
carry out
but he
on
couldn't
day
back
one,
down
which
now.
there is a hefty
As the
list.
test began,
You're right that
Jake held his breath.
that wildfires
The sun
are
was
obvious and
barely
people
up,
can see
but
them,
the
and I'm
lab
from
was
Southern
buzzing with
California,
energy.
and I've
Despite
dealt
the
with
sleepless
wildfires my
nights
entire
and
life when I
constant
lived there.
pressure,
But
there was a shared sense of urgency and resolve
team,
among the team.
ultimately
They had come so close to losing everything,
revises history
facing
whenever
a
they want
crisis
to.
that could
And
derail
they
the
did it with
project
January
entirely.
6th, and
Yet,
more people voted for him
somehow,
in
they had
2024
pushed through,
than they did
rewriting
in
the
2020.
core
So
algorithms,
when you take all of
tweaking the
these things
system,
that people
and
see in
testing
front of their
again and again.
eyes,
Now,
Trump
they
supporters
were about
and
to test
voters
the
who
final
supported
version
him
of the
ultimately
AI
believe
with the new
him over
adjustments.
even what
Jake
we
sat in the
report
driver's
and
seat
believe
once
him over
again,
the facts.
Right.
his heart racing.
Carl, I mean,
This time,
is there any
though,
consequence
there was no turning
for
back.
making that
They
kind
had
of
already
promise?
committed
I
everything
think
to this
one
moment.
thing that's going to be different
Elon's
this
deadline
time
loomed
is that the
large in their
Democrats
minds,
are really
and every
keeping
misstep
track
would
of
have
these
massive
promises.
consequences.
They're
The pressure
ready,
to succeed
and they're going to
felt
say,
heavier than ever before.
why is the Ukraine
Elon's
war
last
not over?
words
Why
echoed
are
in
eggs
Jake's
still
head.
costing this
Show
much?
me that this
and
can
there's
scale
a practical
globally,
consequence
or we're done.
for
He wasn't sure what
the
would
Trump
happen if the
administration
test
of these
failed
fires,
again.
and it's money.
Would Tesla scrap the
They're
entire
in this
project?
big
Would they be
negotiation
forced
about
to start
we
from
need to cut
scratch
spending, we need
with
to do all
only
this stuff.
failure to
There's
show
going to
for
be
all their
huge,
hard
huge
work?
price tag
Or would the stakes
attached to
become
this for the
even
federal
higher,
government to
with
pay for some
Elon
of this
pushing
stuff?
them
Just,
even further
that's part
beyond
of
their
being
limits?
president.
Jake's
All of a
fingers
sudden,
gripped
something
the
you
steering
didn't
wheel,
plan for
the cool
is
leather
really on
smoothing
your
his shaking
agenda.
hands.
I also think
His
that
breath came
it
in
never is
short,
great to be
anxious
playing the
bursts.
blame game in the
He stole
middle
a quick
of
glance
the
at Sarah,
disaster.
Leo, and
You know,
Mia.
well, I mean,
that's
each of them on edge,
the political
watching the
norm
simulation screens
throughout.
closely.
I mean, really, any
They had all
presidency
put
is
in
while the
countless
fire
hours
is
to get
raging,
to this
literally or
point.
figuratively.
Now, all their work was about to be
remember
tested again.
Governor
And
Christie
this
and
time,
Barack
it had to
Obama
be
and
perfect.
hurricanes and
Let's do it,
and there are many,
Jake
many
said,
examples. But
his voice
this
surprisingly
is a
steady.
very
He
different
pressed the
scenario.
button to
Tom,
start the
Carl
test.
mentioned
The car's
Ukraine. I
engine
think
purred to life.
of all the
familiar
promises
hum
that Donald
reverberating
Trump
through the
has
vehicle
made and
as
that
the
we're
AI kicked
cataloging.
in. It was showtime.
I will
The
end
car
the
began to
war
move,
in
just as it
Ukraine
had
on
in
day
all the
one.
previous tests.
Has to be
But this time,
the biggest.
it wasn't just about smoothly
do you
driving
get any
down a
sense,
road and avoiding
and I'm
basic
asking this not in a sardonic
This
way
was
at
a
all,
complex
but
simulation.
have you seen
Unpredictable
proof
human
that
behavior,
they have a
changing road
plan,
conditions,
whether it
a
put
sudden
aside
surge
whether
in
it
traffic,
could
and
work or
most
not?
importantly,
Is there
the
serious
system's
planning
ability
for
to
that? Or is
balance
this just
energy consumption
rhetorical
across thousands
excess?
of vehicles
Well, again,
while
there's never
maintaining
any
efficiency.
consequence for it.
The AI
So
immediately
if the war is
began
not over
analyzing
on
the
January
data.
21st,
Every signal,
we'll go from
every shift in
Biden
traffic,
couldn't stop the
every
war to
potential
Trump's
hazard
doing
was
his best.
processed in real time.
And it will be shifted
Jake
on
kept
to
his
Putin
eyes
or
fixed
someone else.
on the road ahead.
If you
hands
look
on
at
the
some of
wheel,
the things that
but
his
he could feel the tension
envoy,
rising.
the people that
This
he's
was the
chosen,
real
his national
test.
security advisor and
Everything
his
had to work
envoy to Ukraine have
seamlessly.
written,
The first phase
there's
went
a plan,
without a hitch.
which is to
The
tell
car
Putin
navigated
to
the
make
busy
peace
streets of
or
Palo Alto
we'll send
with
more arms
precision,
to Ukraine
adjusting
if you don't come to the
speed
table.
at the right
That
moments,
doesn't really
avoiding
mean anything.
obstacles,
I mean, Putin could
and
simply
smoothly
say, okay,
transitioning
fine, I'll
through
come to the table.
intersections.
Right,
Jake
you're
allowed
actually
himself to relax for a brief moment.
It's an antique
But
term,
then,
but you're a
as they reached a
criminologist.
major
I mean, that was your
intersection,
training, and you
the unexpected
taught for 30
happened.
years at the
A
Naval
vehicle
War
cut them
College.
off in the middle of the intersection,
These very
slamming
issues.
on the brakes without warning.
Just because
the AI
you
hesitated
want to say
for a
something to
fraction
Putin
of a
doesn't mean
second.
he's going to do it. Is
A
there any
fraction
proof
too long,
that Trump
and
has
Jake
more
could
sway
feel
over
his stomach
Putin than
lurch.
Joe Biden?
Come on.
No,
come
it's
on,
probably the
he
other way
muttered
around.
under
I
his
mean,
breath,
throughout
his foot
his first
instinctively
term,
hovering over the brake.
Trump seemed
and then,
genuinely
just
intimidated
as it
by
seemed
Putin.
like disaster was imminent, the AI
supposedly
recalibrated.
there have been
The car
phone
swerved to the
conversations
side,
that haven't gone
avoiding
well,
the collision by
that
mere
Putin's
inches.
not happy about.
Jake's
but,
heart
you
was
never
pounding
know
in his chest
with
as
what
the
you're
car
hearing from the
regained
Kremlin
control.
side of it
The
about how much
tension
of
in the
this
room
is
was
a kind of a
palpable.
feint.
The team
or
let out a
or,
collective
you know,
breath.
a kind of
The system had reacted,
double game
but
of
just
trying
barely.
to
Jake
flummox
knew that
the
this
Western
brief
press.
moment of hesitation was
I
a
don't see
potential deal
what
breaker in
Trump
the real world.
thinks is
What if
going
the
to happen
delay had
other
been
than
longer?
it's just something that he
What
said
if they were
that he could
dealing with a
call
worse
Putin,
scenario,
and Putin will
like
say,
a high-speed
yeah,
crash?
I'll help you out.
We
Putin
need
has
to
some
adjust for these
momentum on the
sudden erratic
battlefield,
movements, Mia said.
Yes, although the
Already pulling up the
Ukrainians are
data
actually
on her
mounting some
screen.
counterattacks.
The AI
the
can't afford
Russians
to
are paying
hesitate
a
like
seriously
that.
high
Jake
price.
looked at Sarah, who was
Even
staring
now,
at the
and
monitors,
the Ukrainians
clearly
are
processing the
counterattacking
situation.
again in this part of
We can't risk a scenario
Russia
like
that
this
they're
in
actually
real
holding
traffic,
in the Kursk
he
region.
said,
Again,
his voice
something
tight.
if you had said to
We
me
need
3
to
years ago
improve
that
the
we'd still be
decision-making
here 3
speed.
years later, and the
Agreed,
Ukrainians actually
Sarah
be holding
replied.
Russian
But the
territory.
system still
would
handled
have
the
seemed
obstacle
utterly
well
fantastic,
overall.
but I don't think
We're
that
not at a breaking
they have
point
much
yet,
leverage right
but
now.
we need to
Vivian, you're
fine-tune
a
this.
Trumpologist.
The test continues.
Sitting next to
Now
gosh.
Jake's
criminal
mind was
knowledge,
focused
among other
solely on the
ologies
AI's
that you
response times.
study.
Every new variable, every new
does
piece
Trump
of data was
believe
analyzed by the system,
that
and while the
he
AI
has
did a
sway
great job of handling
over
the
Vladimir,
unexpected,
that he can call Putin and
Jake
say, "Look,
couldn't shake the
let's just
feeling
cut
that
a
they were
deal
skating
and
on
that
thin
will
ice.
happen."
They were in a
Or is
race
this
against
again
time. Elon's deadline was only days
pre-inaugural
away.
posturing?
If the
And
test
we've
failed
seen
again,
that he
there
believes
might
not
not
only
be
that he
another
has sway
chance.
over Putin,
By
but
the
that
time
he
the
has sway
final
at a
phase of the
negotiating
test
table
arrived,
in general.
Jake
He's
was exhausted.
very pleased with
The
his
mental and emotional
abilities to
toll of the
negotiate
past
whether or
week,
not it's actually
combined with the
produced
pressure of
any
delivering
real
the perfect
outcome.
result,
He believes
was
that
starting
it's
to
one
wear
of
him
his
down.
biggest strengths.
He hadn't
and so
slept in over
that is
36
why during
hours,
the campaign
and his
he
mind felt
repeatedly
like it
said
was
that he
running
could
on
get a deal
fumes.
on day
But there
one,
was
that
no
he would
time
talk
for
to Putin. He
fatigue.
in fact
The final
criticized
leg
Joe
of the
Biden
test
for not
required
picking
the
up the phone
system
and
to
calling
handle
Putin
a
more
sudden
often, saying
spike
that
in
he
demand
would have been
for
on the phone with them to
electricity.
negotiate.
The entire city of
We
Palo Alto
do
was to be
not, they
simulated
still have
as
not confirmed whether or
experiencing a
not they've
power
spoken. The
outage,
Kremlin
with
has
the
completely
AI having to
dodged
reallocate
that,
energy from the
denied
cars
it.
to the grid, while
And
maintaining
at
the
this point,
stability
we
of the
do not
vehicles.
see any
Jake
indication
gripped the
that we
wheel
are going to
tightly
get a
as the
deal by
simulation
January
began.
20th. Quite
The
the
car
opposite,
began to
actually.
slow
We are
slightly
quite far
as
away
the system
from any
identified
real
the growing
breakthroughs,
energy
because,
deficit.
you know, it's
The
one
AI
thing, we're not
redirected power from
campaigning
the car's
anymore, and
battery
governing
to
is
nearby
hard, and
charging
they're learning
stations,
that in real time,
balancing
just
the
as they
load
learned that
across
in
the
16.
network.
I guess
while
I just
also
find
adjusting
it.
for traffic
I mean, if I said
conditions.
to you that
Everything
in 2
was going
weeks' time,
smoothly at first.
I'm going to have
The car
Beyonce
adapted
and
to the
Taylor Swift
increasing
on this
demand,
panel,
providing power to the
you would
grid while
watch in 2
maintaining
weeks to see
safe
if I had
and
Beyonce
efficient
and Taylor
driving
Swift on this
speeds.
panel.
Jake could see the data on the
You
screen,
can't just say, "I'm
confirming
going
that the system was
to
operating
solve
as
the
expected.
Ukraine war," and then
They were
not
handling
solve
the
it.
energy
At what
crisis with
point
no hiccups.
does he pay a
But
political
then,
price for
a
making
new
these kind of
variable
promises?
emerged.
The wheels are
Another
definitely in
vehicle,
motion.
which had
He
been
has
parked
a
along the
team,
road,
like Tom was saying,
suddenly
there is a
moved into the
team that
path
is
of the
trying
car,
to work
blocking
out
the
some sort
only
of
available route
understanding
for
by
energy
talking to the
distribution.
Ukrainians,
The
presumably
AI
talking
had
to the
to
Russians
process
as well
the
at some
change
point,
instantly,
to
predicting
be
not
able
only the
to
movement
get
of
them
the
to
other
the
car, but
negotiating
also the
table. But
consequences
it's a
for the
lot
grid
easier
and
said
the
than
vehicle's
done.
trajectory.
This is a conflict
Jake watched,
that has
his
roots
breath
going
held
back
as the
centuries,
car
literally.
began to make a
And
decision.
it is not so
The
easy to kind of
seconds
come in
stretched
and
into
wave
what
a magic
felt like an
wand. We're
eternity.
talking about
Would the AI
territorial
be able to
integrity here,
process this
and a
level
war
of
that has
complexity?
killed
Could it handle
tens
such a
of thousands
chaotic
of people. And so
situation while
it is not
maintaining
something that can be
safety
fixed
and
overnight, but
efficiency? And
they
then
do
it
have a
happened.
genuine interest
The car
in
made a
achieving
precise
goal.
calculation,
we've been talking about
rerouting the
political
vehicle around the
consequences
obstacle while
since he first took
continuing
office
to
in
manage energy
2016.
distribution
I mean,
seamlessly.
you know, when it
The
comes to
system
Ukraine, I think
shifted
that
the
maybe it's
balance in
not
real time,
necessarily that
keeping
Trump would face
everything
political
running smoothly
consequences, but
without
come the
any
midterms,
noticeable
come
dip in
2026,
performance.
if he doesn't
Jake
make
let
good
out
on
a
a number
shaky
of his
breath.
promises, whether
The
it's
test was
Ukraine
complete.
or lowering
The team
prices,
gathered
then
around the
that's where
monitors,
Republicans,
looking for the results.
the
Leo
larger
quickly
party
ran
will
through the
feel
logs,
the pain.
Yeah, no, I
verifying
mean,
the
I
data,
just always
his
waiting
face
for the
growing more
consequence.
and more
By the way,
animated.
no one has
It
asked me
worked,
if
he
Beyonce
said,
and Taylor Swift.
his voice filled with disbelief.
I don't believe that they will.
We
Well,
actually
I
I mean,
believed you.
you know what?
Sarah leaned back
Keep
in her
hope
chair.
alive. All right,
a wide
just
grin
bear with
spreading
me on
across her
that. I want to
face.
talk about something
We really did.
that
Mia
Trump
gave a
did
small
this
laugh,
week that was less
almost
than
a sigh of
highly
relief.
partisan. We saw
That
the
was
state
cutting it
funeral
close,
yesterday
but it's
of
working.
President
It's really
Jimmy
working.
Carter, and at
Jake
the
stood,
funeral
a
we
feeling
saw
of overwhelming pride
President
filling
Trump
him.
A
They had
show
done
up,
it.
which is
The
not
AI had
a
passed
given,
every test, every
given past,
unpredictable scenario,
behavior at these sorts
every
of
challenge,
events.
every stress point.
And we saw
The
him
system
chatting
had not
amiably
only
with,
kept up,
among others,
it had outperformed their
President
expectations.
Obama.
We did
Obviously,
it,
people are trying
Jake
to figure
said
out
quietly,
what they were
more to
talking
himself
about.
than anyone else.
But I
then,
don't, you know, without
a voice echoed
overreading
through the
this,
door.
Carl,
Elon,
you know, what are we
Sarah
to
said,
make
surprised.
of
Elon Musk
what are we to
stood in
make
the doorway,
of Donald Trump
watching the group with a
playing
focused
within
expression.
the norms
room went silent.
of Washington behavior?
These tableaus
Elon
are always
said,
like really
walking
studied,
in and nodding at the
for
monitors.
historical reasons.
We saw
Looks like
Dan
you've
Quayle
solved
for
they're
the first time
probably-
in quite
This
a
is
while.
I had
impressive.
actually seen him at the
Jake
Capitol
looked up at
recently.
Elon,
Oh, really?
his
but
breath
the,
catching. We did everything we
It's a
could to
big
make
stage.
sure it worked.
Donald
It's
Trump
ready.
knows
Elon
that everyone
studied the
was
data,
watching
then
this,
nodded slowly.
so he wanted to
I'm
show up,
impressed.
make an impact.
But this
and
is
he
just
also
the
wants
beginning.
to show that he's
Now we
an
scale.
acceptable part of the
Jake's
President's
heart
Club.
skipped a beat.
Right?
Right.
The ex-President's Club, and
That
now
was the
President
next
Again
phase,
Club, which
the
is
true
even
test.
more exclusive
They had passed
club.
this one,
And I think,
but
you know,
the real
he wanted
challenge
to,
was still ahead.
It's a
Elon
stature
Musk's
thing
visit
with
to the
him.
lab was brief but
And
impactful.
I think
His
who
sharp
knows
eyes had
what
scanned the
he
data,
and President
given a
Obama,
few
who
terse
I
nods,
was laughing
and left
as
the
Trump
team with
talked to
one
him.
simple
I mean,
directive.
I would love to
Now
know
we scale.
exactly
Jake
what they were
couldn't
talking
help
about.
but
Was
feel
he
a
saying,
mix
you know,
of
hey, I didn't really
exhaustion
mean
and
it about
exhilaration.
that birth certificate
Scaling.
stuff. You know?
It sounded
That
so
wasn't
silly.
Are there any
serious.
lip readers?
So achievable.
Yeah, no,
Yet
I
the
think there must
reality
be
was
lip reading
anything
going on.
But there was
As the door
the
closed
moment
behind
of
Elon, the gravity of the
Mike
situation
Pence,
hit Jake
Karen
all over again.
Pence.
This was
Yeah, no,
just
there
the
was
beginning.
that was
They
quite
had
a
working
different
prototype,
moment, which
a
is also
functioning AI
interesting
capable
to
of
study.
handling
Again,
extreme
back to criminology.
scenarios. But now they had to
Karen
make it
Pence
work on a global
sitting next
scale.
to Mike Pence,
And the deadline was looming.
Mike Pence gets
a
up
tight
and
timeline,
shakes the hand
combined
of,
with the looming pressure
Donald
from
Trump.
investors and, more
Karen
personally,
Pence,
Elon himself
and we have sort
was
of a
starting to
play-by-play
feel like an
video you could
enormous
actually
weight on
see.
Jake's shoulders.
Karen Pence,
Jake,
not interested.
we need to talk about the next
in,
steps, Sarah said, her voice soft but
acknowledging
urgent.
Donald
She had been
Trump's
staring
existence.
at the monitors, reviewing the
Tom,
test
what do you
data
make of
from
that?
earlier. But Jake could tell she wasn't
can't
fully
really
present.
blame her for holding
the
a
look
grudge.
on her face was one of quiet
considering
determination.
that
Jake
there were
took a
people that
deep
wanted
breath,
to hang her husband,
trying to steady his
and,
mind. I know.
that seemed to
Scaling
me
is
a
a whole
perfectly
different
rational.
beast. We have to build out the
response from
infrastructure,
someone who
charging
isn't
stations,
a politician,
energy
it
management
just is
systems,
a family member,
global power grids,
and wasn't
and the
gonna
cars
stand up
themselves.
and make
Mia
nice.
added,
I mean, everybody else
joining
does
the
what they have to do
conversation.
because that's Washington.
We need to
and
make
that's
sure
what
they
you do
can
at a funeral.
handle high demand, and that doesn't just
the
mean
other
energy
political figures,
distribution.
but
It's
Ms.
also
Pence, I
about
think,
communication
just said
with the
not
network.
doing it.
But let me
Every
ask
car
a,
has to
Vivian,
be
let me ask a
connected
purposely
all the
naive
time.
question. Why
To
does
keep
Mike
the
Pence
system
have
working
to
at full
make
capacity?
nice
Jake
to Donald
rubbed his
Trump
temples.
after Donald Trump
I know.
basically,
The scope is massive.
I don't know how
if we don't handle this
suggested
right,
that he should be
it
hanged.
could
I
unravel
mean, he
everything.
has come out and actually
Elon
said
doesn't
that
exactly
he is the
give
leader
us
of the
much
party and
breathing
that he's
room.
going to
He shot a quick
sort of
glance at the
support that.
clock.
He didn't
The
endorse
team had
didn't
been
him.
endorse
working for
him, yeah.
He did not
days
endorse
straight,
him, but he
pushing
would
themselves
sort of,
beyond their
support the
limits.
party and
Elon's
support the
vision
president
of a
of the United
globally
States,
scalable,
whoever he or
energy-efficient,
she may be.
AI-powered fleet
And
was
so,
breathtaking. But
that
it
was
wasn't
something
going
that,
to be
he's a
easy.
politician
The next
and he's
few
playing
days were a
politics. And it was
whirlwind
very
of
clear
meetings,
that,
strategies,
Mike
and
Pence still
brainstorming
wants to be in the
sessions.
game. And so,
The team
he
split
has
into
to make
smaller
nice for
groups.
his
I mean,
each
I've known
tasked
Mike
with tackling a
Pence for years
specific
and
part
years.
of the
It
challenge.
would totally not be
Jake
in
found
his
himself
nature
deep in
to sit
conversations
there.
with
He,
Leo and
his
Mia
slogan
about
used to be, "I'm
infrastructure.
conservative,
They
but I'm
needed
not
a plan
angry
for
about
not
it."
just thousands of charging
he's
stations,
just that
but entire
guy. He's
regional
gonna
grids that
stand
could
up, even
handle
though-
mass
If
integration
I'm
of
not
electric
wrong, Karen
vehicles without
Pence,
collapsing.
based on the old
Sarah,
reporting
meanwhile,
back from the
was focused on
2016
refining the
period,
AI's
Karen
communication
Pence was
system.
always dubious.
The network of cars
about
had to be
I think
fully
that's
integrated
correct.
into the
Right,
global
right.
infrastructure.
But I guess you're right. It's
and
just,
the cars themselves needed to
this
be
is the
able to
guy
respond
who
to changes in
threatened
real
my
time,
husband, and
sharing
that's
data
that.
with the central
And
server
again,
to
I don't want to
optimize energy
overread
use, traffic flow,
Donald
and
Trump
safety measures.
sitting with
The AI had
Democrats
to
and also
predict
George
and
W.
adapt,
Bush.
adjusting
Bush
not just to a
at
single
the funeral,
vehicle, but
reading
to
too much
entire
about
populations of them.
and reading into
But there was something
normalcy
that kept
much.
bothering
After all,
Jake.
he just did call the
Amidst
governor
all
of
the
California
technical
new
challenges
scum,
and the sheer scale of the
the
task
day,
at hand,
the day before.
he felt
But
a
is
growing
there,
unease, a sense that
again,
they were about
maybe
to face
purposely
something
naive
they
question,
couldn't
is there
predict,
proof that
something
there's going
far
to be
beyond
any
their
proof at all that
control.
there's going to be a
As the
learning
weeks
curve
passed,
about
the
behavior,
weight of the task
effective
seemed to
behavior
double.
the second
Jake couldn't
term
sleep
around, the second
anymore.
time around?
When
Have
he
you seen
closed his
anything that
eyes,
suggests
all he
that
saw were
he's going to
lines
be
of
more
code,
effective at
charging
reaching
stations,
across
and
the
maps
aisle
of the
in any
world,
way, shape, or form?
crisscrossed with
Not
virtual
really. In fact, if
highways.
anything, I think
Every
he
You want to
meeting,
think about that answer
every
for a second?
conversation was filled with urgency.
No,
Investors were beginning to ask tough questions.
Not really. I mean,
Journalists were
Donald
demanding
Trump,
timelines.
For all intents
Elon
and
checked
purposes,
in
like
frequently.
he
His
does
words
know
always
when to play
crisp
nice
and to the
when he
point,
wants
pushing
to.
for
But
more,
the question is,
demanding
does he
faster
want to? Does he
results.
need to?
There was no room for error.
With
Late one night,
the
as Jake
Republicans
sat at
now
his desk
holding
staring at a
both
network model
chambers
of
in
global
Congress,
charging
like
stations,
he
received
doesn't
an email
necessarily
from Elon.
need to reach out
Jake,
across the aisle
I
to
trust you're
Democrats at
making
this
the
point.
necessary
needs to work on
adjustments to the
Republican
system.
support.
Yeah, he doesn't have enough of that.
Which is
Global
going to be an
rollout
issue.
next
There's also
year.
a pattern
No
this
delays.
past week that
Let me
shows
know
that
if there's
answers your
anything I
question,
can do to
Jeff, which
help.
is that
Jake sighed,
and
rubbing his
basically
eyes.
since the new
No
year,
delays.
which is that in response
It
to a
wasn't the
terror
help he
attack in New
needed,
Orleans,
but it
Donald
was
Trump
clear that
sent out
Elon wasn't going to
disinformation
slow
basically
down.
saying that it
In
was the
fact,
result of an
the
open
pace was
border
picking up.
and that
He knew the stakes were
implied
high.
that migrants
If
were
they
the cause of this
succeeded,
terror attack.
Well, there is
This
an
is
open
American.
border between
world.
Texas and Louisiana.
Revolutionized
It was an
energy,
American citizen that carried out the
function
terror attack. In
in the
response to
very
the
way
wildfires,
society
he also
functioned.
pushed out more
But if they
disinformation,
failed,
not
Jake
just
didn't
calling
want to think
Newsom
about that.
new scum.
The
He
world was
also
watching,
lied
and
about
Elon's vision was one
Gavin
that couldn't
Newsom's
afford to
handling
fail.
of the
Just as
wildfires.
Jake and the
He and
team were beginning
Republicans
to
are
feel a sense
saying,
of
and his
control,
son is saying that
an
it's a result of
unexpected
DEI
roadblock
hires
emerged.
across fire
It started
departments.
with a
That's
simple
what made
glitch in the
wildfires
simulation,
worse. So
a strange
no, there's no
anomaly that
evidence
caused the AI to
that the
freeze in the
president-elect
middle of a
is going to
traffic
operate any
reroute
differently.
I mean, he's
scenario.
entering the
It
White
wasn't a
House as a
major
newly
failure,
convicted
but it was
felon. I think
odd,
he thinks
and the
he can
team
pretty
couldn't
much
immediately
do what he
identify the
wants to
cause.
do.
Right.
Mia was
He
the
is
first to
a
notice
as
it.
of today,
Jake,
he's a
there's
formally
something wrong.
convicted
The system is
felon,
stopping.
first time in American
It's not
history.
handling
Worth
the data
noting,
properly. It's like it's
obviously.
running out of
I want to
bandwidth.
pivot to the most
Jake
important
stared at the
geopolitical
screen,
issue
heart
of the
skipping
moment,
a
which is
beat.
the future of
What do you
Greenland.
mean? That's the
Obviously,
same network protocol we've been using, right? That's what I thought.
The president-elect has spent
Frustration
a lot of
creeping
time in
into
the
her
last week
voice.
or two
But for some
trolling
reason,
or
the system's
criticizing
not
some
scaling
allies
properly.
and friends, including
It's almost
Canada,
like the data's getting
Panama,
corrupted or
and
delayed
Denmark.
before
Obviously,
it even reaches the servers.
ruler, the sovereign
Jake rubbed
over,
his neck,
over
trying
Greenland,
to
which
wrap
Donald
his head
Trump has
around
made
the
very clear
issue.
he wants to
Could it
buy
be a bug in the
on
way
behalf
we're
of the
processing
United
incoming
States?
data?
Tom, allow me to quote from
Sarah said,
a
joining the
famous play.
conversation. But it's
set in
not just
Denmark.
one isolated incident.
Though this be
The
madness,
pattern
yet there
is
is
spreading
method
through
in
the
it.
system. We're losing packets of
is
data.
there
Some vehicles are no
method
longer receiving real-time
to this?
updates, and others are
is there
losing
something that
connection
we're
entirely.
not understanding, or is
Jake's
this just Donald
stomach
Trump
sank.
having some fun?
The cars
Well,
were
some of
losing
it's always Donald
connectivity
Trump
in
just
the
having
middle
some
of
fun
reroutes.
doing it because
that could cause
to
massive
quote another
problems in real-world
famous
scenarios,
work of literature, The Turn of the
especially
Screw,
if it happened
the young
in the
boy
middle
in
of
it
an
who says, "Why do you
emergency.
do these terrible
This
things?"
isn't just
because
a
I
bug,
can.
Jake said,
But I
pacing
also
the room.
think
This is something
there,
deeper.
There is a
Leo
little bit of
frowned
strategy.
as he
Because
ran
think about
through
all
the
the.
system
we're talking about
logs.
things that are never
It's
going
like
to
the data
happen, right? We're not
bandwidth
going
is
to war
being
with Denmark over
overwhelmed,
Greenland.
but
We're
there
not gonna
shouldn't
seize
be that
Denmark
much
now.
load.
We're not
unless
talking
the
about
integration
the fact
isn't
that Pete
managing the
Hegseth
load properly
is
across
going to
multiple
the Hill
servers.
next week. We're not talking
Jake's
about
mind
Tulsi
raced.
Gabbard.
Could it
We're not
be
talking
that they
about
hadn't
RFK.
accounted for the
this
sheer
whole,
volume of data that the system would be
strange
handling at a
foreign
global
policy
scale? They were
fandango
anticipating
has kind of
millions of vehicles
obliterated a
feeding
lot
into
of
a
other
central
discussions
network.
that I think were
But
really
this was
Is
on
that
a whole
purposeful?
different level.
You know,
Let's test it
I'm
with a
always worried
broader
about
simulation,
ascribing too
Jake
much
said,
purpose
his
to Donald
mind
Trump
still
at any
spinning.
given moment. But
We need to see if
I
this
think it
problem
is. I mean, some
persists
of
on a
the
larger
people who have
scale.
worked for him said
The
that
simulation
say that he
began,
does this
and for
on
the first
purpose.
few minutes,
if he feels as
everything
though the
seemed to
press
go
is not paying
smoothly.
attention to him
Then,
or paying
slowly
attention to
at
something
first,
that he wants,
the system
if
began
he's
to
bored by
slow.
the news cycle,
Vehicles
he
started to
jumps
lose
in and he tries
communication
to
with the
seize
network.
control of it. And that's
The
what he did
rerouting
this
system
week
froze again,
when everyone was
and then
focused on
cars in
Jimmy
the
Carter's
simulation
funeral,
started colliding.
when people were preparing
Shit,
for
Mia
the
shouted,
sentencing
as the
today in
screen
the
lit
New
up
York
with
hush
red
money
error
trial
codes.
and potentially
It's all
covering
going
that.
down.
He goes
The
out there and
system's
says,
buckling under the
I
load.
may use military
Shut it
force
down.
against Greenland in the Panama
Jake yelled,
Canal. And what
panic
happens? The
creeping
press
into his
jumps in
voice.
response
He's the master
to it.
of
Shut it down
distraction.
now.
Vivian,
But it was
let me
too
ask
late.
you this. Tom is
The
sure that we're
simulation
not
crashed
invading
completely.
Denmark
The entire
or
network of
Panama.
vehicles was offline.
Are
In that moment,
we 100%
Jake realized
sure
the worst
that this is
possible
just
scenario had occurred.
for fun?
They had
Or
underestimated
is there
the
a chance
complexity
that
of scaling a
NATO
system
has to
on
sit there
such
and
an
go,
enormous
wait,
level.
what do we do
The AI,
if
though
he
brilliant,
is somehow
had
aggressive
limitations they
against
hadn't
Greenland?
seen before.
Donald Trump is so
There was simply
unpredictable that
too
NATO
much
is
data
already
being
doing that, just
transmitted
to be
at
clear.
once,
They're already
and it
asking
couldn't
those
handle the
questions.
overload.
But
Jake sat
does
in
anyone
stunned
on his
silence,
staff that I've talked
staring
to
at the
think
blank
that he's
screen
actually
in front
going
of
to
him?
invade
This wasn't
Greenland
just a setback.
or invade
It was a
Canada or
catastrophe.
try to
Their global
forcefully take the Panama
infrastructure was
Canal?
failing.
No.
The whole
but he is
project
going
could
to
fall
use
apart
very
unless they
aggressive,
found a
coercive
solution,
behavior,
and fast.
threaten
The
economic
room was
tariffs
dead
if
silent,
he can,
save for
and
the steady
otherwise
hum of
just to get
computers
his way.
and
He
the
does not
occasional
like
clicking
to
of a
be told
keyboard.
no.
Jake's
And
pulse
that's what's
hammered in
happened
his
here
ears
is that
as
in
he
every
sat
one of these
motionless in
cases,
front of the
he's been
screen.
told, no, you
The
cannot have
simulation
it.
crash
And
had
that is
thrown
making
everything
him
into disarray.
want it even
The
more
team
and
was
get more
visibly
aggressive with his
shaken.
rhetoric.
Their
But
faces
there
pale
is
with the
some
weight of the
national
situation.
security
Mia
strategy
was the
behind
first
this,
to
and
speak.
that we've been
We
talking
need
about
to
this
figure
since
out what just
16,
happened.
since 19
This
when
isn't
the story
just a
broke.
technical issue.
Is that
It's a systemic
they
failure.
want Western
The system
Hemisphere
couldn't
dominance. This
handle
is
the
an
load.
old Republican
And now we're we're back at
obsession
square one.
about Western
Jake
Hemisphere
didn't answer
dominance
at first.
and
He
fortifying
was trying to
U.S.
process it
positions
all.
in
Their
the
entire
Arctic
vision,
across the
Elon's
Western
vision,
Hemisphere. And so this is
These are
just
legitimate
crumbled
issues
before
that
their eyes.
American
legitimate
The AI
national
wasn't
security.
ready
that have
for the scale they
unfortunately
had been
gotten,
anticipating.
conflated
Even the most
with
advanced
sort of
technology
the
had its
blurry
limits, and it
rhetoric
seemed
of
they had
Donald
reached
Trump
them.
talking
I
about
think we
buying
need to
Greenland
step back,
and invading
Leo
Panama.
said.
Right.
I'm not
His voice
100% convinced
uncharacteristically
about Panama.
quiet.
You
We
know,
need to
that
rethink
it
the
is
entire
something.
infrastructure
The
approach.
interesting thing to me is
Maybe
how
we're
what the
overloading the
reaction is
system.
on
Or
the Hill.
maybe
You know,
we
in the
didn't account
House,
for latency.
It's pretty
Or the
rah-rah.
number of nodes we
Let's
need to
do what we
distribute the
have to
data
do. You know,
efficiently.
this is okay with
I
us.
don't know if
in the Senate, it's a little more, we're not sure exactly what this is
The
about.
reaction from foreign leaders
She
is
was
interesting,
scanning
I
through
think
the
a little
logs from the
different than what it
crash.
was
But the
potentially
solution
his
didn't
first
seem
term,
any
which is
clearer.
that there's a bit more mocking
This is a foundational
of Donald
problem.
Trump.
Yeah.
Mexico's
It's not just
president,
about
Mexico's
code or
president was
servers.
mocking him.
We're dealing with
Canadian
an
lawmakers
That's
are
good
mocking
domestic
him.
politics.
variables.
I want to
And
note
we
for the
need to
record that Vivian
anticipate
is the
them.
person who broke the
Jake stood
Greenland
up
story in
abruptly.
2019.
We can't just sit
just
here and
noting
theorize.
when a
It'll be
report-
written
We
on
need
my
to fix this
tombstone.
now.
Yeah, broke the
Fast.
Greenland story.
We can't
You
afford
mentioned
to
Pete
let this
Hegseth.
slip
We have a
through
few
our
minutes. I want to
fingers.
talk about these nominations.
Elon's deadline loomed, and
Next
it was
week, Carl,
more than
give us
just
the
a
state of
date.
play.
I mean,
It was a
the
promise to the
nominations
world that
start
the future
in
was
force
now. If they failed now,
on Tuesday.
everything they had
Pete
worked
Hegseth
for,
is going to have an
everything the
extremely
world had
difficult
anticipated
hearing. The
would fall
Democrats
apart.
are
We
loaded
need
for
to
bear,
take
but
the
they're not as
system
loaded as
apart,
they want to be
Jake
because they
said.
haven't seen all the
His voice
documents
sharper
that they
than
want to see.
before.
That's what the fight
Let's break
is
it down,
on the Hill
step
right
by
now.
step,
Are we going to
and
see
identify
these
the
documents?
exact
I
bottleneck.
think how
Mia
some of
nodded,
these other,
still typing
you know,
away.
there's going to be some
We'll
that
need
go
to revisit how
extremely
data is
smoothly and
being
you'll hardly notice
processed,
them. But
especially
the
across
high-profile
large
ones are Pete
networks.
Hegseth
Maybe we're hitting
and,
capacity at
Tulsi
certain nodes
Gabbard,
and
who
not
we have
distributing the
gotten
load
to.
properly.
Yeah, and
If we
and
isolate
it's
each
your belief
sector,
that
we might be able to
Gabbard has
pinpoint
problems?
the weak
I
points.
think she does have a
We'll
problem.
also need more testing on the
Trump
communication
folks might want to
protocols.
upend
Leo added.
the
Right now,
intelligence community.
they can't handle
of
the amount
United
of
States.
real-time traffic
Senate
we're throwing at them.
Republicans don't
We're
want to
getting
do
time
that,
delays,
and certainly Republicans
data
on the
corruption,
Intelligence Committee,
and worst
including
of all,
and
drop
I include Mitch
connections.
McConnell.
Well, I
Jake
wanted
could
to
feel
ask
the
you,
pressure mounting.
you're a
The weight of the
McConnellologist.
world
I'm
was now
going
on
to
his
beat
shoulders.
this one to death.
But he
Yeah,
knew they couldn't
I'm
give
just
up.
killing it.
The pressure, the
but
risks. It was
that's
all
one of
part
the biggest
game.
questions of
He
all
had seen
here.
Elon
is
push himself to the brink
how much does
time
Mitch
and time
McConnell
again.
stray
And
from
if Elon
the
could do it,
Orthodox
so could
pro-Trump
they.
line?
As the
in
hours
coming
I don't
stretched
think
weeks?
he's
into
going to
the
have
early
problems
morning,
doing
the
that.
lab
And I
became
think
He's a free
war
man.
zone
if
of
you look at
ideas
Mitch
and
McConnell and
technical
you look at Tulsi
solutions.
Gabbard, right?
No one
She's
spoke
had to
much.
turn around
Everyone
her,
was locked
her,
in a frantic
her
state of
criticism
mind,
of one of the
analyzing
national security
every single
programs
detail,
on
no
eavesdropping
matter how
one.
small.
She's going to be
Jake
questioned
found
about
himself revisiting
why
the
she wanted
AI's
to
core
pardon Edward
algorithm,
Snowden.
scrutinizing
I
the
think,
way it
some of
processed
the
traffic
things she's
data,
advocated
energy
and done are just
distribution,
so
and
contrary
vehicle communication.
to what
He looked at it from
Republicans
every
in the Senate
angle.
are
Could it
about
be
when
that
it
the
comes to
AI's
intelligence.
core
Vivian, what does it
processing
mean if
system
Tulsi
was
Gabbard
too complex for
becomes
such a
the director of
large-scale
national
network?
intelligence?
So
Or
there
was
are,
it that
I
they
mean,
simply
the
hadn't
job
accounted
is
for
to
the number of
oversee
concurrent
the
users
intel
on such
community
a
at
vast
large
level?
and sort of
After
kind
what
of,
seemed like an
be
eternity,
a
Jake's eyes landed on
traffic
something.
cop for a lot of the
discrepancy in the
intelligence.
data packets.
Is it
They were
the
being
most
transmitted
significant
at varying
intel job in
speeds,
the administration?
causing
No, the
latency
CIA
issues in
director
real
would
time.
probably be
And that wasn't the worst
job,
of
but
it.
it's
Some
still
of the
a
data
very
packets were
important
being
role,
corrupted
and
as
certainly
they
at a
passed
time
through
where
certain
Donald Trump
network
has talked
nodes.
about upending the
Wait a
intelligence
minute,
community.
Jake
He has
muttered
cast doubt
aloud,
over
clicking
their
through
own
the
assessments,
logs.
sometimes even
I think I
preferring
found the problem.
claims that
What is
Vladimir
it?
Putin makes
Sarah
over
asked,
things that come out
her
of the
voice
intel
a mix of
community.
hope
And so
and
to have
weariness.
someone like that as
It's
sort of
the
an
data
agent
pipeline.
and a
The
facilitator
packets
of
aren't
the
being
intelligence
transmitted
is something very
efficiently.
alarming.
There's a
But to Carl's
misalignment in
point,
how
what
the
I keep
data
on
is
hearing
routed.
from
We've been treating
Republicans
it like a
on the
single,
Hill is
continuous
that
flow.
she
But
may
in
be
reality,
grossly
the system
underqualified,
needs segmented
and it is
routing
raising
and
concern
parallel data
because the
streams
intel
to
community, in
maintain
particular, the
real-time
intel committee
communication
in
at
particular,
scale.
takes
Leo
their jobs
walked
very
over,
seriously.
scanning the screen as Jake
They
typed.
don't want someone
So,
who
what you're saying is that
they have
the
questions
AI is
about or
trying to do
concerns
everything
about
at
that. Are
once,
they
but
are
it's
they an
overloading the
adversary to
system.
the United States, or
And
are they
we
going
need
to
to
side with us?
optimize
And
the
so
way
this
the
is an
data
issue.
is sent
Tom,
across
in
different
the
nodes.
last minute, we
Exactly,
have,
Jake
you are
said,
actually a
feeling a
Soviet
sense of
apologist,
relief
a
at
study
finally
of,
seeing the root
you studied
cause.
Russian-American
By segmenting the
relations
traffic and using load
40
balancing,
years.
we can prevent these bottlenecks.
Have we ever seen anything like this?
We need
where
to
someone who
rethink the
has
network
spoken
architecture.
on behalf of
Once we isolate
Russian
the traffic
interests
streams and
be
distribute
nominated
the
into a
load
role like
more
this?
efficiently,
Never. And,
we can restore the system's
The Democrats
integrity.
would never have
Mia's eyes
put
lit
someone
up.
forward like that.
This
and
could work.
certainly not the
We'll need to
Republicans.
modify
I mean,
the
it's
communication
all the more
protocols
stunning
and
that
rewrite
this is coming
parts of the
from,
network management
we always have to say it,
algorithms.
the party of
But if
Ronald
we can
Reagan,
stabilize
or
the
what
data
was once
streams,
the party of
we'll be
Ronald
back
Reagan.
on track.
It's
It was
literally
another 48
unthinkable.
hours
And,
before they had a
all
working
the things that Vivian
prototype
just
of
brought
the
up.
updated system.
On top of that,
everyone
imagine
had
our
thrown
allies
themselves into the
and,
task, revisiting
saying,
old code,
we're done
reconfiguring
sharing
the data
intelligence
pipelines,
with you.
and
It's
optimizing the
dangerous.
AI's
It's
communication
too
channels.
risky to our
Sarah
people,
and
to our
Leo were
interests.
leading the charge on
So
the
it
network
could be a
design,
disaster.
Could
while
only
Mia
imagine how
focused on
interesting it is
fine-tuning
to
the
be
data
head of
management
Danish
protocols.
intelligence right now.
Jake hadn't slept,
And on that
but
note,
he felt more alive
on that
than
note,
ever.
we do have
His
to
mind was
leave it
sharp
there
now,
for now.
honed
But I
in
want
on
to
the
thank our
task at
panelists
hand.
for joining me.
They were fixing
And next
something
week,
that
please
should have
join
been
me
done
as I
months
interview
ago.
Taylor Swift and
But in
Beyonce
this
in
business,
Greenland.
it was
I want to
all
thank
about the
you,
learning
our viewers
curve.
at home, for
They
watching.
were too far down the
I'm
rabbit
Jeffrey
hole to
Goldberg.
stop now.
Good night.
By the time the final adjustments were made,
Corporate
they ran
funding
another
for
test,
Washington
a
Week with the
full-scale
Atlantic
simulation
is
with
provided
thousands
by
of vehicles communicating,
In
rerouting
1995, two
traffic,
friends set out to
managing
make
energy
wireless
distribution,
coverage accessible
and
to
even
all.
reacting to real-time emergencies.
With no long-term
Jake sat
contracts,
back in his
nationwide
chair,
coverage,
eyes
and
fixed on the
100%
screen,
US-based
heart
customer
racing
support.
as the simulation played
Consumer
out.
Cellular.
The AI
Freedom
began
calls.
processing the data in real time,
Additional funding is
segmenting
provided
traffic,
by
balancing the load
Ku and
between
Patricia
nodes,
Ewan for
and
the
maintaining
Ewan
communication
Foundation,
across the
committed
entire
to bridging
network.
cultural
For the first time
differences in
in
our
days,
communities.
everything was smooth.
Sandra and
There were
Carl
no
DeLay
glitches,
Magnuson,
no data corruption.
Rose Herschel
The
and
cars
Andy
moved through the
Shreves,
simulation seamlessly,
Robert and Susan
reacting to
Rosenbaum,
obstacles and rerouting
the Corporation for
efficiently.
Public
It worked.
Broadcasting,
It's
and
working,
by
Mia
contributions
whispered,
to your
as the
PBS
final
station
numbers ticked
from
in.
viewers
We
like
did it.
you.
Jake
Thank you.
felt a flood of relief wash over him, followed by a deep sense of accomplishment. They had solved the problem. They had rebuilt the system and had it running at scale. They had done it. They had fixed the system. Jake knew it wasn't perfect, but it was more than ready for testing at scale. This was a significant milestone, one that would make all the difference when they took it to Elon. But even as they celebrated their success, Jake knew they couldn't afford to rest. They had solved one problem, but the next challenge was just around the corner. They were still facing one of the biggest hurdles of all, making sure the system was truly scalable, capable of handling millions of vehicles across the world, and seamlessly integrating into global infrastructure. And then there was Elon. He expected results, and he expected them fast. Jake looked around the room at his team. They had faced failure, overcome it, and emerged victorious. But now, the real test was coming. They had to prove not only that the system worked, but that it could handle the most difficult and unpredictable scenarios imaginable. Jake smiled grimly. They were ready. The night after the breakthrough was one of restlessness. Jake had hardly slept, and when he did, the dream was always the same. A global network of cars, a smooth, efficient system, humming across the world, until, suddenly, a crash. Data packets corrupted, vehicles stalled, and a deep, endless silence. When he woke up, drenched in sweat, the reality of the challenge ahead slammed into him like a freight train. They had fixed the immediate issue, but the real test was coming, the live test. Elon was going to want results, and the world was watching. The next morning, the team reconvened in the lab, still reeling from the massive effort of the previous 48 hours. But now, the energy in the room was different, quiet, tense, like a team on the eve of a championship game. Jake stood at the front, looking out at the faces of the team that had brought the system back from the brink. "All right, team. We've got one shot at this," he said, his voice steady, though the weight of it hung heavy in the air. Elon's going to want to see a full demonstration, not just a simulation, but real-time, full-scale data. The entire network, operating at capacity. "Are we ready for that?" Mia asked, her tone cautious but hopeful. Jake ran a hand through his hair. "We'll know in a few hours. If this system doesn't hold up in the real world, it's game over." He paused, looking at each of them. "This isn't just about proving the tech anymore. It's about proving that we can make it work, globally. It's all or nothing." Sarah met his gaze. "No pressure, right?" Leo cracked a smile, though it was strained. "Just another Tuesday." They laughed, but the tension in the room didn't ease. They all knew what was at stake. A global shift in transportation, energy distribution, and artificial intelligence. If they succeeded. If they failed, there would be consequences. The next few hours were a blur of final preparations. Jake and the team worked through every last detail, double-checking the communication protocols, refining the algorithms, and testing the AI's predictive abilities. They needed to ensure everything ran smoothly, as there would be no margin for error. Then, the message came through: Elon Musk has landed. Jake's heart skipped a beat. Elon wasn't known for his patience, and he certainly didn't do small talk. Elon expected results. He was the one who had pushed them to this point, driving the team harder than they thought possible. And now, he was about to see the culmination of all their work. "All right," Jake said, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this." The team filed into the central testing room where a massive 3D holographic map of the world was projected, showing the global network of electric vehicles, charging stations, and energy grids. It was a dizzying sight, the interconnectedness of it all. But Jake couldn't afford to be awed. They had to make sure it worked. Elon entered the room, his presence dominating the space. He scanned the map quickly before turning to Jake. Well? Elon's voice was cool, direct. I want to see it live. Jake didn't hesitate. We've prepared a global scale test. Full system. Real-time data. It should be seamless. Elon didn't say anything for a moment. He just stared at the projections, his face unreadable. All right then, let's see it. With a nod from Jake, the team initiated the system. The cars across the simulation network began to move. The traffic rerouting algorithms kicked in, vehicles adjusted their paths in real time to optimize traffic flow. Charging stations activated across the world. The AI began predicting the best routes for the vehicles, optimizing energy use and distributing power efficiently across the network. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as the map filled with data streams, visualized traffic patterns, and energy flow indicators. For a moment, everything seemed to work perfectly. And then, out of nowhere, the system froze. The traffic halted. The cars on the screen stopped moving. The charging stations blinked out. Jake's breath caught in his throat. It had to be a fluke, a momentary glitch. He glanced at Sarah, who was frantically typing commands, her eyes wide with panic. Come on, Jake muttered to himself. But the glitch didn't resolve. The system was crashing. Elon's sharp gaze turned to Jake. What's happening? Jake's mind raced. He needed to act fast. The last thing they could afford right now was a failure in front of Elon. Give me a second, he said, voice tight. Sarah quickly identified the problem. Again, a data bottleneck. The load balancing algorithm wasn't compensating fast enough for the scale. Despite all their efforts, the real-time data distribution was still struggling under the pressure. Jake shot a look at Leo, who was already typing furiously. We need to reroute the data through a new path, faster, more efficiently. We can't keep going like this. We're going to crash it again, Leo said, his voice grim. It's too much data for the current infrastructure. Jake felt the weight of the situation pressing down. They couldn't afford another failure. But Elon was watching, and every second that ticked by felt like an eternity. I know, he said, but we can't stop now. Do what you can. Sarah, you handle the AI. I'll work on the simulation. Without another word, they went to work. It was a frantic scramble, each of them pouring every ounce of focus into fixing the problem before Elon could lose patience. Minutes passed like hours. Jake's mind was racing through possible solutions. They had tested this system repeatedly in simulations, but nothing had prepared them for the scale of what they were trying to accomplish. They had to think on their feet. We need more parallel processing, Jake said suddenly, as an idea sparked in his brain. Instead of trying to make the AI handle it all at once, let's split the load into smaller, more manageable chunks. Distribute the work across multiple servers instead of relying on one centralized network. Leo nodded. It'll take a minute to reconfigure the data streams, but it might just work. Sarah quickly adjusted the algorithm, implementing Jake's suggestion. The data began to split into multiple segments, distributed across several smaller networks. Each node took on a fraction of the load, reducing the strain on any one part of the system. Jake held his breath. For a moment, nothing happened. The screen stayed frozen. Then, one by one, the cars began to move again. The charging stations flickered back to life. The data began flowing smoothly. It's working, Sarah whispered. Jake allowed himself a small breath of relief. We've got it. Elon stood there, still watching, as the entire system came back online. His expression was unreadable, but Jake could tell he was impressed. The system was working, flawlessly, even. You did it, Elon said, his voice almost approving. But this is just the first step. Jake felt the tension ease from his shoulders. They had passed the test. I know, he said, stepping forward. Now we take it to the next level. Elon gave a sharp nod. His eyes locked on the live data stream as it flowed across the screen. Well, don't get too comfortable. We have a long road ahead of us. And just like that, the pressure returned. The hard part was still ahead. They had proven that the system could work, but scaling it globally, integrating it into existing infrastructures, navigating political and logistical hurdles, that was the real challenge. But Jake was no longer afraid. They had come this far. And now, with Elon watching, They had no choice but to push forward. The days after the global test were a whirlwind of activity. News outlets across the globe were buzzing with excitement, some calling it the dawn of a new era in transportation, others skeptically questioning its feasibility. Jake and the team didn't have time to read the headlines. They were too busy with meetings, debugging issues that cropped up, and preparing for the next phase. Despite the triumph of the previous day, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something precarious. They had passed the first major hurdle, but they were far from out of the woods. Scaling the system across multiple cities, ensuring the infrastructure could support it at full capacity, and dealing with unforeseen challenges, it was a monumental task. The pressure was back, and it was relentless. Elon had demanded a follow-up meeting in 2 days, and everyone on the team knew it was make or break. If they didn't come prepared with answers, their moment in the spotlight would be nothing more than a fleeting memory. Jake found himself in his small office late that evening, the only sound the soft hum of his laptop as he reviewed the data logs from the previous tests. His eyes were bloodshot, his mind exhausted, but there was no stopping now. They couldn't afford to slow down. The world was watching, and so was Elon. The knock on his door was soft, but unmistakable. Sarah peeked in. "You still awake?" she asked, a faint smile on her lips, though her exhaustion was just as palpable. Jake sat up straighter, wiping his face. "Yeah, I'm just going over the logs from today's tests. There are still some discrepancies in the way the system responds under heavy loads." Sarah stepped inside, leaning against the doorframe. "I was going to ask how you're holding up, but I already know the answer," she said dryly, glancing at the half-empty coffee mug on his desk. "Look, we've come this far, Jake. We just need to take the next step. We've built something incredible here. But if you don't rest, we won't make it." Jake shook his head, a weary smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I know. I just keep thinking about everything that could go wrong. Elon won't tolerate any more setbacks." Sarah moved toward him, sitting on the edge of his desk. "You can't carry this alone. We all have your back, and you've done the impossible already. No one's going to let you fall." Jake let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair. "Sometimes I feel like I'm on the edge of something huge, and other times, I feel like it could all collapse in an instant." "Welcome to the startup life," Sarah replied with a smirk. "You're not alone in that feeling, trust me." Jake looked at her, grateful for the moment of levity. "I just keep wondering, what's next? Even if we pull this off, what happens when we scale it? What happens when the world actually sees it in action? We're already changing the game. There's no going back now," Sarah said, her eyes unwavering. "You know that. All we can do is keep moving forward." The next day was a blur of technical reviews, calls with potential investors, and troubleshooting. There were moments when Jake felt he was treading water, swimming against a tide of problems and unexpected failures. But he also felt a quiet determination building within him. They had reached this point because they had kept pushing through the toughest moments. At one point, Elon called Jake directly. The team was gathered around their desks, watching the phone screen as Jake answered. "Jake, I just got off a call with the mayor of a major city," Elon said, his voice calm, but there was an edge to it. "They're willing to be the first to integrate our system, but we need to prove it can handle millions of vehicles in real time. They want to see a pilot project within the next 3 weeks. No pressure, right?" Jake's stomach churned, but he managed to keep his voice steady. 3 weeks? "Elon, we're talking about testing this system on a city-wide scale with real-time traffic, energy distribution, and autonomous vehicles. It's never been done before." Elon was silent for a moment, and Jake could almost hear the wheels turning. "I know. That's why I'm counting on you, Jake. We've built something revolutionary here, but we need to show the world it works. We need to take the next step now." Jake nodded, despite the knot in his stomach. "We'll get it done. We'll make it work." "Good. I'm expecting results," Elon said, his tone final. "And Jake, you're the one who's going to lead this charge. Make it happen." The line clicked off, and Jake let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The team was silent, watching him. "I guess we know what we have to do," Jake said, rallying the troops. "We've got 3 weeks. We start the pilot test in the next major city. But we need to do it right. Every detail, every protocol needs to be perfect. No margin for error. The next 3 weeks were the most intense of Jake's life. The team worked tirelessly, day and night, to prepare the system for the pilot project. They didn't just need to prove it could work. They needed to prove it could scale, that it could handle millions of real-time interactions from thousands of vehicles and charging stations. The city they chose was a sprawling metropolis with millions of residents, a dense traffic grid, and complex energy demands. It was the perfect proving ground. Jake knew this was their shot. If they could make it work here, they could take it anywhere. The morning of the pilot project, Jake stood at the edge of a rooftop overlooking the city. Below him, the grid of roads and highways stretched out, a living organism, waiting to be reshaped by the technology they had built. His phone buzzed with a message from Elon. It's time to make history. The team gathered in the control room, a high-tech hub with banks of screens showing live data from every corner of the city. Jake took a deep breath, turned to his team, and gave them a steady smile. We've done the impossible. Now, let's make it possible for the world. With a single press of a button, the system came online. The vehicles across the city began moving. The traffic rerouted seamlessly, the charging stations activated in real time, and the AI began predicting optimal routes for vehicles, adjusting energy use, and ensuring the grid was balanced. At first, it felt surreal. Everything working, everything falling into place. The cars on the map flowed like water, moving efficiently, avoiding congestion, optimizing their routes. Then, as the system scaled further, the first signs of stress began to appear. The data streams grew more complex, and Jake's stomach tightened. A spike in traffic caused a slight lag. The energy grid began to experience small fluctuations, and a few vehicles briefly stopped responding. Jake's heart pounded as he watched the monitors. They had prepared for this, but he couldn't help but feel a moment of panic. This was it, the moment where everything could either fall apart or come together. He quickly glanced at Mia. Is it holding? Mia, her face pale but determined, nodded. Yes, but we're pushing it to the limit. We need to tweak the load balancing algorithm. Jake's fingers flew over the controls as he worked with the team to adjust the system's parameters. The changes were immediate. The fluctuations leveled out. The vehicles moved more fluidly. The charging stations synced properly, the energy demand was met, and the system continued to hum along. For the first time in weeks, Jake felt his heart slow. The system was holding. The pilot test was working. Hours passed, and the system continued to perform flawlessly. The vehicles flowed smoothly, the city's energy demand remained balanced, and the AI made adjustments in real time with remarkable precision. By the end of the day, Jake sat back in his chair, his mind whirring, but his body exhausted. The room was silent, everyone watching the final data roll in. Elon's face appeared on the screen, his expression unreadable. Jake stood up, wiping sweat from his forehead. You did it, Elon said, his voice unexpectedly soft. You've proven the system works at scale. Now, it's time for the world to see it. Jake couldn't help but let out a breath of relief. They had done it. But as Elon's words lingered in the air, Jake realized that this was only the beginning. They had crossed a threshold, but now, the real challenge was about to unfold. As Jake looked out at the city below, the hum of the technology that now powered it filled the air. They had built something revolutionary, something that could change the world. But the real question was whether they could handle the responsibility that came with it. The pilot test was a success, but the true test was yet to come. Jake sat at his desk, staring at the glowing screen. Data was still streaming in from the citywide system, a web of numbers, patterns, and real-time feedback. In the corner of his screen was a small notification. Elon Musk is calling. Jake's pulse quickened. He hadn't seen Elon's face in person since the test, but Jake knew there was no mistaking the gravity of this call. He quickly answered. Jake, Elon's voice came through, as direct and as sharp as ever. I watched the results. Your team did great, but we're not stopping here. This is just the beginning. Jake felt a surge of both pride and anxiety. Thank you, Elon. I think we've shown that the system can work on a massive scale. But we need more time. There are still refinements, things we can optimize. Elon paused. Jake held his breath. The world doesn't wait for perfection, Jake, Elon said. his voice low. It waits for results. And we've got something the world has never seen before. The car companies, the tech giants, they're all looking at this right now. But the big question is, can we scale it faster than anyone else? Jake hesitated. Scaling isn't easy. We need to ensure the system can handle every corner of the globe. Infrastructure, policy changes, partnerships with cities and governments. It's a massive undertaking. I know, Elon replied. And that's why I need you to lead this charge. I'm putting the full weight of Tesla behind this, and I want you to be the one in charge of pushing it forward. We're going to expand this to other cities. We're going global, Jake. A knot formed in Jake's stomach. Global. The word echoed in his mind, both exhilarating and terrifying. There was no turning back now. But there's a lot to figure out, Elon. We're talking about cities of millions of people, vastly different infrastructures, political environments. This will take time. I don't need time, Jake, Elon said, his voice unwavering. I need speed. The world is ready for this now, and we're going to deliver. I'm sending you a team, along with the resources you need. You're not alone in this, but you have to make it happen. Jake stared at the screen, feeling a heavy weight settle in his chest. He'd spent the last few years fighting for a system that could change the world. And now, the responsibility for making that vision a reality was all his. Understood, Jake said, his voice resolute. I'll get it done. Elon gave a brief nod, then signed off, leaving Jake in the silence of the room, his thoughts racing. For the next few days, Jake barely slept. The adrenaline from the successful test had worn off, and now, reality was setting in. There were millions of pieces to the puzzle, and each one required careful attention. The logistics of scaling a global system were mind-boggling. Each city had its own unique challenges: political red tape, traffic congestion, local infrastructure, energy grids, and even cultural differences that would impact the acceptance and adoption of the new technology. There was no one-size-fits-all solution, and if Jake wasn't careful, he knew this could all crumble beneath them. The pressure was suffocating, but Jake wasn't about to back down. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, and the world was on the edge of something extraordinary. The challenge was monumental, but so was the reward. In a conference room filled with charts, projections, and whiteboards covered in plans, Jake met with his core team. It was time to put their plan into action. Mia, Jake began. We're going to need to analyze each city's infrastructure in detail. We need to know where the roadblocks will be, both in terms of technology and government regulations. Every city we scale into will have different laws, different systems in place, and we can't afford to miss a single one. I'm on it, Mia replied. She'd already begun identifying key cities that could serve as next targets for implementation, and she was running simulations on how the system would handle those urban landscapes. Leo, Jake said, turning to his lead developer. We need to build more redundancy into the system. The cities we scale into won't all have the same level of technological infrastructure. I want to make sure our system is adaptable. If something goes wrong, we need to be able to fix it on the fly. Leo nodded. We've already started on that. I'm tweaking the load balancing algorithm to account for more decentralized systems in case there are bandwidth or data latency issues. Good. Sarah, Jake continued, turning to the project manager. I need you to start securing partnerships with local governments, utilities, and major corporations. We can't launch in any city without their backing. We need to make sure the political side of things is smooth, and we need the support of local leaders to navigate the regulatory landscape. Sarah's eyes sparkled with determination. I've already got contacts in several major cities. We're going to need a coalition of partners for this to work, and I'm starting with the ones who'll be the easiest to persuade. Jake nodded, feeling a weight lift slightly as his team got to work. They were all in this together, and that sense of unity was the only thing keeping him grounded. Days turned into weeks, and the team worked tirelessly to build out the system. Every night, Jake found himself returning to his small office, poring over data, drafting proposals, and checking in with his team. It was a cycle of intense focus, relentless drive, and a constant need to push further. One evening, as he was reviewing final details for a presentation to the United Nations, his phone buzzed with an incoming message from Elon. It's time for our first city. I want you to announce it tomorrow. Ready? Jake paused, staring at the text. Announce it? His mind raced. They weren't ready for a public reveal. Not yet. But the way Elon worked, he didn't give you time to hesitate. He quickly shot back a response. I think we need more time. No time. Elon's reply was short. We've made history, Jake. Now it's time for the world to see it. Jake let out a deep breath. Okay, let's do it. The next day, Jake stood before a live audience, the cameras flashing as reporters and journalists waited eagerly for the big reveal. The stage was set in a large auditorium, but for Jake, it felt like the entire world was watching. This was the moment they had been working toward, the public launch of the global system. Elon was there beside him, always the showman. Jake was prepared for this, but nothing could have prepared him for the overwhelming flood of emotions that came with this moment. This was the world-changing moment he'd been dreaming of for so long, but now that it was happening, there was no turning back. Ladies and gentlemen, Elon began, stepping forward to address the audience. What you're about to witness is the beginning of a new era. Transportation as we know it will never be the same. With Jake at the helm and a team that's worked tirelessly to make this a reality, we're launching the first ever global, real-time autonomous transport and energy distribution system. Jake stepped forward, feeling the weight of the words. The moment had arrived. We've built something revolutionary, something that will change the way we think about travel, energy, and the future. This isn't just about technology, it's about the future of our planet. A future where cities can thrive without the congestion, the pollution, or the inefficiency of the systems we've relied on for so long. The room was silent, all eyes on him. Jake felt the magnitude of the responsibility pressing down on him, but in that moment, he knew that this was just the beginning. We're starting in one city today, Jake continued, but we'll scale this system to every corner of the globe. The infrastructure is already in place, and the world is ready. Together, we can make this happen. He paused, letting the weight of the moment sink in. This is just the beginning. Welcome to the future. The room erupted into applause. Jake looked out over the crowd, knowing this was just the first step towards something far bigger. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?